Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku, back with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Deku of Class 1 Begot Harem. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Ever since the entrance exam, Kanoko had been thinking of him, having daydreams about him. At first, they were rather innocent, being heroes side by side, innocent dates, going to cosplay events together, and things of that nature. But after the battle trail and the incident in the cafeteria, her dreams had escalated. Just last night she dreamed of him pinning her against a wall and giving her a kiss that led to. She couldn't even think about it without blushing. Due to this she was having trouble even looking at Izuku today. She chose to sit away from him on the bus, only sneaking glances at him in his hero costume, which was very cute in her opinion. Despite her embarrassment, she was very excited about the training and hoped that she'd be paired up with Izuku for the rescue training. Overall it looked like it would be a great Monday for Kanoko. But then the villains showed up and everything started falling apart. She was terrified when the villains had first appeared. She knew that as a hero she'd have to fight villains eventually, but this was too soon, she wasn't ready for this. When the mist villain Kurogiri cut off their escape and declared their goal was to kill All Might, her heart dropped into her stomach. And the villain suddenly grew in size, moving to envelop the class. She tried to make her way to Izuku, but everything went black just before she could reach him. That is what led her to her current situation, falling rapidly toward the water of the flood zone. She screamed in panic as she fell, but she was able to compose herself enough to take a deep breath and closed her eyes just before she hit the water. When she opened her eyes she immediately looked around and spotted a villain with a harpoon gun for an arm. "Sorry kid, nothing personal. I'll make it quick," yelled out the villain, clearly excited at the idea of killing her slowly despite his words. The villain shot 4 spears at her. She did try to avoid the attack, but her costume was hindering her movements in the water. Suddenly a pair of arms wrapped around her and pulled her up out of the water. Kanoko felt a sharp pain in one of her legs. She took a breath as soon as she was above water, filling her lungs with oxygen. "Don't worry, I got you," spoke a waterlogged pony. The American was balanced precariously on a pair of her horns. Kanoko looked down toward the pain in her leg only to see one of the harpoons logged in one of her calves. Kanoko was in shock as she watched blood slowly start to leak out of the wound. Pony flew as fast as she could, heading for the ship in the center of the flood zone. Several villains broke the surface to attack them. Pony was able to dodge some of them, and several random nautical objects pelted the other villains courtesy of Yanagi, who stood on the ship's deck. Pony took advantage of the temporary opening to zoom past the villains and made it onto the ship. Kanoko hissed in pain when her injured leg touched the deck. Manga's head turned into an exclamation point, displaying his surprise. "Kanoko, are you alright?" "Wait, of course you're not okay. What do we do? Are we supposed to leave it in or take it out?" spoke Pony, panicked after she spotted the injury, not knowing what to do. Yanagi also ceased her attack on the villains to look at her classmates. Her eyes widened, her hands spazzed out for a moment, before she regained her composure and clenched her hands into fists. "Manga, I require you to keep the villains at bay for the time being," spoke Yanagi in her normal monotone. Her words snapped her classmates out of their panicking state. Manga gave her a quick salute before popping up from behind the ship's railing and activating his quirk. Tiny speech bubbles rapidly shot out of his head like a machine gun. D-A-K-K-I, 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 D-A-K-K-I. The salvo of bullet-sized speech bubbles forced the villains to dive underwater, little bursts of water denoting where they struck the water. Using her quirk, Yanagi ripped the sleeves of her costume off and ripped them into strips. She moved closer to Kanoko and examined the injury carefully, doing her best to remember what her parents had taught her. The projectile has only done damage to soft tissue. It has not struck bone nor severed any of the major blood vessels in the region. It would seem fortune was with you. Pony, I shall require your great strength in this endeavor, spoke Yanagi to her classmates as she grabbed the waterlogged hat off of Kanoko's head and folded it a few times. "How do you know what to do?" questioned Kanoko, partly trying to distract herself and partly from genuine curiosity. "My mother and father are both physicians specializing in the field of surgery. They taught me the basics of first aid. This next action will hurt. Please bite down on this to help alleviate some of the pain," responded Yanagi, passing Kanoko the folded hat. Kanoko immediately bit down on the hat and took one of Yanagi's hands. "Pony, please center the harpoon in this location. We must remove the excess, immobilize the object, and bandage the wound until a professional can properly treat it," explained Yanagi, pointing with her free hand to where the harpoon needs to be broken. Pony nodded and took a firm hold of the weapon and looked at Yanagi. Kanoko braced herself for the pain just as the ghost girl gave a quick nod. Snap went the harpoon, breaking like a twig under Pony's superior strength. "HMMM," yelled Kanoko, her cry of pain muffled by her hat. Yanagi quickly and carefully wrapped the wound using her improvised bandages to immobilize the object and stop the bleeding. The mushroom girl gave another muffled cry of pain and squeezed Yanagi's hands tight. "Okay, that should prove sufficient for the time being," spoke Yanagi as she checked to make sure the bandages were properly applied. She turned to check on how Manga was doing. Manga dove away from the railing just as numerous projectiles flew through the air right where he was standing and embedded into the wall behind him. A shadow fell over them as a giant hand constructed of water rose above the ship. The teens scrambled out of the way as the hand crushed part of the ship, causing it to start to sink. It'll only take a few minutes for the ship to sink. Once they're in the water, they're doomed, yelled out one of the villains as he directed his fellow villains. How we going to leave here? Questioned Pony, her Japanese coming out weird due to her nervousness at the situation. If you can carry manga, then I may carry Kanoko using my quirk. But we must incapacitate those degenerates in the water before we make our attempt to withdraw, spoke Yanagi as the 4-1B students all brainstormed for possible solutions. Manga, can you make electricity with your quirk? Asked Kanoko. Manga nodded his head, which was now shaped like a thunderbolt, but then shifted into an hourglass, articulating that he needed time. Okay, Ryuko and I will buy you time then, spoke Pony with determination as she launched some of her horns and made them float around her, ready to attack the villains. Yanagi gave a nod to Pony as she lifted numerous objects to hurl at the villains. The two heroines waited for the right moment, then both popped up and shot their own projectiles back at the villains. Yanagi caught some of the villains' projectiles and shot them back at the villains, while Pony used a swarm of her horns to beat up any villain dumb enough to stay above water for too long, turning the fight into a deadly game of whack-a-mole. They kept this up for long enough for Manga to unleash a massive speech bubble. The speech bubble was shaped like a lightning bolt and was at least as long as the boat they stood on. The moment the speech bubble touched the water, the whole flood zone lit up as electricity arced through the water. The villains cried out as they were electrocuted. After the light died down, the hero students watched as a lot of the villains floated to the surface, groaning in pain. Let's go, spoke Pony in English, grabbing both Manga and Ryuko, not wanting to wait for the villains to recover. The American girl hopped onto a pair of her horns and started to carefully fly upward. Ryuko used her own quirk to grab hold of Kanoko, causing her to fly close by. The small group made a beeline for the shore as none of them wanted to get back in the water. After they landed, they quickly ducked into some of the bushes and trees nearby. Yanagi helped Kanoko walk while Pony lends the way, using her enhanced horse-like hearing to stay alert of any threats, and Manga making sure no one snuck up behind them. They came to a small break in the foliage and saw the Plaza 30 USJ Central Plaza 30. The unconscious bodies of numerous villains were strewn about the plaza, some bleeding, others with broken bones. Only a few villains were still standing. Vlad King jumped over several rock spikes. The unfortunate villain who summoned the spike got Vlad's knee in his face for his effort. The villain's nose broke with a crunch and the villain fell to the ground clutching his bloody nose. Vlad hit the villain in the chest with a blood hammer, taking him out of the fight. Vlad ducked under a slash by a villain with bat-like arms and long sharp claws. Vlad retaliates with a straight punch to the villain's gut, causing them to double over, which made Vlad's follow-up uppercut all the more devastating. Vlad took some deep breaths, thankful for the lull in combat. He knew he was growing tired. The small wounds covering his body were proof of him nearing his limit. He looked around to take count of how many opponents he had left. He only saw the hand guy and the purple bird thing with him. Only those two left. With luck, 13 beat the warper and called the school for help. Once I beat these two, I can go looking for the students, thought Vlad as he gave the villains his full attention. Vlad looked at the two remaining villains. A tense moment passed before the hand villain started charging at him. Vlad also charged. The villain lashed out with a kick, but it was a feint as he went to grab Vlad. Vlad raised a blood shield with his left hand and formed a dagger in the other. That won't work on me, scum, spoke Vlad, going to stab the villain with his other hand. But the villain caught the attack. Are you sure about that? Questioned the villain behind the severed hand that served as a mask. Pain flared from Vlad's forearms. The blood hero's shield was instantly covered in spikes and the dagger in his hand elongated. Before the villain could move away, he took several spikes to his palms, stomach, and arms. But the worst wound came from the dagger, which extended into one of his shoulders. The villain and Vlad both jumped back, making more distance between them. The villain was bleeding from the wounds from the spikes and was holding his shoulder. The villain glared at Vlad King. The center of Vlad's blood shield was gone and his forearm looked bad. His costume, along with the skin on most of his forearm, was gone, exposing damaged muscle. His other arm was in a similar state, just closer to his wrist. Damn, this hurts like hell. He must be the one that destroyed the school gate. It only took him a few moments to do this kind of damage. I have to be careful. If he gets a hold of the wrong spot, I'm dead. But it looks like the effect only comes from his hands. I have to disarm him, then I can deal with the bird guy, thought Vlad as he coated the wounds in hardened blood and created his blood sword. Look at you, you're still standing. You didn't even hesitate to jump into the middle of us to protect your students, and look, you even took most of this group out. And you even did this to me. You really are so cool, spoke the villain in an unhinged tone. But I'm done playing around, Nomu, spoke the villain flatly. Vlad's instinct screamed and he turned around to see that the Becked villain had somehow snuck up behind him. Vlad lashed out with his sword just as the bird villain threw a punch. The thing didn't even scream when its arm was cut off above the elbow. It just swung out with its other fist. Vlad created another blood shield to block. The shield cracked and Vlad was sent crashing into the plaza's fountain. The fountain was instantly turned into rubble and a cloud of dust hung in the air for a moment. When the dust settled, Vlad rose out of the rubble, his head bleeding and his costume caked in dust. The pro hero used his quirk to pull his blood off of the surrounding rubble and pulled more of it back into his body, hardening the blood in his wounds as a temporary bandage. The groups of students hidden around the plaza and Vlad watched as the stump where Nomu's arm used to be suddenly exploded outward as bone and muscle was rapidly replaced. Nomu's arm was fully regenerated in moments. Shocked but not discouraged, Vlad once more created a sword, just as he was about to move to re-engage. Nomu had already closed the distance in a terrifying display of speed. Fast was all Vlad could think as the thing attacked. Vlad ducked low, dodging the punch sent his way, cutting off the limb and one of the creature's legs. Vlad, thinking that the thing would try and catch itself with its remaining arm, created a large two-handed axe. Vlad swung the axe overhead, aiming to chop off the thing's head before it could regenerate. But the creature chose to attack, throwing a strong backhand instead of trying to catch itself, that Vlad barely dodged. The blow left a crater in the concrete floor and kicked up a small cloud of dust. The creature burst out of the cloud, limbs already healed. Vlad and the creature clashed several more times. The creature was undeterred as it lost arms, legs, and fingers. Vlad went to slice the thing in half, but it moved at the last moment, letting Vlad cut it from its left shoulder to its left hip. But the creature had gotten a hold of Vlad. The monster slammed Vlad into the ground. Spider web cracks spread from the point of impact. The creature squatted over Vlad, one hand wrapped around the teacher's arm, the other holding him down. "What do you think of him, Vlad King? He's the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace," spoke the hand villain smugly as Nomu gave an unsettling shriek. Vlad looks over at the hand villain with rage in his eyes, and he gives the villains his response. The numerous wounds all over Vlad exploded into a dozen long blood spikes. The spikes punched through Nomu's body and several nearly pierced Nomu's brain. Vlad's free arm flew forward, a blood dagger sliced through the air and would have hit the hand villain in the neck if Nomu hadn't thrown off Vlad's aim. The blood blade only nicked the villain's neck before it returned to being a liquid and splattered onto the ground. Nomu snapped both of Vlad's arms like twigs in retaliation. Vlad screamed in pain before Nomu smashed Vlad's head into the concrete floor. Vlad stopped moving after the blow, his breathing the only sign that he was still alive. Before the hand villain could order Nomu to finish off Vlad King, the mist villain appeared beside him. "Tamura Shigaraki," spoke Kurogiri, naming the hand villain. "Kurogiri, did you manage to kill 13? asked Shigaraki, turning his head toward Kurogiri. "The rescue hero has been taken out of commission. But there were students I was unable to disperse, and one of them, a boy that could swim through the ground like water. He was able to escape the facility," responded Kurogiri. Shigaraki proceeded to throw a childish tantrum, scratching at his own neck till raw. "Kurogiri, if you weren't our ticket out of here, I'd turn you to dust right now. We can't win if this place gets flooded with heroes. It's game over and back to the start screen. Let's go home ... But before we leave, we should wreck the symbol of peace's pride," spoke Shigaraki as he turned and looked right at Pony, Yanagi, and Kanoko with murder in his eyes. Then, quick as a flash, he was in front of them, reaching out to touch Kanoko's and Yanaga's faces. They had no time to react, and even if they did, both were stunned in fear, their relatively short lives flashing before their eyes as death drew closer. "Don't touch them, Tesla Smash," yelled out the familiar voice of Izuku, before Shigaraki could even turn his head, before even Nomu could react. The sound of thunder roared throughout the USJ, and for a brief moment the plaza lit up with a green light. When the darkness receded from his vision, Izuku found himself falling into a mock city that looked like it was in the middle of a typhoon. He was being pelted by rain, the high winds blew the young hero around like a kite. Izuku did not see any classmates falling around him or any villains on the streets below. Izuku frantically looked around, using his rapidly diminishing vantage point to find a suitable location to land, so he didn't crash into the ground. He spotted a long alley between two buildings that would work well for him. Izuku used the howling wind to his advantage to help steer him in the right direction. Nearing the alley, Izuku activated full cowl. "I need to do as many wall jumps as possible so I can land safely. If I don't time these right, I could really hurt myself or worse," thought Izuku nervously as he waited for his moment. "No," thought Izuku as he kicked off one of the alley walls, brick dented and cracked from the combined force of full cowl and Izuku's momentum. Izuku repeated the action 5 more times, allowing him to regain some control of his fall. However, as he made contact with the ground, instead of stopping, the wet ground caused him to slip and forced him to roll. It wasn't the most graceful or softest of landings. He was sure he'd develop a couple of nasty bruises. But he was in one piece and in fighting shape. Izuku quickly stood, taking in his surroundings for danger. He landed near one of the ends of the alley. The alley was narrow, only really wide enough for 2 people to stand side by side comfortably. The alley itself is sparse, with only a few pieces of trash and not much else. He stopped using full cowl to prevent the lighting he generated from giving his location away. He continuously edged his way to the exit of the alley, which seemed to open up into some sort of courtyard in the middle of the buildings. There were a few trees, flower beds, street lights, and benches. In the center of the courtyard was a colorful playground containing some swing sets, a jungle gym, and slides. There were no signs of anyone, villain or otherwise, but a part of Izuku was screaming at him that it was unwise to walk out into the open. Izuku heeded this feeling, choosing instead to ensure he wasn't going to be ambushed. Izuku peeked his head out slowly and scanned the building, checking windows and roofs for movement. He found it difficult to hear over the wind, rain, and the occasional boom of fake thunder. Izuku strained his hearing as he heard something faintly under the sounds of the artificial storm. The noise slowly grew louder and Izuku could now tell it was coming from above. Izuku looked up and tried to spot the source of the sound. A crash. The sound grew loud enough to hear over the storm before a loud crash of metal on metal came from the playground. "Damn, that hurt," yelled out the familiar voice of Tetsu from the playground. "Tetsu," spoke Izuku in concern as he ran to his classmate. Izuku carefully maneuvered through the mangled remains of the jungle gym and found his metal classmate. Izuku offered Tetsu a hand. "Midoriya, man, it's good to see you," spoke Tetsu, taking the offered hand and allowing Izuku to help pull him to his feet. "It's good to see you too, Tetsu. Did you see anyone else while you were falling?" asked Izuku as he looked around. He knew that some villains would have heard Tetsu's landing and would be rushing toward this location. "Yeah, I saw Jiroda, but I don't know where he is now. We have to go find him," yelled Tetsu, not picking up on Izuku's caution. "I am here, Sir Tetsu," called out Jiroda, who jumped off a nearby fire escape, grabbed a branch of one of the trees that let him swing himself to them. The rain had caused his fur to stick flat against his body. "Nice, have you seen anyone else, or is it just us?" asked Tetsu as the three students moved toward one of the alleys to exit the courtyard. "You are the only members of our class I have found. I have not detected any one of our other classmates, but I am not sure the storm messes with most of my senses," responded Jiroda politely as he tapped his nose for emphasis. The artificial storm seemed to grow worse and Izuku snapped his head up. He could have sworn that he saw movement from one of the windows in his peripheral vision, but all he saw was a blown-out window with curtains flapping wildly in the wind. "I know what you mean. If I stay in this rain too long I'll start to rust," complained Tetsu. Jiroda suddenly spotted someone and stiffened and then made his arms grow bulkier and more bestial. "Sir Midoriya, Sir Tetsu, we have company," spoke Jiroda as the villains started to enter the courtyard from the alleys. The criminal scum had not fully surrounded the students. The three students stood back to back as the villain taunted them. "How unfortunate. I was hoping to acquire one or two of the young heroines," spoke a very tall, lanky villain in a suit, several tentacles writhing angrily behind him as he stood head and shoulders above the villains around him. "Shut up, you horny git. Just get to kill him. You can get a girl later," bellowed a large green-skinned villain in black armor carrying a giant two-headed battle axe. "Come get some, you villainous scum," yelled Tetsu, slamming his fists together causing a metallic clang. 39 villains total, 5 south, 10 west, 11 east, 13 north. Villains mostly composed of mutant types and close combat quirks, most likely because they knew the wind and rain would hamper most ranged combatants. The leader appears to be the large green-skinned villain with the axe to the north. The villain in the suit to the east also seems dangerous. If we stay in the open like this they'll surround and overwhelm us. We need to eliminate their numbers advantage. The south has the least villains. If we can get to the alley behind them, then it will limit how many we have to fight at once. Plus we'll only have to deal with 2 directions and we can escape to the rooftops if we need to," thought Izuku, analyzing the villains, noting quirks, possible weak points, and leaders. The villains were a little creeped out from the look the hooded kid in the bunny ears and mask was giving them. The Izuku's incoherent mumbling only added to his off-putting aura. Izuku activated full cowl at 5% green lighting arcing over his body the moment he calls on his power. Some of the villains involuntarily took a step back, understandable cautious of getting near lighting in a rainstorm. "Since when could you do that?" questioned Tetsu, surprised at what Izuku was doing. "I'll explain later. We need to move before they surround us. We're gonna break through the group on my right and get to the alley so they have to come at us 2 at a time. I'll lead the way and you 2 follow behind me. Once we're in the alley we'll turn around and face them. We move on my signal, got it?" spoke Izuku without a single stutter in a voice just loud enough for his friends to hear. His tone is calm and full of authority. "So manly," thought Tetsu holding back tears. "I am with you, Sir Midoriya," agreed Jiroda, bulking his legs up so he could move faster. "Let's do it, Prez," spoke Tetsu without hesitation. "Let's go," spoke Izuku. Izuku exploded into motion with his green lighting in his wake. Izuku was already halfway to the villains by the time Jiroda and Tetsu started moving. The 5 villains they were charging consisted of a man with mallet arms, a man with stretchy spring arms, a man with buzzsaw hands, a man wielding a ship's anchor, and a large man that looked to be a humanoid crab. Izuku leaped past the 2 villains in the front of the pack so he could drop-kick the carb villain. The carb man was able to raise a claw to block the kick. The man was shoved back by the blow and the shell on his arm was cracked. "Damn, the kid's stronger than he looks," spoke the crab villain. The villain with buzzsaw hands advanced to attack Izuku in the back. "Let's see if you're tougher than you look," screamed the villain, his saw hand humming and raised to slash Izuku. "Don't forget about us," spoke Tetsu, who interposed himself between the villain and Izuku. Saw blades meet steel skin as Tetsu blocked the attack. The villain pulled back his hands, only to find the teeth of his saw hands broken and worn down. Tetsu socked the villain in the jaw. The villain was laid flat on the ground out cold. The villain with the spring arms sent several elongated punches at Jiroda. Jiroda kept his arms up guarding against the punches. Jiroda waited for the right moment and then sidestepped the villain's next punch as the elongated limb stretched past Jiroda grabbed hold of it with one bulky arm. The villain paled, right before Jiroda started spinning the villain like how an Italian plumber spins a turtle dragon. Once he was satisfied with the speed, Jiroda then released the villain straight into one of the other villain groups, knocking several over and buying them time. The crab villain lashed out with a yell, his claws stabbing toward Izuku. Izuku leaped over his aggressor and landed behind him. The villain's legs were swept out from under him. The villain fell face first into the ground. Izuku did not let the villain recover. The rabbit-themed hero raised a leg and brought down a powerful axe kick on top of the villain's armored back. The carapace and the ground underneath both gained spiderweb cracks from the force of the blow. The villain let out a pained grunt as the air in his lungs was forced out. Izuku turned to check on his classmates. Tetsu was in a battle of strength with the anchor-wielding villain trying to wrestle the villain's weapon away from him, and Jiroda was fighting the villain with the mallet arms. The other villains were also moving toward them. Izuku picked up the unconscious crab villain and hurled him at the villain Tetsu was fighting. "Tetsu, duck!" yelled Izuku as he blitzed the mallet villain, hitting the distracted villain with a nasty sucker punch. Tetsu ducked as instructed and watched as the anchor villain was hit with his own comrade. Tetsu took the opportunity to strike the anchor villain with his now dropped weapon, knocking him out. Tetsu then threw the anchor at the approaching villains to slow them down. The three hero students then immediately turned and made for the alley. "You lot in the slender go and cut him off. The rest of you gets with me," ordered the large orc-like villain, hefting his axe in one hand and pointing to the villains in question. The minor villains quickly heeded the man's order and started to run. The villain in the suit did not run. Instead, he simply walked his long stride, allowing him to cover a lot of distance. The orc villain also walked steadily toward the hero students. The three students made it to about a third of the way into the alley before they turned to face the villains. Jiroda and Tetsu stood side by side. Izuku stood just behind them. The villains that were chasing them quickly filed into the alley and charged them. However, Izuku's plan had worked. The villains were forced to come at them two at a time. As the first two villains moved closer, they were surprised when two bursts of air struck them in the face with the force of a heavyweight boxer. The two villains were stunned by the attack. Jiroda and Tetsu both attacked the villains. Jiroda threw a nasty gut punch that knocked the wind out of the villain, causing them to double over, letting him knee the man in the face. Tetsu simply threw a strong haymaker. The two villains behind the first pair moved forward, pushing aside their unconscious comrades. This cycle continued with Izuku peppering the villains with airbursts he created by flicking his fingers, and his two classmates took advantage, pummeling the villains in hand-to-hand. "Huh, we got you boxed in, now you brats," yelled a villain from the alley entrance behind them. Izuku jumped up so he was above his friends, pressing all four fingers against his thumb and aimed at the massive villains in front of Tetsu and Jiroda. "Shotgun smash," yelled out Izuku as he flicks his fingers. 8 blasts of air shot out from his fingertips. A number of villains were hit with the attack, which caused some of their number to be knocked back into each other. "I'll handle the ones behind us, you guys just keep covering each other," ordered Izuku as he turned around to face the villains flanking them. The villains, overeager and undisciplined, charged into the alley one at a time in a staggered fashion. "Wait, where is the villain in the suit?" thought Izuku, noting the villain's absence. Izuku ran at the villains, rapidly sending finger flicks at them as he closed the distance. Before he clashed with the first villain, he instead started to jump from wall to wall. Izuku became a green blur as he bounced off the walls. Izuku bounced past the first three villains, landing devastating blows on each as he passed them. The three villains fell to the ground out cold. "What? Ugh," spoke one of the villains before Izuku sent a flying kick to his face which knocked out a tooth or two. Izuku didn't even slow down as the villain slumped to the floor. Izuku's mind was clear and focused solely on the fight. Izuku's face under his mask and hood was a picture of pure determination. Some of the villains tried to retaliate, but all they hit was air, as Izuku proved too maneuverable for the petty thugs. A few of them proved steadier than the rest as they were still standing when Izuku neared the exit to the alleyway. But the rabbit hero in training simply stopped and then started to bounce back down the alley, taking out the rest of the villains. The last of the villains that Izuku was dealing with got a roundhouse kick to the ribs which knocked the villain into a brick wall. With the flank secure for now, Izuku turned around only to see his two comrades flying towards him. Izuku caught his two classmates but was pushed back a few meters from the impact. "Man, that guy hits hard," spoke Tetsu. His steel skin cracked and fell off around his arms and chest. Tetsu made the remaining of his metal skin recede back into his body. "I thank you for the catch, Sir Midoriya," spoke Jiroda, trying to regain his breath after the villain had knocked it out of him. Izuku locked eyes with the large orc villain when he heard him growl in frustration. "Come on, you gets give me a proper fight. The better da fight, da bigger, harder and stronger I get," bellowed out the orc-like villain. Jiroda and Tetsu both stood up, as Izuku stood analyzing his opponent that easily took up most of the alley. He's massive and clearly skilled in combat, but his movements are limited due to the tight space. Most of his body is covered in armor, so it will be difficult to hurt him. With all the wet metal, maybe, thought Izuku, glancing at one of his hands which cracked with green lighting. No, I don't know if it will shock the others cause they're soaked too. His head is exposed, so if we can get a good hit to his head we may be able to knock him out. His joints are exposed. That might work, thought Izuku, rapidly coming up with a plan. Guys, I got a plan, spoke Izuku to his friends. Alright, what do you need us to do, press? Asked Tetsu as he reapplied his quirk. Jiroda, you're gonna slide under him and hit the back of his knees. That should take out his legs. I'll break his axe, which should leave him open. When that happens, Tetsu, you need to hit him in the head as hard as you can. I'll follow up if he's still awake, explained Izuku quickly. Simple and straightforward. I like it, replied Tetsu, ready for round 2. I shall bring the brute down, commented Jiroda with a noted. The bestial student let out a roar of challenge and charged at the villain Izuku, and Tetsu following behind him. That's the spirit, WAAAGH, yelled out the villain excitedly as he countercharged the young heroes. The villain raised his axe above his head for an overhead swing once Jiroda was within striking distance. But that was exactly what Izuku wanted, pushing one for all to 8%. Izuku moved much faster than before, the others barely saw him move. One moment Izuku was there next to them, the next moment he's flying through the air while performing a dropkick. Smash, yelled Izuku as he made contact with the axe head, which promptly shattered under the force of his kick. The villain was stunned that his favorite weapon had been sundered. This allowed Jiroda to slide under the villain's legs. With a roar and a pair of large bestial hands, Jiroda lashes out at the villain's exposed joints. The villain's knees buckled and made him partly collapse. Strong right, yelled out Tetsu as he put his entire body behind the punch. The villain's nose broke along with one of the tusks protruding from his mouth. However, despite the villain's bleeding nose, he still headbutted Tetsu's face in retaliation, causing cracks to form in the metal. Don't think you won, I'm still gonna crump ya, started the villain in slightly slurred speech, before Izuku axe kicked the villain's head. The villain laid their face first in the wet asphalt, out cold like his allies. The three students stared at the villain, ready in case he got back up. After a few tense moments, Tetsu spoke. Alright, we did it. That was so manly, yelled Tetsu in victory, raising a fist to his friends. I'm so glad that worked. You guys did great, spoke Izuku, reciprocating Tetsu's fist bump. It was a good plan, Sir Midoriya. This would have been much more difficult if you weren't here. But what is our next move? Spoke Jiroda as he also fist bumped Tetsu. There is a villain that is missing, plus any others that are still in the zone. We should get out of the zone and move toward the plaza. With luck, Vlad-sensei might be finished with the villains there and we can team up with him. But if he's still fighting, then we can help lighten his load by picking off some of the villains, spoke Izuku as he walked the two boys through his thought process. Well, what are we waiting for? Let go, spoke Tetsu, turning his quirk off not to overexert himself. But Tetsu and Jiroda were both suddenly webbed to the alley wall, webbed up and trapped like bugs in a spider's web. Their mouths were also covered to prevent them from speaking. Izuku tried to move as he tried to locate the villain. But a white thread stuck to his shoulder and then another to one of his arms. Before he knew it, he was wrapped up. Several bands of thread ringed around him, with his arms pinned against his sides. More webbing wrapped around his legs from his ankles to just above his knees. He could hear his classmate let out muffled sounds of rage and concern as Izuku was lifted up into the air. Izuku tried to break free, but the thread held firm. Sorry, I can't let you jump around, little rabbit, spoke a feminine voice with a purr. Izuku was brought face to face with the villains. She looked very young, like she was in her early 22nd. Her skin was very dark, almost purple looking, her ears were pointy, her hair was snow white and done up in a fancy ponytail. A mask fit for a masquerade rested on her face. She wore ornate red and black cloths that were equal parts sensual and protective. They also emphasized her curvy figure and her large chest. But her most distinct features were the fact that from around her hips down she was a massive spider, her clawed fingers, her black eyes with red irises, and she had extra eyes that were solid black around her forehead. Altogether she resembled a creature for some pre-Quirk era myth. But despite what some would call monstrous features, she was somehow still incredibly beautiful. She stood above the alley, balancing effortlessly on silk thread of her own making. In one of her hands, she held an umbrella made of silk that blocked the rain from falling on them. She held Izuku up using her two front legs and brought him up to eye level. Why, hello, young one. You may call me Lolt. I am searching for someone specific and was told he'd be in this zone. You wouldn't mind helping me, would you, little hero? Spoke Lolt in a sweet, polite tone, which held dangerous undertones. Izuku knew that if he gave the wrong answer he would no doubt suffer pain at best. So Izuku nodded. Keeping her talking gave him more time to figure out a way to escape, preferably without shattering his bones. Excellent. Now, why don't I remove these to start? Spoke Lolt cheerily as she extended clawed fingers, and with delicate movements only obtained by a lifetime of using the clawed fingers did she remove his hood and dropped his gas mask, which broke when it hit the ground. All 8 of her eyes widened and her mouth morphed into a wide grin that revealed sharp fangs. My, seems I got lucky. Not only did I find you so quickly, but you're so much cuter than he led me to believe, spoke Lolt in joy as she caressed one of his cheeks. The implications of her words did not go unnoticed by Izuku. Who told you about me? Stuttered out Izuku as he slipped back into his normal nervousness as the villainesses brought him closer. Oh, just some pervert, He wouldn't stop staring at my breasts the whole time he talked to us. I'd normally punish that sort of thing since he's not my type, and that's not even counting his weird looks. But enough about him. What's the name of my little rabbit? Responded Lolt, shifting into a husky sexy tone near the end as she gently placed her claws near his neck. Izuku stayed silent, not wanting to give out his to the villainesses. Awa, a little shy are we? That's fine, just means we need to get to know each other, spoke Lolt with a playful and sensual tone reminiscent of how Midnight talks. Her tone plus the fact that she was feeling up Izuku's arms, chest, and abs through his costume made the green-haired boy blush heavily. She smiled wickedly at his reaction, and she seemed very pleased at what she was feeling, before she suddenly took hold of Izuku's crotch. Izuku's eyes widened and his blush went atomic at her touch. Oh my, you're certainly blessed, aren't you? I can't wait to teach you just how to use it. How about we go home and I can give you your first lesson, commented Lolt through half-lidded eyes as she licked her lips with her tongue, which once again revealing her long needle-like fangs. Hey, Heg, you let that cinnamon roll go, yelled out Camy as she landed feet first onto the spider part of the villainess. The villainess dropped her makeshift umbrella at the landing as the thread she stood on bounced at the added weight. Camy gave her no chance to react as she slammed her batons into the spider legs, holding Izuku with as much force as she could muster. With a cry of pain, Lolt dropped Izuku. Camy jumped off the villainess and dove for Izuku, but not before leaving a surprise for the women. I got you, fam, spoke Camy as she grabbed a hold of Izuku with one arm. With her other arm, she pulled out a gun like a gadget from her belt that shot out a grapple line, allowing her to safely lower them to the ground. You little bitch, how dare you, spoke Lolt in rage. Camy glared up at Lolt before she pulled out a little device with several buttons. With a smirk, she pressed one of the buttons. The mine she left on the villainess's back went off, releasing a steady stream of Camy's glamour gas. Lolt started freaking out at the hallucinations she was now experiencing. Once Camy was sure that the villain was under the full effects of her quirk, did she turn back to Izuku. With a gesture of her hands, sharp metal cat claws deployed from the ends of her costume's gloves. The wind and rain will lower the time, but that should keep her busy for a bit. Have to thank you for the belt because there are so many useful gizmos in here. Now hold still, spoke Camy. Izuku was surprised at how her tone was still so laid back despite the situation. It was kind of comforting in a weird way. With a few well-made swipes from Camy and Izuku was free. You alright, Izuku? That hag didn't hurt you? Asked Camy as she helped him stand. I'm fine thanks to you, Camy. I wasn't sure how I was going to escape her without breaking something. And we should free the others, responded Izuku nervously and with a large blush as he recalled the villainess's actions. Izuku put his hood back up to try and hide his face, but Camy didn't miss how he dodged the question or the look on his face. She sent another glare at the spider bitch as they rushed over to Tetsu and Jiroda. The two captured boys muffled loudly in a warning. Reacting quickly, Izuku activated full cowl, scooped up Camy, and dodged several lines of thread and several black tentacles. When he stopped and let Camy down, they noticed Lolt on one side and the lanky villain in the suit. Gideon, you sick fuck. What are you doing here? Spoke Lolt, literally spitting venom out alongside her words as all her eyes glared at the lanky man. I am here on a job same as you. Plus I seem to have found a stray cat that I wish to keep. So I propose some cooperation, so I can get my cat and you can get your little rabbit. Spoke Gideon calmly but clearly with a mocking tone at the end. Izuku faces Gideon immediately knowing that the villain was targeting Camy. He glared in anger at the villain as green lighting seemed to leak from his eyes, causing them to glow. HMPH, fine, but I'm leaving as soon as I have him. I need a good bath to feel clean after dealing with you, spoke Lolt in agreement but still throwing a barb at her fellow villain. Camy placed her back against Izuku as she turned to face Lolt, covertly slipping several of her glamour gas mines into Izuku's hands while the villains talked. The two villains both attacked at once, tentacles and webbing lancing out to bind the heroes and seal their fates. Camy and Izuku both dodged the initial attack. Izuku started bouncing around the villain as he avoided the villain's attacks. Izuku was discreetly leaving gas mines as he bounced around. Hold still, you insolent child, growled Gideon in frustration as Izuku bounced around him, shooting bursts of air at him. Camy blew out some of her glamour gas, making it seem that there were three of her, with one using the grapple guns to ascend above the villain and the other two charging at her with weapons drawn. The real Camy, who used her quirk to make herself invisible and mute her movements, snuck around placing more mines around Lolt. Your little games don't amuse me, cat. He will be mine and you'll wish you'd be dead, yelled Lolt, who leaped forward in a jump that closed the distance to the two grounded charging Camy. Lolt brought two of her legs down, stabbing through the legs of the Camy illusions. But both had no resistance, proving that both were just hallucinations. Huh, you fell for it, hag, yelled the airborne Camy, swinging down for a kick. Have I? Countered Lolt as she shot out more webbing, hitting the airborne Camy dead center only for her tread to pass right through the illusion. Yep, you both have, yelled out the real Camy, revealing herself as she pushed the button on her detonator. The mines she and Izuku planted around their foes exploded into clouds of multicolored gas. The villains started attacking thin air and each other. With her foes distracted, Camy freed Jiroda and Tetsu. From there it was easy for the three boys to subdue one villain while Camy kept the other distracted with her illusions. With the last of the villains dealt with, the four heroes in training quickly started to move toward the edge of the zone so they could find the exit. "So Izuku, what's with the light show?" asked Camy, confused as to why he wasn't breaking himself and why he had lighting arcing over him. "Oh yeah, I guess I should explain that. So Vlad-sensei has been doing extra training with me after school. He figured out a way to use my quirk without it hurting me. I call it full cal. I can only really use 5% safely for right now. I can push myself to 8%, but I risk fracturing my bones when I do. I was planning on showing it to the class today," spoke Izuku, rushing through his words due to nervousness as he scratched the back of his head. "That's lit. Now you don't have to wreck your bod every time you use your quirk." "Naya," commented Camy, happy for his improvement. The cat-themed heroine gave him a quick side hug. "That's so manly. We got a spare after," spoke up Tetsu excitedly. "I recommend sparing after we survive this situation. Also, I believe that is the exit," spoke Jiroda, pointing at a pair of metal doors. "Finally, I'm tots ready to get out of this rain," spoke Camy as she picked up the pace. The Camy, Tetsu, Jiroda, and Izuku continuously exited the downpour zone just in case some villains were waiting in ambush. Once it was clear that no villains were laying in wait for them, they stealthily moved toward the plaza. They watched from their hiding spot as Vlad-sensei did battle with the hand villain. They all froze in fear when the handy villain disintegrated part of Vlad's arms. The situation only worsened when Nomu started to fight Vlad. They watched as their teacher clashed with Nomu, serving the beast's limbs only for them to regrow. Izuku did his best to remain calm and objective, just like Nezu had told him to do. With a deep breath, Izuku calmed himself and paid close attention to the fight, taking note of every detail he could. He soaked up as much information as he could, as it could prove pivotal if he needed to come up with a way to beat the villains if his teacher failed. As if his thought made it so, he watched as his teacher was defeated and pinned to the floor. Izuku powered up one for all at 5%, tapping into that ball of lighting that sat in his chest. Green lightning arced down his arms and seemed to gather in his hands as he watched. Izuku was ready to jump in and save his teacher, but he paused when Kurogiri arrived and reported to Tamura. Hope flared in him when Kurogiri said that Juzo had escaped. It was only a matter of time till help arrived now. The hope flared brighter when Tamura said he would just leave. But then Tamura turned to look at someone. Izuku, following the villain's gaze, spotted his friends. Izuku blinked and Tamura was suddenly in front of them, his hands reaching toward Yanagi and Kanoko. Izuku recalled Tamura turning Vlad's forearm and shield to dust. The image of these girls turning to dust flashed before Izuku's mind. The thought caused rage and emotion Izuku normally had buried deep within himself to come roaring out from the depths like a sea monster. Izuku jumped out of their hiding spot out into the open, fist cocked back and lighting coating his arm all the way up to his shoulder. "Don't touch them, Tesla smash," bellowed out Izuku as he threw his punch forward. A bolt of green lightning shot out of his fist. Thunder echoed throughout the USJ and a burst of wind burst forth from his punch. The bolt struck Tamura before he could react. The villain was engulfed in light for a moment and Tamura was flung away from the girls, his clothes smoking and scorched. "Tamura," yelled Kurogiri in some concern. "Grab Sensei," ordered Izuku before he dashed to place himself between the villains and his teacher. Izuku threw a much smaller but no less fast lighting bolt at Kurogiri, which struck the mist villain in the armor around his neck. The mist villain screamed in pain as the bolt connected. Nomu rushed to Tamura's side, placing himself between his master and Izuku. The villain's body twitched sporadically due to the electricity, and he was also sporting electrical burns. He glared in hate as he watched the student regroup around the rabbit brat. "Izu, since when could you do that?" questioned Pony as she helped Kanoko over. The students rallied around their fallen teacher. Later, Jiroda grabbed Sensei, Manga grabbed Kinko. Started Izuku but was interrupted by Tamura. "Smash huh, you must be a fan of All Might. Do you think he'd approve of you trying to kill me? That's not very hero-like. But that won't matter for long," spoke Tamura, hatred in his voice as he fully stood up with some help from Kurofiri. "Nomu, kill the brats," ordered Tamura coldly. Nomu rushed forward, appearing in front of Camy, first raised to kill the girl. Camy's eyes widening at Nomu's sudden appearance. "I said you won't touch them. Smash," yelled Izuku as he punched Nomu in the face, accidentally using 100% of One for All. Camy would swear later that she saw the following in slow motion. Izuku's fist made contact with Nomu's beak, which carved it in at the impact. The birdman was sent flying away, its neck clearly broken as it bounced off the concrete floors a few times before coming to a stop. Both the heroes and villains were in shock at the events. "What, I used 100%, but I didn't break myself," thought Izuku, before Tamura grew a demented smile. "You really are very powerful, aren't you? To be able to do that to Nomu despite his shock absorption and regeneration quirks. You might be a nice warm-up before he kills All Might. Nomu, forget about the other brats. Kill the rabbit and make sure it's painful. This is top priority," ordered Tamura excitedly. Nomu stood, his neck already healed. The genetic abomination charges forward toward Izuku. "Run, get the others to safety," spoke Izuku to his friends as he dodged Nomu's first punch, which caused a crater to form on the concrete floor. His comrades hesitated, not sure what to do. Camy was the first to take action. Izuku catch, yelled Camy, tossing Izuku one of her last gas grenades to him. Izuku caught the gadget with little issue. Camy hoped it would be useful as she grabbed the injured Kinko from Yanagi and started making her way to the entrance. Jiroda and Manga carefully picked up Vlad King and followed Camy toward the main entrance. Tetsu did not want to run as that was not manly, but if the others ran into more villains, they'd be vulnerable while carrying the injured. It would also not be manly to leave them undefended. Go, we'll help Izuku. Once the injured are safe you can come back, spoke Yanagi as she laid a hand on Tetsu's shoulder. All right, I'll be right back, replied Tetsu, deciding to trust in his classmates. The metal hero moved to catch up with the group heading to the entrance. He would make sure they got there safely, then he'd come back with more classmates to help. Yanagi and Pony stood side by side, watching as Izuku dodged and weaved around Nomu's attacks. It was like watching someone try to hit a fly. The only difference was that each missed attack shattered concrete and stone. Izuku was using all his agility to avoid taking a hit, and unbeknownst to them he was using 8% full cowl and bursts to avoid the monster's attacks. Unfortunately, Nomu was sticking close to Izuku in its pursuit to kill him. This made it hard for Yanagi and Pony to support him with ranged firepower. We can keep those two occupied so they don't interfere, spoke Yanagi, looking at Tamura and Kurogiri. The two villains seemed to be paying more attention to Izuku's fight with Nomu than to them. Both heroines knew that the moment it looked like Izuku had the upper hand that the villains would interfere. I can take the Mist Man. If he tries to portal my horns, I can just change their direction, spoke Pony, knowing that her ability to control her horns' movements would be effective against the warping villain. Yanagi nodded, accepting Pony's proposal. He seems to have some sort of armored collar. It may be a vulnerability, and be cautious, he may attempt to warp you away, spoke Yanagi, pointing out the metal collar. Their plan made, the two heroines jumped into action. Pony fired a bunch of her horns, and Yanagi had plenty of broken concrete at her disposal. The projectiles flew at great speed toward their prospective targets. The Villains spotted the attacks and were forced to dodge out of the way. The bits of concrete sailed past, missing Tamura, but the horns simply turned to follow Kurogiri. The warper opened a portal in front of the projectiles to try and redirect them back at Pony. The horns flew through the portal, but once on the other side, they turned 90 degrees, and now two separate groups were coming for the warper from opposite directions. Kurogiri once again tried to redirect the horns, only for them to split into 4 groups. How troublesome, spoke Kurogiri as he continued to try to avoid the attack. Tamura was also having trouble. Not only was he still injured from his bout with Vlad King and Izuku's attack, but Yanagi was throwing small rubble at him, which the villain found to be incredibly annoying as he couldn't simply disintegrate the small projectiles. Tamura ran toward the ghost girl, trying to get closer so he could dust her. But once he was within her quirk's range, she simply reached out with her quirk and took hold of one of his legs, forcing him to trip. Tamura gritted his teeth in pain as he fell face first into the floor. He immediately moved and dodged another barrage of rubble and stone. Yanagi had already backed away from him, determined to keep him far out of arm's reach. But she also remained on guard in case Kurogiri attempted to assist his boss. Izuku took a look, seeing Yanagi and Pony fighting the other two villains. He was worried about them, but he was happy to see that they were holding their own for the time being. Izuku's distraction cost him as Nomu was able to land a blow. Izuku was sent flying back. Izuku crashed through one of the nearby trees, sending splitters in every direction. Pony and Yanagi were worried when they saw Izuku take the hit, but they forced to refocus on the villains who tried to take advantage of their lost focus. Izuku stumbled to his feet, picking up Camy's grenade as he rose to his feet. He was lucky that one for all boosted his defenses, or that punch could have killed him. But Izuku was not unscathed. His left arm hung limply at his side, clearly broken. Nomu, seeing his target was still standing, started marching toward Izuku. Focus, Izuku, I can help them after I deal with Nomu. But how do I beat him? Even if I can hit him with 100%, he just regenerates any damage I do, and I can't take another hit like that. What if I don't beat him? What if I just take him out of the fight? Thought Izuku as he ran through possible solutions using what information he had. Izuku's eyes darted to the ceiling above and then landed on Nomu. That could work, but I'll need to slow Nomu down. If I use Camy's glamour grenade, it should make him stand still long enough for me to get rid of him. I'll have to thank her later, thought Izuku, his one good hand clenching the grenade Camy had tossed to him earlier. Izuku dashed back into the plaza, making it look like he was going toward Tamura, and Nomu moved to intercept the green-haired hero student. Once Nomu was in the right position, Izuku jumped back from Nomu, tossing the now primed grenade in between them. Nomu, not being a smart creature, simply chased after his target, not even glancing at the grenade as he collided with it. The grenade released Camy's multicolored glamour gas. Nomu stopped in his tracks, confused as to where his target was and why there were 6 masters. Nomu simply stood there in confusion, unable to complete its priority order. What did you do to Nomu? Yelled out Tamura as he charged at Izuku, only for Yanagi to trip the villain again. Izuku didn't respond to the villain as he dashed back toward Nomu, ducking low once he was close enough. The following events went by so fast that those present could barely keep up. Huston Smash, called Izuku as he used 100% to sweep Namu's legs so fast that Nomu seemed to hover in midair for a moment. The strike also shattered the monster's legs. Tape Canaveral smash, yelled Izuku as he performed a rising uppercut at 100%, sending Nomu flying upward. Izuku brought full cal to 8% and jumped after Nomu. Those near the entrance in the plaza watched as Izuku rapidly ascended toward Nomu. Nomu tumbled in midair, still under the effects of the hallucinations of Camy's quirk. Nomu reached the apex of his flight, almost touching the USJ's ceiling, and was now falling back down to earth, only for Izuku to rapidly get closer. Apollo smash, yelled out Izuku. Izuku threw a full power kick at Nomu, green lighting trailing his leg. The blow caused Namu's chest to buckle and collapsed inward. Once again the rumble of thunder and intense wind accompanied the blow. The anti-symbol of peace was sent upward at great speed. Namu's body punched right through the USJ's metal ceiling without even slowing down, causing the sound of tearing metal to echo throughout the facility. Nomu quickly vanished from sight, the dispersing of clouds indicating that the monster was still going. That cheater, Kurogiri, we have to gank the brat now, yelled out Tamura in hate as the villain plunged his hands into a small portal that Kurogiri made. Izuku watched with some pride and satisfaction as Nomu was sent flying. But he wasn't done. He still needed to land and help deal with the remaining villains. However, a portal appeared just a little below him, the bloody and burned hands of Tamura reaching through the dark mist. Izuku didn't have time to dodge. He was going to fall right into those hands and be turned to dust. "Don't worry, kid, I got you," spoke the feminine voice from his dream. Izuku noticed that he just suddenly stopped falling. He was just floating there for a breath, looking at the hands that were just out of reach. "Don't just stare. Let him have it," spoke the female voice in his mind again. The voice figuratively kicked him into action. Izuku threw a 5% Tesla smash. The bolt arced through the portal and hit his foe directly. The wind generated from the punch had the added benefit of knocking him away from the portal. Izuku was sent flying away from the plaza and toward the mudslide zone. But he was caught by someone despite him still being high above the floor. A pair of arms wrapped around him and his head was resting against a familiar softness. 30 earlier in the landslide zone. 30. Deep in the landslide zone, Kendo deflected a villain's jab and retaliated with a palm strike to his chest, enlarging her hand at the last moment. The villain went tumbling back, sliding down the muddy terrain. Kendo was covered in mud but seemed uninjured for the most part. 3 more villains took the last one's place and quickly attacked her. "There's no end to them. How are you doing, Setsuna?" asked Itsuka, before she rolled out of the way of a torrent of water from a villain with a water tank on his back. Kendo enlarges her hands during her roll, letting her do a handspring kick right into the villain. Kendo landed on her feet after her attack. The villain, on the other hand, was on the ground out cold. "Fine, these guys aren't so tough," responded Setsuna as she roundhouses kicked a skeletal-looking villain in the face. She had barely needed to use her quirk so far. "I'll show you tough, you little brat," yelled the villain, who breathed a torrent of fire at Setsuna and Kendo, not caring if he hit his fellow villains. The 2 heroines ran ducking and weaving past the villains before they dove behind some partly buried buildings just as the flames were licking at their heels. They heard a combination of screams and swearing as several villains got caught in the attack. The torrent of fire ceased and the 2 heroines peeked around their cover. "What the hell, man? Don't fry us too," bellowed a bull-like villain as he slapped some wet mud on top of his burning sleeve. "Shut up. I'll keep them pinned. You guys flank them or I'll barbecue you," responded the fire-breathing villain. He took a deep breath, his chest distending far past what was normal. Setsuna and Kendo both ducked down behind their cover as more fire slammed into the remains of the building. "Okay, I'll admit they're a bit tougher than I first thought," joked Setsuna, trying to reveal some tension. "Not the time, Setsuna. How about you help me figure out a way to deal with these villains? We have to get out of here and find Izuku and the others," spoke Kendo seriously. Setsuna nodded, but couldn't resist the opportunity to tease her classmate. "Okay, you win. But you seem awfully concerned about Izuku to me," spoke Setsuna, breaking out into a teasing grin. Kendo's domino mask did little to hide the blush on her face. "Of course I'm concerned. He breaks himself when he uses his quirk, remember. If he was sent somewhere by himself, what do you think would happen?" spoke Kendo, glaring at Setsuna. An image of her shy, fun-to-tease classmate popped into Setsuna's mind. His costume in tatters, covered in blood. His body was broken and slumped against a wall. His eyes were full of fear and defiance as shadowy villains closed. The mental image caused her face to pale and her heart to tighten. Her eyes narrowed, and her face grew serious. "We got you," yelled out a thin flying bird villain with a staff and a near-naked albino villainess with long claw-like nails in unison. Kendo used one enlarged hand to catch the bird villain's weapon mid-swing and swatted him like a bug with the other, sending the villain careening into the bull villain from earlier. The clawed villainess slashed at Setsuna, but the villainess's claws hit nothing but air as Setsuna separated her torso into pieces. "What?" shouted the villainess in surprise. Setsuna used the momentary distraction to flip the villainess over her shoulder. The villainess fell face first into the mud and her momentum caused her to slide downhill. The villainess crashed into several of her allies, making them fall like bowling pins. This gave Setsuna an idea. "Come on, let's go," spoke Setsuna as she pulled Kendo to follow her up the muddy slope. "Where are we going?" questioned Kendo as she glanced back at the villains. She counted 13 villains of various sizes chasing after them. I got a plan. This mountainside was made to be unstable, so you're gonna bring the whole thing down on top of them, spoke Setsuna, a confident smile on her face. Kendo matched Setsuna's smile with one of her own. The two athletic teen girls easily outpaced the villains, who yelled obscenities and threats at the two as the gap between them grew larger. Setsuna saw the large wall that marked the edge of the landslide zone as they neared the top of the artificial mountain. They got nowhere left to run. We got them now, yelled out one of the villains in glee. This should be good. Let them have it, spoke Setsuna as she slid to a stop. Kendo stopped downhill of her reptilian-dressed comrade and enlarged her hands to their maximum size. Kendo started to punch and slap the ground, trying to cause a mudslide. The villains seemed confused at Kendo's actions, but they just kept charging up the hill at them. Come on, yelled Kendo in frustration as she slammed both her massive fists into the muddy ground. Some of the relatively smarter villains finally realized what she was up to and turned tail and started running downhill. But it was too late. It started with some of the debris shifting ever so slightly, and then the entire mountainside collapsed and started flowing downhill rapidly. Some of the villains didn't even have a chance to scream before they were swept away by the mudslide. Kendo would have also been swept away if not for Setsuna. She had detached her torso and grabbed Kendo and floated the two over to the stable ground. Setsuna let Kendo down and reattached her torso with her lower body. Kendo spat out a mouthful of mud and took several deep breaths. Way to go, Kendo, I knew you could do it, spoke Setsuna, slapping Kendo's back. The redhead gave Setsuna a thumbs up. Alright, let's go find our class rabbit, commented Setsuna, hiding her worry with her normal playful attitude. But before the two could start down the hill, a big burly villain burst out of the ground, grabbing Setsuna as he emerged and knocking Kendo away. He held the reptile girl over his head in a vice grip. Man, you two sure gave those losers some trouble, spoke the villain in a mocking tone. Kendo stood enlarging her hands to attack. Electricity raced up the villain's body, electrocuting Setsuna for a moment. Kendo stopped in her tracks when Setsuna started to scream in pain. You try anything and your friend gets it, threatened the villain, letting some more electricity arc over his arms for emphasis. What do you want? Asked Kendo, glaring at the villain as she tried to come up with a solution. The villain looked Kendo up and down and smirked. Well, I was going to have you surrender, but on second thought you don't look half bad. So I'll be nice and make you a deal. You strip down and give me a little show and I'll let you and your friend go. My job was just to shut down the security, so I get paid whether you two live through this or not, offered the villain, giving her a smile worthy of a veteran used car salesman. Kendo looked disgusted. She did not want the first guy to see her naked to be this creep, and she did not think for a second that he'd keep his word. There is no way I want this guy to be the first to see me naked. If I'm going to show anyone, then, thought Kendo as the image of a blushing, speechless Izuku came to the forefront of her mind. Her thoughts were broken when she heard Setsuna whisper in her ear. Play along. When I give you the signal, let him have it, whispered Setsuna's disembodied lips. Kendo glanced up at her classmate and had to resist smirking. She looked back at the villain, doubling down on her glare. Fine, spoke Kendo through her teeth. She shrunk her hands back down to normal size and took a few calculated steps forward. The villain told her to stop approaching, but she didn't mind. She was close enough for what she wanted. Kendo proceeded to stand there, glaring daggers at the villain. The villain grew agitated when Kendo continued to do nothing. Come on, get started already, girly. Or do you want me to fry my hostage? Bellowed the villain, wanting her to strip already, unaware of Setsuna giving Kendo the signal. What hostage? Questioned Kendo knowingly. The villain brought down his hands but was confused when all he was holding was a leg and part of a torso. Looking for me, spoke Setsuna with a whistle. The villain looked up only to get mud and dirt slammed right into his open eyes. My eyes, yelled the villain as he started rubbing his eyes, dropping Setsuna's parts, which flew out of reach. Kendo took the opportunity to run toward the villain. Kendo then slipped into a perfect forward split with ease and threw a punch with an enlarged fist. It was a nut punch that would make Johnny Cage himself nod in approval. The villain let out a high-pitched cry and then proceeded to keel over, foam coming out of his mouth, and his eyes rolled back into his head. Kendo rose from her split, still in a fighting stance. That's what you get, yelled Setsuna as she reassembled herself beside Kendo, her hair sticking out in multiple directions. You okay? Asked Kendo, concerned about her friend. Besides needing to fix my hair. Yeah, I'm good, started Setsuna before a bright green flash of light and the sound of thunder grabs their attention. A torrent of wind followed soon after, which forced them to shield their eyes. The wind shattered the dead light bulbs around the edges of the USJ. The two girls only knew one person in class who could generate wind like that. Come on, we should hurry, spoke Setsuna. Kendo nodded in agreement and the two moved to leave the mudslide zone and head toward the plaza. Another torrent of wind swept through the USJ, accompanied by the sound of something shattering concrete. After Kendo and Setsuna made it out of the landslide zone, another burst of wind swept over them. The two girls picked up the pace as two more massive bursts of wind came from the plaza, forcing them to slow down. The sound of tearing metal echoing throughout the facility caused them to stop and look up. A massive hole had been created in the USJ's ceiling. Another smaller burst of air and flash of green came from above, and they soon spotted a familiar green-haired hero falling toward the landslide zone. Itsuka, throw me, demanded Setsuna. Kendo enlarged a hand and picked the girl up by the stomach. holding her in a similar fashion one might hold a javelin. Kendo took a moment to properly aim at her target. She took 2 steps forward and then hucked Setsuna into the air. 30. The wind flew past her face as she moved through the air. Setsuna separated her body into pieces so she could control her accent. She grunted in some pain when Izuku collided with her, but she quickly wrapped her arms around him and allowed herself to fly back to lessen the impact. Once she had control over their flight, she moved back toward Kendo. Internally, she was relieved that Izuku was okay. She glanced at the massive hole that was torn in the ceiling. "Holy cow, sometimes I forget how much power you have in this cute little package," commented Setsuna as she readjusts her arms to get a better grip on him. She also took the opportunity to pull Izuku a little more into her breasts. She wanted to mess with him a little for worrying her, even if he wasn't aware of it. "Setsuna, I'm glad you're alright and thank you for catching me," spoke Izuku as he looked back at her. But he wasn't blushing or stuttering. He was so serious and sincere in his words that it actually made Setsuna blush in surprise as she floated them back down to the ground. "Good catch, Setsuna. Izuku, are you alright?" asked Kendo, who rushed over to them once they were on the ground and started looking over Izuku. She immediately determined that his left arm was shattered on top of a lot of other smaller injuries that littered his body. "No time. We have to get back to the plaza right now," replied Izuku as he started running back toward the plaza. The 2 girls were surprised when Izuku started moving so fast, and they struggled to keep up with him. Izuku grunted in pain due to his broken left arm. He also must have smaller damage from having to use 8% to prevent Nomu from flattening him. "Come on, Izuku, just hold on a little bit longer. All Might and the other teachers should be here soon," thought Izuku as he re-entered the plaza. "Izu, you're back," spoke Pony happily in English. There were more villains in the plaza. It would seem some of the stragglers from the different zones had rallied around Tamura. "Guys, I'm back," yelled Tetsu as he and some of their classmates entered the plaza. The students rallied behind Izuku and Kendo, ready to buy more time for the teachers to arrive. Izuku took stock of who he had at his disposal. Besides Kendo, Setsuna, Pony, and Yanagi, who were already in the plaza, Kamakiri, Camy, Jiroda, and Bondo had come with Tetsu from the entrance to help. The rest of the class were probably either with the injured at the entrance or still isolated somewhere in the facility. "Pony, Camy, Bando, and Tetsu, you guys deal with the warper. Try and incapacitate him if you can. He's their only escape route. Yanagi, you're with me. We are going for the leader. Just focus on his hands. If you can keep him from being able to touch me, then I should be able to knock him out. The rest of you are with Kendo and you're dealing with the other villains. Work together, watch each other's back. We can win this," spoke Izuku, giving out the battle plan as full cowl flared around him. "Are you certain you are able enough for battle? You are heavily injured," asked Yanagi in clear concern as she made note of his injuries. "She has a point. You also look like you're about to collapse. You should go back to the entrance. Let us handle this," spoke Kendo, not wanting him to push himself while so injured. But the look on his face clearly indicated to all present that he wasn't going to leave them. "Izu, you're hurt. Please at least stay back. You can lead better that way and you can help with your lightning attacks," spoke Pony in English, trying to convince him. Izuku's resistance quickly crumbled. But Tamura once more interrupted them. "What the hell is with you brats? You should have just been low-level mobs that were supposed to die by our raid party before the boss fight started. Not only is one of you using hacks, but the rest of you brats are annoying gimmick mobs," ranted Tamura as he scratched at his neck aggressively. "I want those kids dead. Anyone who takes out one of those brats gets paid double, and if you give me the rabbit kid's head you get triple," yelled out Tamura, whose hair was standing on end and was sporting more electrical burns due to Izuku's lighting attacks. The villains around him looked at each other for a moment before charging the students like an unorganized mob. However, Tamura and Kurogiri did not follow their meat shields. "Okay, everyone same positions, but Kendo and I will switch," spoke Izuku quickly. The students were more organized with the tougher, more melee-oriented students in front of those with more ranged quirks behind them. Izuku himself was in the middle of the group, but just before the 2 groups meet, BOOM, the 2 groups stopped dead in their tracks and looked at the facility's main doors. They had been thrown off their hinges and a cloud of dust had been kicked up. "Have no fear, students," spoke the unmistakable voice of All Might as he strode out of the dust cloud in his teaching outfit. But most striking was that he wasn't smiling. "I am here," spoke All Might as he stood at the top of the stairs, his mere presence frightening some of the villains. "Kurogiri, get me out of here. I am done with this failed raid. I want to go home." "Leave the others. I don't need them," ordered Tamura as he glared at All Might, who was now standing at the top of the stairs. "As you wish," responded Kurogiri, opening up a portal that enveloped them both in an instant. Suddenly, faster than the eye could see, All Might was no longer at the top of the stairs. He was now in between the students and the remaining villains. Some of the students were almost in tears at his appearance, relieved that they were saved. Izuku in particular partly collapsed as the injuries he had accumulated finally proved too much. Thankfully, Pony and Yanagi, who were standing to either side of him, caught him before he could hit the ground. I am so proud of you students, you've done a great job. Now all of you get back to the entrance, the rest of the staff are right behind me, we can handle it from here," ordered All Might as he kept his eyes on the villains. Gunshots echoed throughout the USJ as the pro hero Snipe began opening fire from the top of the stairs. The students happily followed All Might's instructions as they turned and started running back toward the entrance. As his friends helped him up the stairs, Powell Order, Hound Dog, and several dozen clones of ectoplasm ran past them. When they reached the entrance, they saw Recovery Girl along with Midnight treating the heavily injured 13 and Vlad King. "You two put him down over there, Recovery Girl will help him," ordered who Izuku immediately identified as the pro hero Eraserhead, who moved to the stairs to join the fight. Pony and Yanagi laid Izuku down right next to Vlad King. Pony went over to Recovery Girl to tell her about Izuku and see if she could help with the injured, while Yanagi left moving toward a school robot that was carrying a crate with a red plus on it. Izuku's body ached in pain when he tried to move. Yanagi then re-entered his line of sight with a medical kit in hand. "Do not attempt to move around too much, you could exacerbate your injuries," spoke Yanagi eloquently as she kneeled down next to him and opened the kit. "Izuku, thank you for saving me, for saving us. We are safe now, thanks in no small part to you. So you can rest easy now," spoke Yanagi. Yanagi looked right into Izuku's eyes while giving him a small smile that held a complicated mix of emotions that Izuku couldn't identify. Despite her partly destroyed costume, despite the cuts, the bruises, the dirt, and the blood on her, in a strange way she looked radiant. Izuku would remember the look she was giving him for years to come as the first time he felt like a real hero. Izuku exhaled deeply, closing his eyes with a smile on his face and a warm feeling in his chest. His focus solely on the feeling of Yanagi's soft hands treating his wounds. It didn't take too long for the teachers to subdue the remaining villains and rescue the remaining students. As the pro heroes were mopping up, the police and ambulances arrived. The police escorted the students back to safety, while the EMTs attended to the wounded. Vlad and 13 were brought to the hospital. Izuku himself was brought back to the Recovery Girl's office as she was All Might's personal doctor. Some of his more lightly injured classmates were also brought to the nurse's office. Recover Girl treated the students that had enough stamina for her to heal them with her quirk. The majority of the healed students were picked up by their parents or brought home by the police. Those students who weren't very injured or couldn't return home were escorted back to the dorms. Izuku woke up laying in a medical bed, the orange hues of the setting sun coming in from the windows. One of his arms was in a cast along with his right leg, bandages wrapped around him in several places. Aches and pains formed the numerous injuries around his body, flooding his senses. Izuku groaned out in discomfort, catching the attention of the other occupants in the room. "Don't move around too much, Sonny," spoke Recovery Girl as she approached. "How's everyone else? Are they okay?" asked Izuku, concerned about his classmates and teachers. "They are fine for the most part. Kaibara and Subiraba both suffered broken bones. Vlad and 13 have both been rushed to the ICU," informed All Might as he approached. His first thought after waking is for his comrades' health. Thought All Might even more sure of his choice in successor. "But you suffered the worst out of all the students. A shattered arm, multiple hairline fractures, 6 separate contusions, and 11 minor lacerations. Be more careful next time," spoke Recovery Girl, scolding the teen as she made the medical bed move him to a more seated position and started to double-check a few things now that he was awake. This new angle allowed Izuku to see that there was a man in a tan overcoat standing near the entrance of the room. At his successor's questioning look, All Might waved over the man. "Young Midoriya, I'd like you to meet Detective Tsukachi. He is a good friend that I have known for years. He is aware of all my secrets," spoke All Might, clearly indicating that it was safe to discuss one for all in front of the detective. "It's good to meet you. I'm sorry to jump straight into business, but I'd like to hear about the events from your perspective," spoke Tsukachi in a professional tone. "Sure, I can do that, but there are some things I'd like to mention first if that's okay," responded Izuku. The detective popped his head outside the room to make sure that nobody was listening in, then motioned for Izuku to start. "Well, the first thing is a villainess with a spider quirk named Lolt knew about me. She was looking for me specifically. The other villains also seem to have some knowledge about the class's quirks," spoke Izuku, giving the adult a description of the villainess. "That is the theory I came to after interviewing your classmate. The villains were organized and seemed to send them to areas that would seem to place them at a disadvantage. We plan to look into how they got that information," spoke Tsukachi, articulating the seriousness of what this could imply. "They also had this thing. The lead villain Tamura called it Nomu, and they said it was made to beat All Might. It had multiple quirks that would almost perfectly counter you, All Might," explained Izuku, looking at All Might. The adults glanced at each other, clearly having a dreadful thought after hearing about the multiple quirks. "That is disconcerting. But I heard from your classmates that you were able to defeat this Nomu," spoke All Might, clearly proud of his student. "I didn't beat it. I just took it out of the fight because I sent it flying. I doubt I would have been able to beat it in a straight fight. I was lucky that I could hit Nomu using 100% without hurting myself. I'm still not sure why. My best guess is because Namu's shock absorption quirk lessened the recoil on my own body somehow. I could be wrong though. But what would have happened if my plan didn't work? Maybe I could have hit Nomu with a 100% Tesla smash to its exposed brain. That might have been enough to cauterize its entire nervous system, preventing it from healing. or maybe if I, spoke Izuku as he descended into a mutter storm going over more ways defeating Nomu and the other villains. Izuku was giving off a feeling that was uncomfortably similar to the feeling Nezu gave off when he's scheming. Now that's enough of that, spoke Recovery Girl, poking the boy's good leg with her cane, snapping Izuku out of his thoughts. Where was I? Asked Izuku after being snapped out of his muttering. Wait, young Midoriya, what is a Tesla smash? And what's full cal? Asked All Might, curious as the technique was definitely not one of his. Izuku turned to his mentor. Oh, it's their techniques I discovered with Vlad Sensei's help. He's been giving me personal training after school every day since the first heroics class. Full cal lets me have some control over one for all by spreading it over my whole body, but I can only use about 5% safely. As for my Tesla smash, I make that by harnessing the lightning full cal generates and shoot it out as a ranged attack. But it has a wind-up time depending on how powerful I want to make it. I also discovered I can shoot blasts of air when I use full cal, but they're a little underpowered and hard to properly aim, answered Izuku, happily referring to his teacher. All Might gained a slightly depressed look. He was clearly affected by the fact he was being out-mentored by his colleague. By the way, All Might, was there ever a woman that called you Toshi? Started Izuku, addressing his somewhat depressed mentor. All Might snapped out of his funk. The hero's eyes widened at the question. Yes, my mentor Nana Shimura often referred to me as such. How, replied All Might, but Izuku cut him off with another question. Did her quirk involve flight, or some form of levitation? Questioned Izuku, one of his notebooks out on his lap and a pen in his non-broken arm. Yes, her quirk was called float and let her suspend herself in midair. How did you know? Asked All Might, confused as to how Izuku knew about his mentor since All Might had not mentioned her at all. The adults were also confused about where he got the notebook since he was only wearing a hospital gown. Well, I had this really weird dream, where I heard like 7 different voices. One of the female voices mentioned Toshi a few times. I was going to ask you about it after class today. Something weird also happened when I was falling after sending Nomu flying. I was going to die. I heard the same voice from my dream, and then I was suddenly just floating in midair, explained Izuku to the best of his ability. That's a lot to take in. You claim to be dreaming of the former bearers. But how? I never experienced this in all my years with One for All. You also have access to a previous holder's quirk. That's not how One for All works. If you had a quirk, One for All would just boost it. But you don't have one, so One for All should just boost all your physical attributes exactly like it did with me, spoke All Might, completely out of his depth. I'm not sure, honestly. I was hoping you knew something about this, responded Izuku. The number 1 hero was deep in thought. Recovery Girl, could you perhaps run some tests? It may shed some light on this situation, or at the very least eliminate some possibilities, asked All Might, looking at the doctor. Very well, but I have other priorities. I won't have results until at least after the sports festival if Nezu decides to move forward with it. I'll take the samples I need tomorrow morning, spoke Recovery Girl, accepting the request. Thank you, replied All Might appreciatively. But the boy needs more training, not only with One for All, but also with float, and there's only one person I know who has more experience with those quirks than anyone else on the planet, started Recovery Girl with a serious look. I don't think that will be necessary. I can handle it, responded All Might quickly, not wanting to involve his old teacher. No, you can't. You sent the boy into the entrance exam without any combat training or any idea of how to use One for All safely. Vlad was able to make time to train him, and he's not even his mentor. You are. So tell me, when was the last time you took time to train with him? And Hero 101 doesn't count. I mean one-on-one training, spoke Recovery Girl, scolding All Might like a mother would a child. Well, last time was the day of the exam, spoke All Might nervously while looking away. Clearly not believing him, Recovery Girl turned to Izuku with, is he really telling the truth? Look, the last time we did one-on-one training was at the beginning of the month, spoke Izuku, not wanting to be the focus of the old hero's ire. Recovery Girl sent a glare at All Might that caused the no one to flinch before his head lowered in defeat. I'll call him tomorrow, spoke All Might, dreading the idea of making the call. Oh no, you'll just chicken out. You call him right now or I will, spoke Recovery Girl sternly. Who are you talking about? Asked Izuku, curious who could make All Might act like this. My mentor, the man who taught me, replied All Might as his legs shook in fear. Really? What's he like? Is he a pro hero? Asked Izuku, clearly excited at the idea of meeting the man who trained the symbol of peace. He's terrifying, whispered All Might, voice wavering. Don't mind him, dear. I'm going to make sure he makes the call while you talk to the detective. I'll heal you up once he's done with his questions. Oh, and you have to go and talk to Hound Dog tomorrow. All the students involved have to talk to him, spoke Recovery Girl kindly as she ushered All Might out of the room. Okay, where would you like me to start? Asked Izuku, moving his full attention to the detective that had quietly stayed out of the conversion till now. Start from when your class gets on the bus and go from there in as much detail as possible, responds Tsukachi, pulling out his small notebook again to write the information. Izuku did what he was asked and recounted the events he experienced from the moment he stepped on the bus to him waking up in the nurse's office. He explained everything in as much detail as he could recall. Izuku explained the villains' appearances, quirks, everything that they said, and how they were subdued. Tsukachi frantically wrote every word down, underlining anything he considered important. That should be all. Thank you very much for your help. If you recall any more details, you can contact me with this number. Goodbye and good luck during the sports festival, spoke Tsukachi professionally as he passed the Tina card with his contact info. You're welcome, and have a good day, responded Izuku politely, giving the detective a nod as he exited the room. Recovery Girl re-entered the room shortly after the detective left. The pro heroine pulled some food from a refrigerator near her desk and then moved to his bedside. Here, have some of this. You must be famished, spoke Recovery Girl as she handed him a small snack along with a bottle of water. Izuku, having not had anything to eat since lunch, eagerly ate the offered food. Once he was finished, Recovery Girl lowered his medical bed. The teachers have a staff meeting. I'll check up on you after it's done. But you should be right as rain in the morning and don't worry about classes. They have been cancelled for the next 2 days, explained Recovery Girl before her lips stretched, planting a quick smooch on his forehead. A green glow enveloped Izuku and he could feel the pain from his injuries ebb away. Thank you, spoke Izuku, the side effects of Recovery Girl's quickly catching up with him as he rapidly fell asleep. Recovery Girl quietly moved to the exit. She dimmed the office lights and then left for the teachers' meeting. Not even 5 minutes after the heroine left, the door slid open and someone slipped in. 40. Kanoko was grateful for Recovery Girl. With the help of the EMTs, she was able to remove the piece of the harpoon still in her leg and rapidly close the flesh wound with a quick kiss right before Kinko's eyes. Her parents were currently rushing to the school to pick her up. Kanoko wanted to check on Izuku before they showed up to take her home, but Recovery Girl was not allowing visitors until tomorrow. So Kanoko waited for the nurse to leave before sneaking in. She slowly and quietly slipped into the dark infirmary and approached the bed Izuku was resting in, mindful not to hit anything in the dark. She needed to be quick. She didn't know when Recovery Girl would be back. She looked at Izuku for a moment, watching his chest rise and fall. She watched him sleep for a moment, making sure he was 100% asleep. Hi, I know that I can only say this because you're asleep right now and I'm not sure how to say this, but I wanted to thank you. You've saved me again today. It was the second time I was sure I was going to die, and it was you that appeared out of nowhere to save me both times. I know you're going to be a great hero, spoke Kanoko quietly as she gently took hold of one of his hands with her own before she continued. You're amazing, you know that. You're kind and humble and determined and intelligent and heroic and handsome, and I find your mumbling cute and your serious mode hot. That's probably why I spoke Kanoko, pausing, not able to say what she wanted. She took a few moments before she continued. I don't want to regret not taking this chance later in my life. We will be risking our lives as heroes. We could die when we least expect it. I want to be together with you. I just don't have the courage to tell you how I feel yet. So I'm going to get stronger. I need to prove to myself that I can stand beside you as a hero and not just be another person you have to save. I'll save you next time, and when I do, spoke Kanoko with determination. Her eyes locked on Izuku's sleeping face. The girl carefully leans over. I'll tell you exactly how much I love you, whispered Kanoko, gently kissing his cheek. No fair, Kanoko. We want to kiss him too, whispered Pony, a slight pout on her face. Kanoko let out a muffled squeak in surprise and lost her balance as she jolted upright. The mushroom girl should have fallen to the ground, but she was caught midair by Yanagi with her quirk. The three girls stared at Izuku, worried he'd wake up from the commotion. But the green-haired boy barely stirred in his sleep. The two approached Kanoko as Yanagi gently brought Kanoko back to her feet. How long have you two been there? Asked Kanoko quietly, clearly embarrassed. If the deep blush on her face was any indication, we have been here since you began listing Izuku's good attributes, answered Ryuko bluntly, releasing her telekinetic hold on Kanoko. Kanoko, that was so sweet. I didn't know you liked Izuku too, whispered Pony, happily slipping into English. Before Kanoko could respond, Ryuko placed one hand on each of the girls' shoulders. I believe it best if we converse in another location, as to not disrupt his sleep, spoke Ryuko, gesturing to Izuku's still sleeping form. Kanoko and Pony both nodded in agreement. Kanoko started to walk toward the door, but glanced back when she noticed that Pony and Ryuko weren't beside her. The two heroines were both leaned over Izuku. Pony kissed one of his cheeks, stifling a giggle with her hand after she stood straight. Ryuko leaned in after Pony. She caressed the boy's cheek as she gave his forehead a quick kiss. Once they were finished, Yanagi and Pony quietly rushed out of the room, ushering a slightly stunned Kanoko with them. With a quick pause to ensure none of the staff were watching, they slipped out of the room, Yanagi sliding the door closed with her quirk in their wake. Once outside the room, the three moved down a couple of halls before stopping. The three stood in awkward silence for a few moments. So you two both like Izuku? Asked Kanoko, breaking the silence. Her tone was unsure and her gaze was on the floor. Yes, we both are very fond of him and have orchestrated a united reveal of our desires to him. However, the assault by those cutthroats sabotaged and delayed our efforts, responded Ryuko, honestly, her tone neutral. Kanoko didn't really understand what Yanagi said and looked at Pony, hoping for a better explanation. We were planning on confessing to Izuku today after class, but because of the villain attack, we have to wait till tomorrow. At least we might be able to squeeze a date with Izu before class starts again. added Pony, clearly happy at the idea of a date and confident about Izuku accepting the confessions. Wait, both of you plan to date him? Questioned Kinoko, a little confused. Yes, we had a discussion and we agreed to share him. Such relationships are not unheard of. There is a family on my street that I babysat for during middle school, and their family consists of a pair of sisters married to the same man, explained Ryuko, providing an example. I guess she has a point. That kind of relationship isn't illegal or socially frowned on, just kinda rare, thought Kinoko, mulling over what she had been told. Since you like Izuku too, do you want to confess with us tomorrow? That way all three of us can be with him, offered Pony, happy to include her friend since he knew she genuinely seemed to care for Izuku. Kinoko didn't answer right away. She wasn't necessarily against the idea of sharing Izuku, but she hadn't dated anyone before and was understandably conflicted. Do not feel as if you must answer. If you require more time to reach a decision or gather your resolve, then take as much time as you require. Only confess when you are ready. However, Pony and I are ready and we will confess to him tomorrow, stated Ryuko in a polite but firm tone. But you're welcome to join us when you're ready. We can tell you really like Izu, added Pony with a happy smile. Thank you. I'll be sure to let you both know when I'm ready. By the way, would you two like to train together for the sports festival? Asked Kinoko tentatively as she shifted the topic away from her crush. Of course we would, answered Pony, pulling Kinoko into an excited hug. Ryuko also agreed to the question. Before Kinoko could thank the girls, her phone chimed. Kinoko pulled out her phone. It's my parents. I have to go to the front gate, spoke Kinoko as she put her phone away. In that case, we will escort you to the gate. We discuss ideas for training, spoke Yanagi. The three girls walked toward the front gate. The three discuss how they would train and when. 30 UA staff meeting room 30. The sun had fully set and the whole of UAS staff bearing the injured 13 and Vlad King sat in the very same meeting room, where they reviewed the entrance exam. Detective Tsukachi was also present to give the pro heroes the police's preliminary report. I think it's time to begin, please give me a moment, spoke Nezu as he typed on his tablet. The main screen in the room showed the words connecting for a moment before a man sitting in an airplane appeared on the screen. He wore an outfit nearly identical to Nezu's normal outfit, the only difference being his tie was blue instead of Nezu's red. His build easily marked him as the second tallest staff member. His brown hair was short and cut close on the sides. A scar led from the left side of his neck up the side of his face and over his left eye. Normally his green eyes would be brimming with energy and hints of mischief. Currently, however, his eyes had more in common with Aizawa's. The prominent bags under his eyes easily spotted behind his rectangular glasses. Hello brother, I'm glad you could join us. How are you doing? Spoke Nezu, addressing his only family. Well, besides getting an alert that our school was attacked in the middle of my meeting with the German Ministry of Education and the German Ministry of Heroes, dropping everything and getting on the first available flight back home, while being worried out of my mind. I've been worse, but let us get to the matter at hand, responded Vice Principal Andy, with a tired smile and a sarcastic tone before becoming more serious. Nezu gestured for Tsukachi to begin. Our investigators are trying to learn everything they can about this so-called League of Villains. We have made some progress already, but we can't find anything on this Tamura Shigaraki so far. We've searched our databases, but we haven't found anyone that comes close to matching his discretion or quirk. The same goes for the warp villain Kurogiri. So they are not citizens or they are using aliases, either way hard to find, spoke Tsukachi as he let the heroes digest the information. So what you're saying is we don't know anything, commented Eraserhead. We have to track them down. According to the students, the ringleader was injured pretty badly. But once he's healed up, I bet he'll try something like this again. What a pain, spoke Snipe, frustrated that the villain had escaped. I think that this Shigaraki would do just that. From the testimony of the students we know, he was quick to monologue, bragging about this Nomu's many quirks as if he was a pet. He made wild, immature claims that according to the students, the moment things stopped going in Shigaraki's favor, he became physically upset, like he was going to throw a tantrum. The analysts likened his mentality to that of a spoiled child with an inflated ego, spoke Tsukachi as the villain's psychological profile was placed on the screen. Great, an unstable manchild wielding a deadly quirk. This is going to be troublesome, spoke PP Warlorder, clearly angry at this villain, since he might have no record. It's possible that he never got the quirk counseling that students received during elementary and middle school, commented Midnight. That may be so, but it doesn't really matter now, spoke Snipe. Before the detective continued his report, there were 72 villains arrested in the aftermath of the USJ attack. They were, for the most part, small-time thugs that usually lurked around back alleys. However, we identified 3 villains on the most wanted list. The Hero Hunter War Chief, wanted for repeated attacks on pro-heroes, armed robbery, and murder. The serial killer Gideon, who has been linked to over a dozen murder and kidnapping cases. The spider villainous Lolt, wanted for numerous robberies, art theft, and numerous charges relating to being a broker of illegal goods and services. Unfortunately, it appears all 3 escaped by some unknown means. But what worries me is how this man-child convinced all these villains to join in on his crazy plan. We do not know what convinced the higher-ranked villains to follow him, but the lower-ranked villains viewed him as a real leader. We believe they were so quick to back such a simple-minded villain. Because the villains have been feeling more pressure since the country is brimming with heroes, spoke Tsukachi as he put forth his concerns as pictures of some of the villains were shown. That does make sense, comments Cementos. There are many people looking for a cause to get behind, spoke Snipe in agreement. I'll be taking to the students involved to ensure they aren't suffering from any PTSD as a result of experiencing this attack, spoke Hound Dog, doing his best not to growl in anger at these villains for attacking children. So what do we do to stop them? Asked Midnight. We plan to expand our investigation and continue searching for the perpetrators that planned this attack, responded Tsukachi. This manchild may very well have someone guiding him, nurturing his malice. They may also be providing resources to this organization, spoke Nezu, putting forth a hypothesis. For now we should be vigilant. They will attack again when they are ready, spoke All Might. What information have you learned about this Nomu? From what I've read so far, I find its existence worrying, to say the least, asked Andy, concern laced in his tone. We found the villain Nomu in a crater on the other side of the campus. He is for the most part unresponsive, but did follow orders from the officers. He also seems to be unable to speak. From what we have gathered, Nomu possesses immense speed and strength. He also possessed a shock absorption quirk and a super regeneration quirk along with several other quirks. The villains claimed Nomu to be an artificial being. A research team will be analyzing Nomu after he is transferred to Tartarus, explained Tsukachi as a picture of Nomu in police custody. If this Nomu was in fact artificially created, it may be wise to consider that this League of Villains has the means to create more beings like this Nomu. Cementos, I will need your assistance in constructing countermeasures, spoke Andy seriously, his hands steepled in front of him in thought. The other heroes digested the idea of more of those things running around. I'll be sure to gather the needed materials for you, responded Cementos with a nod. What about the injured? Has there been any news? Asked Midnight. The occupants of the room all turned to Recovery Girl 13 and Vlad King had to be brought to the ICU with severe injuries, but they have been stabilized and should pull through. I plan to go to the hospital tomorrow and see if they are well enough for my quirk, but they'll have to take it easy for a while. The students for the most part only had light to moderate injuries. 2 students suffered broken bones. The only student that suffered severe injuries was Izuku Midoriya, informed Recovery Girl. I told you that kid shouldn't have been accepted. I saw that he had to be carried to safety by his classmates. He probably made himself helpless by using his quirk. He's lucky that he's alive and didn't endanger his classmates more, spoke Eraserhead, clearly relishing in his I told you so moment given their rarity for him. All Might and Nezu did not look pleased with this statement. A cough for Tsukachi got the room's attention. Actually, according to the students, he led several of them against the villains, subduing many of them, faced the high-ranked villains I mentioned earlier, secured the wounded Vlad King, and saved Yanagi and Komori from Tamura. His classmates also state that he fought Nomu one-on-one and was the one to send Nomu flying through the USJ's roof, after which he was planning on commanding his classmates against the remaining villains despite the fact he was severely injured. But fortunately, that is when you all arrived, explained Tsukachi. The smug look on Eraserhead's face vanished at the words. My, that is impressive. We are fortunate to have such a student in our school. Glad we didn't lose the young man to some other hero school. I cannot wait to meet him, commented Andy with a large smug look aimed at Eraserhead. Nezu shared the same look. Eraserhead's head sunk into his capture scarf, and he was grumbling under his breath, knowing that Vlad was going to gloat when he returned. After talking to the students, we also came to the conclusion that the villains obtained not only the lesson plan and details about the USJ itself, but also seemed to have at least some knowledge on the students' quirks, continued Tsukachi, drawing the hero's attention back to him. Do we have any idea on how they got the information? Asked Midnight. I got at least a partial answer after reviewing the security camera footage, said Powerloader, as he displays several camera angles. One view was from inside Nezu's office and another was the hallway just outside. They all watched as Nezu was sipping tea while working on his computer, while several students walked through the hallway, some carrying phones and lunch bags. Notably, a group of first-year Hero Course students also passed by. All of them had their phones out. The group consisted of Senkaibara, Kosai Tsubiraba, Huryu Rin, along with Class A's Minoru Mineta, Denki Kaminari, and Hantasiro. Then the alarm started going off indicating the press had trespassed. The Nezu in the recording quickly locked his computer and left the room. The pro heroes and the detective watched as Kurogiri rapped into the room. The villain quickly pulled out some sort of device and connected it to the computer. After the drive flashed green, he took the device and left. The device was some sort of remote hacking tool that allowed someone off-site access to our systems. From what I can tell, they were only able to get to the lesson plan and USJ blueprints before they hit a brick wall trying to get the student records. They also tried to overwrite the recording and succeeded with the original, but they didn't get to alter the backup the system automatically saved when the alarm was set off. I also found a backdoor they placed in the system, explained Powerloader, showing the altered video of the empty office. Good work, Powerloader. But that still leaves how they got the information on the students. The lesson plan doesn't give that information, and from the statements of the students it's clear that the information the villains had on them was superficial or incomplete, spoke Nezu. What if they have a mole on the inside? That might explain things, proposed Present Mike, causing the room to tense ever so slightly. That seems like a leap to me. If it was one of the staff, the villains wouldn't need to make a distraction or to hack into the computer system. We all already have access to that information, spoke Cementos, bringing up a good point. While I dislike the idea of being suspicious of our students, we cannot dismiss any possibility until we have investigated all of the facts, spoke Andy, a sigh slipping past his lips. Most of the students are being escorted home by the police. A few of the students that are dorming will be staying on campus. We will also be moving forward with the sports festival. We will increase security for the event this year, stated Nezu as decision made. Thank you for your time, Detective Tsukachi. Please keep us informed of any developments in the case, continued Nezu politely. The detective gave his goodbyes and showed himself out. That will be all for today. Snipe, Eraserhead, thank you for volunteering to watch over the campus. Once Hound Dog and Present Mike swap with you, the both of you are free to rest tomorrow. I'll see the rest of you tomorrow, spoke Nezu, addressing the two pro heroes. Thanks, boss. Good night. Come on, partner, place ain't gonna protect itself, spoke Snipe in his thick accent. Eraserhead just grumbled and stood with his colleague. Both left to begin their patrol of the school. Good night, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow, spoke Cementos with a small bow. I'll double check to make sure the security system is all set before I head, spoke Powerloader. I'll be checking on Midoriya before I go home. Sleep well, everyone, spoke Recovery Girl as she left to head for her office. I have some patrolling I need to do in the city before I finish for today, explained Ectoplasm. I'll go with you. I promised I'd cover Eraserhead's normal patrol, spoke Present Mike, speaking way too loud. Good night, spoke All Might, internally dreading the fact Gran Torino wanted to talk to him in person tomorrow. Nezu turned his attention to his brother. Andy, when will your flight be arriving at the airport? Asked Nezu. I should be arriving early in the morning. I'll take a taxi and should be on campus before noon at the earliest, answered Andy. You don't need to take a taxi. I can pick you up, offered Midnight, a smirk on her face. Thank you, Nimiri, I owe you one, responded Andy with a tired but genuine smile. Oh, then I have a few ideas on how you can repay me, spoke Midnight in a sultry and teasing tone. Andy used to Nimiri's teasing and hide his reaction well, but the subtle hint to his flustered feelings was apparent to her. We can negotiate on our drive back. Good night, Nimiri, Nezu, responded Andy in a hurry but tone calm, before he terminated the call from his end. Midnight, clearly still amused at the interaction, pulled out her phone to send a text as she stood to follow Nezu out of the room. Now what do you have brewing? Questioned Nezu, seeing the scheming look Midnight was giving her phone. The heroine simply showed her boss who she was texting. Nezu immediately began laughing maniacally for a moment, knowing exactly what she was up to and laughing at his brother's future misfortune. Well then, I'll leave my brother in your capable hands. Just be sure he's in one piece when you arrive. I'll see you tomorrow and be sure to get some sleep, spoke Nezu, chuckling as they parted ways. 30 UA nurse's office, late Tuesday morning. 30. Sunlight poured in through the infirmary's windows. Izuku stirred from his sleep. His eyes slowly opened. At first, he was confused as to where he was, but he quickly realized his location when the smell of disinfectant made himself known. The student yawned, surprised that he was mostly pain-free, but he couldn't properly stretch due to the bandages and casts. Good morning. How are you feeling? Spoke Recovery Girl as she hopped off her chair and approached him. Good morning, Recovery Girl. I have some aches and slight pain, but I feel great for the most part, replied Izuku as he sat up with a smile. That's good. I'll give you a once-over and see if we can get you out of those casts, spoke Recovery Girl as she began to examine Izuku. It didn't take the school nurse long to determine that Izuku was well enough to be released. The heroine expertly removed the bandages and casts on his body. Just as the last of the bandages were being removed, the infirmary door opened and Hound Dog stepped in. Midoriya, you have a visitor, spoke the canine hero before a green blur rushed into the room and seized Izuku in a hug only a mother or a bear could give. Izuku, my baby, I was so worried about you. Are you okay? Spoke Inko, her tears soaking the bed as she frantically checks over her son. Mom, responded Izuku, surprised and a bit embarrassed by the sudden embrace, but he returned it all the same. Recovery Girl cleared her throat, getting the small family's attention. Izuku is nearly completely recovered. He just needs to take it easy for a day or two. I'd also recommend a hearty meal to properly recover from my quick side effects, informed Recovery Girl professionally. I've got just the thing for that, responded Inko, whipping her eyes and smiling brightly, before pulling out several Tupperware containers from the bag that hung from her shoulder. When the school called me and told me that you were injured, I was going to rush right over, but Principal Nezu said you were already asleep and that the press was swarming the school's entrance, pestering parents picking up the students. He said it would be best to come in the morning so one of the faculty could escort me to prevent the press from swarming me when I tried to enter. So I ended up cooking your favorites since I figured you'd be hungry when you woke up, spoke Inko, mutters in a similar way to how her son did as she presented the food. The other 3 occupants of the room stared at the sheer amount of food the women had brought. I may have made too much, since I was so worried, spoke Inko in embarrassment as she looked at enough food to easily feed half a dozen people. The heroes were wonder how she fit so much in the relatively small bag. That's fine, Mom. Maybe we can share some with my dormmates, proposed Izuku, already spotting some of his favorite foods. That's a good idea, honey. It'd be nice to meet your friends before Parents' Day. We can go home after you all have finished eating, spoke Inko as she quickly started putting away the food. Actually, Mom, I'd like to stay in the dorms, if that's okay, asked Izuku as he got off the bed and stretched out. Inko hesitated. Only after a long pause did she respond. Okay, you can stay, responded Inko, clearly not thrilled but accepting his decision. The mother then turned to the school nurse. Thank you for taking care of my son, spoke Inko, bowing to Recovery Girl in appreciation. Izuku mirrored his mother and also gave his thanks. You're welcome. I hope your boy doesn't have to be brought here again anytime soon, responded the elderly heroine kindly. Mr. Hound Dog, will you be joining us? Inquired Inko as she and Izuku followed the hero out of the infirmary. Sorry, I can't. I have some work that needs doing. Izuku, be sure to escort her to the gate when she plans to leave and come to my office tomorrow when you have some free time, spoke Hound Dog. Yes, Hound Dog Sensei, spoke Izuku, acknowledging his teacher's request. The small green-haired family of two parted ways from Hound Dog, Izuku leading the way to his dorm. 30 Tokyo International Airport, Tuesday 30. The vice principal of UA stepped out of the airport's main exit. He was surrounded by a veritable river of people moving all over the place, some meeting family, others hailing taxis, others that moved toward buses, and staff moving between tasks. The pro hero had traveled very light, having everything he needs spilt between a single suitcase and a large backpack. The hero's eyes searched the area hoping to spot Nimura or one of the school's cars. When his search proved fruitless, he unslung his backpack and opened it. He pulled out a metal figure of a sleeping wyvern roughly the size of his hand. The figure, despite clearly being old, was in great condition. Sparing a moment to appreciate the old gift, Andy looked inward, activating his quick. His hands glowed for a moment, and Andy felt the sliver of energy his quirk needed to animate the object. He smiled as the figure's texture shifted, becoming more lifelike, its chest beginning to rise as it inhales and its eyes open. It stood up on its two legs, stretching its wings out. It opened its mouth in a big yawn as if waking from a long sleep, a small plume of flame materializing out of its open mouth briefly before the fire died. Wow, whispered a young voice in wonder. The hero and the toy both turned to see a small child holding into her mother's hand while staring wide-eyed at the toy come to life. The mother, on the other hand, was more focused on him, probably recognizing him. He gave the two civilians a smile, and with a simple thought, the living toy took flight. The toy flew above the unsuspecting crowd, while easily avoiding any obstacles in its path. Andy placed his backpack back on and patiently waited for the toy to find his ride. He only had to wait 5 minutes before it returned, perching itself on one of his shoulders. It let out a happy chirp reminiscent of a baby crocodile. With another mental command sent to his creature, it flew off his shoulders and he followed after it, maneuvering through the crowd. The scaled creature proceeds to land on the hood of an SUV with tinted windows, parked in between several tucks. He immediately recognized it as one of the school's vehicles. Andy didn't break his stride toward the car, even when the driver door opened and Nimuri stepped out wearing tight black pants, flats, a simple blouse, and her hair pulled up in a bun. But he wasn't expecting the passenger doors to open, and he froze the moment he spotted the two blondes. He watched the Ryukos step out of the car. Tsuchikawa was wearing a dress that reached past her knees and heels. Tatsuma wore a hoodie, jeans, and a pair of boots. Hi, senpai, it's been a while, spoke Tatsuma with a gentle smile as she approached, scooping up the living toy as she passed. Far too long, this kitty cat missed you so much, spoke Tsuchikawa as she essentially pounced on one of his arms, pressing herself against his free arm. So about that favor, let's negotiate, spoke Nimuri in a suggestive tone as she ran a hand along his jaw. At that moment, a single thought dominated his mind. At that one moment, I'm in danger, thought Andy with a nervous chuckle as he was practically dragged into the car. XXX Class 1B dorms, noon 30. When Izuku and his mother entered the dorms, it didn't take long for some of his classmates to come to the common room. Yanagi, Pony, Setsuna, and Camy were happy to see their class rep. Izu, you're back. It's good to see you're okay, called out Pony as she pulls the boy into a very tight hug, instantly making him blush but also making it hard for him to breathe. Thanks, but Pony, could you put me down? Squeaked out Izuku, tapping Pony's arm as a sign to tap out. Pony immediately complied, placing him down. It is a relief to witnesses that you are well enough to be released, commented Yanagi, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Good to see you all patched up. You had us worried about you, Prez, commented Setsuna, wrapping an arm around him. Hey, fam, who's the lady? Asked Camy. Izuku saw the amused look his mother was giving him and the blush on his face grew darker, quickly breaking free from Setsuna's hold. So guys, I'd like you to meet my mother. Mom, these are Pony, Setsuna, Yanagi, and Camy. They are some of my classmates, spoke Izuku, introducing the girls, who seemed to perk up at meeting Izuku's mom. Hello, I'm Inko Midoriya. It's nice to meet friends of my Izuku. I brought some food if you'd like some, spoke Inko with a smile and a powerful maternal aura as she starts to unpack the food she brought. This stuff looks like it slaps, I'm in, spoke Camy to a slightly confused Inko. Nice to meet the mom of the class, cinnamon roll. Plus we were coming down here to make something to eat, said Setsuna with a toothy grin. Izuku blushed at Setsuna's teasing, and his blush doubled down when the other girls agreed with the nickname. His mom seemed far too happy at that statement. Wonderful, I'll just take a moment to reheat this, spoke Inko happy, but before she could grab the Tupperware, it started to float above the table. Please allow me to assist you in reheating the food, spoke Yanagi politely as she used her quirk to float the food into the kitchen. Thank you, dear. Izuku didn't mention one of his classmates had a telekinetic quirk, responded Inko, impressed by Yanagi's control. I'll help too. I'm really curious about what Izuku was like when he was younger, added Setsuna, leading Inko into the kitchen but not before throwing a mischievous grin at Izuku. Let's see if I can learn more about that angry Pomeranian, thought Setsuna, eager to discover if her and Kendo's suspicions were correct. Izuku and the others were relegated to setting the table and waiting. He was such an excitable one, always full of energy, so sweet and well-mannered, began Inko, clearly happy to talk about her son. Yanagi quietly listened, curious about the boy she liked. Inko turned on the stove. So he's always been a cinnamon roll. He must have had loads of friends, commented Setsuna while she grabbed the needed pots and pans. Inko seemed to deflate at the statement. He did for a time, but after the other kids' quirks came in, they treated him differently. Katsuki was the only one left, spoke Inko in a melancholic manner. The name caused both Yanagi and Setsuna to still. Katsuki, as in Bakugo blonde hair explosion quirk, questioned Setsuna, not believing for a second that the arrogant and anger blonde, who attacked them for no good reason, was anything close to a friend to Izuku. Yes, that's him. He and Izuku have been attending the same school since they were in preschool. His mother and I have been friends since middle school. Do you know him? Spoke Inko, ignorant of her pseudo-nephew's true relationship with her son. We are familiar with him, he started Yanagi, her tone clearly agitated, and most likely about to mention the incident from the cafeteria, only for Setsuna to cover her mouth. Is actually as part of Class A. We meet him the first day of classes. He's a little much, spoke Setsuna in what she hoped was a conveying polite tune. Setsuna made eye contact with Yanagi, mouthed the words, "Don't, we'll talk later. He can be a little loud, but he is a good kid. But let's go serve the food," spoke Inko with a smile as she begins to plate the food. XXX many hours of embarrassing girl talk later. Roman 20x. Izuku was certain that if it was possible to die of embarrassment, then he was moments away from dying. Setsuna had gotten his mom to start telling more stories about when he was younger. The other girls encouraged Inko. Thankfully for Izuku, he got a small reprieve when his mom started asking questions about the girls and Yue in general. But the embarrassment returned full force when Pony had asked if Inko had any pictures of Izuku when he was little, which prompted Inko to take out her phone and start flipping through the digital album that Izuku had compiled for Mother's Day years back. The other boys had not come to help him when they came down to the common room. Kaibara and Tsubiraba both politely declined the offer of food, both of them stating they had plans to eat off campus, while Ren had taken some food but returned to his dorm to continue a video call he was having with his parents. Oh, here's a picture of him a little before he was 4. He loved to rescue me from bad guys, in that outfit. He was always so full of energy, spoke Inko, fondly showing a picture of a little Izuku in an All Might onesies. OMG, that is so sweet, I think it gave me a cavity, gushed Camy, her hands on her cheeks. He's so cute, spoke Pony, wishing she had a copy of the photo. Ms. Midori, are you alright? Questioned Yanagi, noticing the mother sniffle quietly. Oh, nothing, it's just nice to see Izuku have so many friends, especially a bunch of nice girls like you, spoke Inko, smiling but quickly rubbing her eyes to prevent herself from tearing up. MMMOOM, spoke Izuku, clearly embarrassed but more so tearing up along with his mother. But before the female students could be witness to the Midoriya family, tears flood the common room. Cough, excuse me, interrupted All Might in his skeletal form wearing his baggy yellow suit. Not to sound rude, but who are you? Questioned Setsuna in a semi-serious tone, understandable, a little suspicious since she and her class were attacked the day before. Yes, I am Toshinori Yagi and I act as an assistant teacher here at UA. I also double as a substitute when needed, spoke Toshi, explaining his secret ID's cover story. It is nice to meet another member of the UA faculty, Toshinori-sensei. What business do you here? Questioned Yanagi politely. I was told to inform that visiting hours will be ending soon and that I will be escorting her home today, informed Toshi. At his words, the group looked at the clock hanging on one of the common room's walls to see the time. Oh dear, it's much later than I thought. I think I'll head home. It was a pleasure meeting you girls. I look forward to seeing you in action on Parents' Day, spoke Inko sweetly. Goodbye, Ms. Midoriya. I look forward to our next encounter, spoke Yanagi in her normal tone. Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Midoriya, added Setsuna with a smirk, before she and Yanagi slipped away to have a private conversion. Thanks for the food, it was mad dope. Till next time, thanked Camy as she started to collect the empty plates to clean. We'll show you what we can do on Friday, spoke Pony, excited to show her stuff to her crush's mom. I'll walk you to the entrance, Mom, spoke Izuku, standing from the table. In that case, I'll get the car and bring it to the entrance, spoke Toshi with a nod as he slipped out of the building. Thank you, dear, spoke Inko as she made sure she wasn't leaving anything behind. Izu, wanna watch more anime with me and Yanagi when you come back? Asked Pony quietly in English. Sure, Pony, I'd like that, responded Izuku with a smile as he stepped out of the building with his mother. Pony excitedly rushed upstairs to make sure everything was ready, her hoof falls echoing through the common room as she eagerly entered the elevator. XXX. Yanagi took a moment to appreciate the dorm's small courtyard and garden, while Setsuna ensured their conversion wouldn't be eavesdropped on. Once Setsuna was sure, she turned to Yanagi. So as you know, Bakugo is an asshole, spoke Setsuna as if stating a fact. That is quite self-evident. What confuses me is why you prevent me from informing his mother of the incident, asked Yanagi, brow raised. Well, Kendo and I think that he possibly bullied Izuku since Izuku was a late bloomer, started Setsuna before Yanagi cut in. That would not surprise me in the least. The brute appears the sort to judge others' worth entirely on their quirks. If Izuku's quirk didn't come until the exam, he'd be a prime target for abuse, which explains why he referred to Izuku as Deku, spoke Yanagi, the agitation clear in her tone. That was our guess, but Izuku started to defend the guy and make excuses for his actions in the cafe. We want Izuku to realize that he shouldn't defend the bastard, spoke Setsuna, also angry at Bakugo. Which is why you inquired about his upbringing, spoke Yanagi in realization. Exactly, we wanted more info before talking to Izuku about it. Now we know that this has mostly been going on for years and that Bakugo made sure to keep him isolated, spoke Setsuna, outlining what they learned. This also may explain Izuku's skittish nature and stutter, added Yanagi. Man, this school should require a psychic evaluation or something before accepting students. I'll call Kendo and let her know what I found out. When we talk to Izuku, do you want to help? Spoke Setsuna, pulling out her cell phone. Yes, I desire to assist you in throwing off this burden of his past. I do not wish for Izuku to be tied down with this weight, spoke Yanagi, agreeing to help. Talk to Izuku. 30 Villain Hideout, unknown location 30. All for one sat on his throne. The room was dark, with only the light of half a dozen monitors casting light. The chatter of the newscasters discussing the USJ attack drowned out the beeps and winds of the numerous medical machines that were keeping him alive. The ancient villain was contemplating the aftermath of Tamura's plan. He knew actually killing All Might during the attack was unlikely, but was still a possibility. So he was not disappointed when his apprentice returned without All Might's head. He had not expected Tamura to return so injured or for Nomu to be defeated by a child and captured. However, despite all that, he still considered the event a success as he watches the media question UAS competency. All for one turned his head slightly to look at a spot in the room. Not even a moment later, a warp gate appeared in the spot. Out of the portal stepped out Dr. Kyudai Garaki, his personal physician, before Kurogiri, his loyal servant, appeared from the warp gate. What is the diagnosis, doctor? Asked All for One as he turned back to the monitors. He has severe burns on his chest and one of his arms. He's having issues with moving the arm, and breathing causes some pain. He has several puncture wounds on his palms, arms, and torso, and a large stab wound to his shoulder. He will be out of commission for several weeks at least. But there is something strange about his wounds, spoke Dr. Kyudai, clearly not caring that Shigaraki was injured. Strange? Explain, ordered All for One, mid-tone authority. The inures that came from this lighting attack that Kurogiri told us about don't seem to be healing properly despite my best efforts. They will scar and they will lower Tamura's combat effectiveness, informed Dr. Kyudai Garaki, intrigued by the situation. Unfortunate. Kurogiri, what do we know about the child that caused this? Spoke All for One. The mist villain bowed in respect before stepping forward. The student's name is Izuku Midoriya. His quirk is called tactile telekinesis, and although powerful, has a severe backlash that damages the user, spoke Kurogiri, going over what information they had on the boy. Is that all? Questioned Dr. Kyudai. Yes, our informant deemed the boy a non-threat due to the severity of the backlash and the meek nature of the bearer, so chose to get more information on the stronger students, answered Kurogiri, glancing at the doctor. Have him focus his efforts on this Midoriya. I'd like more information on how his quirk works. Now leave, ordered All for One, dismissing the two with a wave. As you wish, responded Kurogiri with a bow, warping him and the doctor away. All for One refocused his attention on the science, already adjusting his plans to account for this possible troublemaker. XXX. Later that night in the dorms. XXX. When Izuku returned to the dorms, he was eager to hang out with Pony and Yanagi. He was curious to see what would happen next in the anime they watched last time. But he was slightly confused to find the two girls in their pajamas and slippers waiting for him in front of his room, and his face grew flush at seeing Yanagi in a large black t-shirt that contrasted well with her pale skin. The shirt ended around her knees. Pony herself was in a spaghetti strap and pajama pants, but the fact her hair was pulled back showing her horse-like ears was a cute look in Izuku's opinion. Izu, we thought it would be best to hang out in your room this time, spoke Pony, holding all she needed to stream the anime like last time. Yes sure Pony, that sounds fine, responded Izuku as he averted his gaze from Pony, because her top did little to conceal her cleavage. Izuku unlocked and entered his room, the two girls slipping in behind him. Pony happily starting setting up while Yanagi placed snacks and drinks down. Izuku was still self-conscious about his room, but the two heroines didn't seem to mind. Once everything was ready, the two girls sat down on his bed, propping some of his pillows against the wall as a makeshift backrest. Izuku was placed right in between the two girls. The three were only 3 episodes in before they started to cheer, comment, and laugh at the screen. Hours flew by as the three enjoyed themselves. But once the final episode of the arc they were on started, Pony sent a subtle signal to Yanagi, causing both girls to move to the next step. Pony proceeded to cuddle up to Izuku's side, while Yanagi took hold of his hand and leaned her head on his shoulder. Izuku's heart started racing and internally he was panicking. He barely notices when the credits started to roll and Yanagi used her quirk to turn on the light. Well, that was a good arc, commented Izuku, trying to calm himself down. But instead of answering, both girls pulled away and faced him together. Izu, we have something we want to tell you, spoke Pony, her tone nervous. This confused Izuku, especially when he noticed Pony blushing. And even, okay, what did you want to tell me? Responded Izuku, his confusion growing after seeing a large blush on the normally stoic Yanagi. The girl looked at each other for a moment, nodding at each other before turning to him once again. Izu, I like you. Divided by Izuku, I am fond of you. Please go out with us, spoke both Yanagi and Pony at the same time. Izuku's eyes widened as he processed their words, and then he reacted in the similar manner his mother did when she was given shocking news. Izuku's eyes rolled back into his head as he promptly fainted. Izuku, called out the girls as the teen's body collapsing onto his bed. Izuku slowly came back to consciousness. The first sensations he felt were that of the best pillow he'd ever laid his head on and the feeling of soft fingers running through his curly hair. The latter feeling imminently had Izuku snapping his eyes open to see what was going on, only to be staring directly into Yanagi's blue eyes. The strange part was she was upside down from Izuku's perspective. Ah, you have awakened, spoke Yanagi with a small smile as she looks into his eyes. Yeah, you're awake, Izu. I was worried when you fainted, commented Pony, who popped into his field of view. Izuku rapidly realized that he was being given a lap pillow on his bed by Yanagi. Before Izuku could freak out or faint again, Yanagi rested one of her hands on his cheek. Please remain calm and attempt not to faint again. We wish to discuss much with you, spoke Yanagi. Her tone, along with the calming effect she had on Izuku, kept the green-haired teen from fainting again. But it did not stop his face from gaining a massive blush for not only his position, but also remembering what caused him to faint in the first place. Oh, okay, I'll try. But can I sit up, please? Asked Izuku. After a moment and a slightly disappointed look on her face, Yanagi nodded in acceptance, allowing Izuku to sit up and move a bit away from the two girls. The three teens sat in awkward silence for several moments as Izuku thought about how to proceed. So did you mean what you said? Asked Izuku, quietly glancing between the two girls. Yes, I meant what I said. I like you a lot, replied Pony, twiddling her fingers with a blush on her face. I was genuine in my statement. I fancy you quite a lot, responded Yanagi, her tone laced with affection. And you both wanted to date me at the same time? Questioned Izuku, having a hard time believing that this situation was really happening. That is correct. We discussed this at length and agreed that we both wished to pursue a romantic relationship with you. Thus our simultaneous confessions. Answer Yanagi. Izuku looked down and away from the girls as he was having a hard believing that one girl would want to date him, let alone two. But why me? You two are so amazing and beautiful, and I'm just a Deku. What could you possibly see in me that was worth dating, let alone sharing? Questioned Izuku. Pony gently took one of his hands in her own and gave it a squeeze, making Izuku look her in the eyes. Izu, there's a lot of reasons why I like you. You jumped in to save me during the entrance exam even though your quirk hadn't manifested. You helped me with my Japanese. You are sweet and kind, yet strong and determined. I find it cute how you get all shy when I hug you, or when you start to mutter, and of course I find you hot, especially with your muscles, spoke Pony with affection and honesty clear in her voice. Izuku blushed and struggled to find a response, but Ryuko began to speak before he could even stutter. I find many of your traits desirable. You are brave, polite, empathetic, intelligent, and I also find your enthusiasm for heroes and quirks quite adorable. You are not a Deku. Do not believe any of that drivel which comes from that brute's mouth, added Ryuko, gently placing her hand atop his free one. Izuku glanced between the two girls, unable to find any deceit in their words. He felt another squeeze from Pony. Izu, that's the word that the mean explosion man used. What does Deku mean? Asked Pony in a gentle tone, clearly understanding it as some form of insult but wanting clarification. Izuku hesitated to answer, but it didn't matter as Yanagi responded before Izuku could muster the courage. It is an alternate way of reading his name. It basically means useless person, explained Yanagi, not using her normal verbose way of speaking. The horse girl only needed a moment to process her friend's explanation. The American quickly pulled Izuku into a strong hug. The boy's nose was assaulted by the scent of Pony's cinnamon soap. Oh, Izu, you are not useless. Don't listen to that asshole, exclaimed Pony in English, not caring that she basically was pressing the boy's head right into her bust. Yanagi also joined the hug, whispering comforting words into Izuku's ear. The three students in their emotional state had forgotten that Izuku had a neighbor and that they would be able to hear the loud conversation they were having. They really do care, thought Izuku, finally convinced. The green-haired boy returned the hug with the girls. The hug lasted several moments and warmed Izuku's chest. Izuku, I do not wish to place undue pressure on you, but if possible may we have a reply to our confession? spoke Yanagi, breaking the quiet moment in the group hug. I have never had a girlfriend before, let alone two, so I am inexperienced with relationships. But I'll try my hardest to make you both happy. I accept your feelings, spoke Izuku with conviction in his voice and a smilier look to his hero mode on his face. Yeah, he said yes, yelled Pony in English, practically vibrating with joy. I'll be in your care, whispered Yanagi to Izuku, grabbing his hand and interlaced her fingers with his, after which she gave him a peck on the cheek, causing him to blush. Ryuko, let's go on a date tomorrow, spoke Pony excitedly as she took hold of Izuku's free arm. Oh okay Pony, did you have something in mind? Asked Izuku. Pony thought over their options before replying. Well, what about a picnic tomorrow? I found a really nice spot along the path I run for training. We could also watch some movies in the afternoon and cuddle. Plus I thought it would be best to stay on campus, proposed Pony, looking for the opinions of her companions. That sounds like a great idea Pony, responded Izuku. This is going to be my first date, thought Izuku, equal part excited and anxious. I agree with this proposal. I can prepare the food, spoke Yanagi, already playing out what she would make. Are you sure Yanagi? I can help with the food, asked Izuku, only for Yanagi to shake her head in the negative. Please, you may refer to me by my first name as you do with Pony. I am sure I require no assistance. I wish to show off my domestic skill in the creation of delicious cuisine in order to impress you, spoke Ryuko bluntly as she looked straight at him. Oh okay Ryuko, I'll leave it to you, responded Izuku, blushing a bit for using her first name in her words. Oh, I can't wait for our first date, gushed Pony, giggling in excitement. Setsuna quietly moved her disembodied ear away from the wall between her and Izuku's room. A hurricane of emotions and thoughts swirled in her mind. She was not certain how to react to the information she had just heard. Setsuna leaned back in her desk chair, hand over her face, and thought. So Izuku's relationship. Good, it should help him with his confidence, thought Setsuna, genuinely hoping it would boost the nervous boy's self-esteem and confidence. But her heart also tightened a bit. But where does that leave me, and why do I feel jealous of them? Can I date him too? The girls are both dating him at the same time, so maybe. Do I even want to join or share for the matter? Would they even let me join in if I asked? And what if they say no, they don't want to share with anyone else? Would they want me to stop teasing Izuku? Are they going to hide the relationship or be open and blunt about it? Thought Setsuna, her forehead hitting her desk in frustration. Setsuna thought of herself as quick-thinking and decisive, but she was currently drawing a blank on all fronts, leaving her with only one option left. She needed advice. She immediately eliminates talking to most of her classmates. She could ask Kendo. Nothing builds trust like being through a life and death situation together. But Setsuna didn't want to spill the beans about this to a classmate in case Izuku, Ryuko, and Pony planned to keep their relationship low-key. Plus, she suspected Kendo of also having something for the shy boy. So this left her with a single option. She pulled out her phone and dialed. The phone only rang twice before it was picked up. Hello, sweetie. How's my little kaiju doing? Spoke a woman's voice in a kind tone. Hi, Mum. Listen, I need some advice, spoke Setsuna in a tone that coveted her troubled mind. Sure, I'm all ears, responded Setsuna, mother, her tone reassuring. 30 Wednesday 10:30 a.m. 30. Izuku was a nervous wreck from the moment he woke up. He had hoped his early morning workout would have helped, but even after he had finished, his nerves were still wound tight like a spring. He took a much longer shower than normal, trying to calm himself down. Currently, Izuku stood in his room trying to figure out what he should wear. This was his first date ever and he had no experience in what to do. He considered calling his mother to ask her, but he knew she would either faint if he told her he was going on a date or ask a lot of questions that he wasn't ready to answer. So Izuku gave a call to the only other adult he thought could give him good advice in this situation, because they no doubt had ample experience with dates. Hello, young Midoriya, how are you? Questioned All Might, secretly thanking his student for interrupting Gran Torino's lecture. I am doing all right, but I need some advice about something, if that's okay, asked Izuku nervously. Of course it's okay. What kind of advice? Responded All Might, eager to make up for his poor performance as a mentor up to this point. Well, hypothetical speaking, what should one wear on a date? Asked Izuku, much like a son would ask his father. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he'd have a question about one for all. I haven't been on a date in years, thought All Might, surprised at the question and also easily seeing through Izuku's hypothetical excuse. All Might was determined to give the best advice he could. I need a little more information, young Midoriya. What will this hypothetical date be? Asked All Might, playing along with the boy's thin facade. It's a picnic, on a path on campus, answered Izuku, thinking that his lie worked. In that case, I'd say something more casual, long pants, jeans or something along those lines. With a color button-up shirt, a flannel shirt would also work well. I'd also roll up the sleeves or wear one with short shelves to show off your arms a little. You've worked hard on your physique, so take some pride in it, spoke All Might, slipping into Big Might near the end of his advice. Okay, got it. Thank you so much, All Might, I appreciate it. I hope the girls like it, spoke Izuku quickly as he quickly started looking for what clothes match his mentor's advice, not realizing his slip. Anytime, young Midoriya. I wish you luck with your hypothetical, but I must go now, spoke All Might with a chuckle at the kid's enthusiasm. Okay, bye All Might, responded Izuku before he hung up. All Might chuckled at the boy's antics before picking up on an important detail. Wait, did he say girls? Thought All Might, only for his train of thought to be violently derailed when he received a kick to the face. Enough with the phone. I'm not done beating some sense into you yet, yelled Gran Torino as he landed on top of All Might's coffee table, breaking it in half. XXX with Izuku a few minutes later. Roman 20X. Izuku felt much better in the black and green flannel shirt and blue jeans as he made his way down to the common room. He even did as his mentor advised and rolled up the shelves to show more of his arms, and it only made him a little self-conscious. Once he entered the kitchen, he quickly spotted several sandwiches, utensils, fresh fruit, and several side dishes floating into a large basket. He could see Ryuko standing at the counter wearing a black sweater and gray jeans that hugged her legs. Izuku froze in place, a large blush on his face as his new girlfriend subtly hummed a song to herself, her body moving to the beat of a song Izuku could barely remember hearing before. Her movements were causing Izuku to focus his full attention on her butt as it moved in an almost hypnotic way. The moment broke when Ryuko started to turn around. Izuku quickly snapped his gaze to her face, hoping she didn't catch him looking. However, a small subtle smirk graced her lips when she met his gaze, dashing his hopes. But she didn't seem anger, quite the opposite in fact. Greetings Izuku, I must say find your current appearance to be quite handsome, greeted Ryuko as she used her quirk to move the last of the food into the basket. Hey, Ryuko. Thanks, you look just, wow, spoke Izuku, scratching the back of his neck in nervousness. A light dusting of red appeared on the gray-haired girl's cheeks as she closed the top of the basket and placed a picnic blanket on top. I am elated that my current appearance has left you at a loss for words. I am also quite pleased that I garnered such intense focus from you, spoke Yanagi with a knowing smile as she approached him. The boy smiled back with a blush on his face as Ryuko gave him a quick hug. I have finished with the food, Pony's parents called her a short while ago. We will set off for our romantic rendezvous upon her return, continued Ryuko. Izuku could tell that Ryuko was excited by the way her hands moved around. The sound of hooves on wood made Izuku turn around just in time for Pony to jump into his arms. Izu, are you ready for our date? I could barely sleep, I was so excited, spoke Pony as wrapped her arms around his neck. Yes, I am Pony, answered Izuku as Pony let go of him and back away, and for the second time today, Izuku's mind became completely focused on the sight before him. Well, what do you think? Asked Pony, doing a quick spin to show off the blue sundress she was wearing. It went all the way down past her knees. A large sun hat on her head had holes for her horns. Her hair was pulled back, placing her horse-like ears on full display. Why, you look really cute, responded Izuku, his face red from embarrassment. But it was totally worth the radiant smile Pony gave him for his words. Thanks, Izu, responded Pony with a cute giggle. I believe that we should depart for our romantic outing. Pony, would you kindly lead the way? Spoke Ryuko, picking up the full basket. Sure, let's go. It's not too far, responded Pony, happily leading them out of the house and onto the nearby running trail leading into the wooded area of campus. The trail was well maintained and large enough for 4 people to run side by side. Hinagi linked one of her arms with Izuku's as they walked, basket in her other arm. Pony was skipping down the trail, visibly elated. Yanagi could see that Izuku was still nervous, but she was happy to see he was calming down and getting more comfortable. A content sigh slipped past her lips as a gentle breeze rustled the trees and a chorus of birds sang. Izuku took a deep breath, enjoying the fresh forest air as the trail curved to the left. Pony, who was leading the way, looked over her shoulder at them. We are here, stated Pony before she vanished from their line of sight in the curve's bend. Izuku and Ryuko picked up the pace to catch up to Pony. The trail itself continued in a straight line for a while before it curved to the left again. However, to the right of the trail was a clearing, the grass was cut short, and the clearing bordered a pond. The clearing had several picnic tables dotted around and even some spots for barbecuing. This location is lovely, it is a great site for our meal, commented Ryuko as she detached herself from Izuku and began to set up one of the tables for their meal. Thanks, I thought it'd be a good spot. I like to run this trial for my morning jog, spoke Pony happily. Pony, I also have a morning workout. Would you like to? Started Izuku, nervous and unsure if he was overstepping, but was interrupted when Pony spoke up. I'd love to go on morning runs together. Just be sure to keep up, spoke Pony, a small competitive fire in her eyes that reminded Izuku of the endurance run of the assessment test. I should be saying that to you, replied Izuku, who despite the stutter head is on competitive fire. I do believe that can wait. Let us eat, interrupted Ryuko from the table where the food was spread, ready to eat. Izuku and Pony did not need any more prompting as they both sat down, and with a quick thanks to Ryuko for making the food, the 3 students dug in. Would it be okay if we got to know each other a little better? But only if you guys want, proposed Izuku after several minutes of, at least for him, awkward silence. That's a great idea, but where should we start? Asked Pony in between bites of her sandwich. How about hobbies? Or maybe a little about where we grew up, spoke Izuku, proposing a starting point. For instance, I grew up here in Musutafu, just me and my mom. I enjoy everything revolving around heroes and I like video games, spoke Izuku, starting off the topic. Pony immediately jumped in once he concluded. Well, I'm from the US, but more specifically I am from Texas. My family has this big ranch that we live and work on. It's pretty big, which is nice cause besides my mom and dad, I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers. My older sister is even a hero. I'm a big fan of action movies, comic books, and anime," spoke Pony enthusiastically, accidentally slipping back into English. "It sounds like your home can become quite chaotic, with so many siblings," commented Ryako as she poured herself some tea from a thermos. "Yeah, it does, especially when my brothers get rowdy or start a prank war. But I love my family, they're the ones that pushed me to try for UA," spoke Pony as she did her best not to mess up any of the words. "Why UA though? America has some of the best hero schools in the world," asked Izuku, curious. Pony blushed, a little embarrassed. "Well, when I was little, I was taken hostage during a bank robbery. But before I knew it, All Might showed up and saved me. This was back when he was a new hero and traveling all over the states. It inspired me to be a hero, and ever since then I've wanted to go to the same hero school he went to," explained Pony, a little embarrassed by her reasoning. "That makes sense. I've wanted to be a hero ever since I understood what they were. Living so close to UA, I always dreamed of attending here where so many great heroes were taught," admitted Izuku, before he and Pony looked at Ryako. "I dwell in Thaifa, a city's backed ward. My parents both work at the hospital there. They have been utilizing their quirks to help people since before I was born, and I wish to do similar. But I desired to prevent people from getting injured in the first place. So I began training to be a hero. As for activities I enjoy partaking in, I am quite fond of computer strategy games, as well as the supernatural and horror genres in general. Games, novels, movies, and shows, I find them all enjoyable. I even used to babysit to gather funds to fuel these interests," spoke Ryako, eloquently informing the 2 more about herself. "I don't really know or watch horror movies. Do you have any favorites?" asked Pony. The look Ryako gave was a little frightening as she began to detail some of her favorite horror movies. The conversation flowed naturally from there, jumping from movies to heroes, to quirks to games. The 3 teens happily ate all of the food. By the time they had finished the food, noon had already come and gone. Pony and Izuku both cleaned off the table and placed the blanket and tableware back into the basket. "Pony, I do believe it is your turn to walk with Izuku as we agreed," commented Ryako as she grabbed the basket. "Yeah," replied Pony with a cheer. She happily latched onto her boyfriend's arm. The feeling of Pony's breasts on his arm made Izuku's face burst into a bright red blush. Ryako made a sound that might have been mistaken for a quiet giggle, but Izuku could not be sure as his brain was having difficulty forming coherent thoughts. Ryako began to walk back toward the dorms, and Pony was able to get Izuku walking as they fell in step behind the ghostly girl. Izuku was having a hard time focusing between Pony's body press against his side and Ryako's swaying hips in front of him. Within the spaghetti of thoughts in his head, 2 things became clear to Izuku. 1, he was astonished that he hadn't fainted yet, and 2, his girlfriends may give him a heart attack one day. In an effort to distract himself, he turned his gaze to Pony and asked a question that has been on his mind since school started. Pony, I wanted to ask you something," spoke Izuku. The horse girl looked at him, waiting for him to ask his question. "Why do you hide your ears with your hair?" asked Izuku, tentative. The smile on Pony's face dropped at the question and she stopped walking. "Pony, are you okay? I'm sorry for asking." "You don't have to answer," questioned Izuku in concern, slight panic, and a little guilt for causing this state. Ryako also stopped and approached. "No, it's okay. I was bullied in my old middle school. There weren't a lot of people with mutant quirks like mine. So I was picked on. They made fun of the way I look, saying I was a cow," spoke Pony, her hand clutching her dress. Izuku recalled how Pony was crying after Bakugo called her cowdits in the cafeteria the other day. A feeling bubbled in Izuku's chest at the thought. But before he could dwell on the feeling, Pony continued. "They like to pull on my ears and call them ugly. One day they even," spoke Pony, who instead of continuing quietly approached Izuku and gestured to one of her ears. Izuku moved in for a closer look and he noticed a faint patch of scar tissue in a circular pattern near the end of her ear. It didn't take Izuku long to put the pieces together. Izuku swore he felt some of his own scars throb with phantom pain. He imminently felt a sense of kinship with Pony, understanding what she might have through. "Well, I think your ears are really cute. I find everything about you cute," spoke Izuku in a sincere tone. In a rare moment of assertiveness, he took a gentle hold of her ear and gave it a soft kiss. His action causes Pony to let out a small leap in surprise and a blush at his display of affection. Izuku followed that up by pulling her into a hug. It took a few moments for Pony to process what just happened, but when she did, she returned the hug. "Thanks, Izu. I should be over it by now, especially after my brothers beat them up and my folks talked to the school. But it still hurts, you know," spoke Pony, tightening the hug. Ryako patted Pony's back in silent support. "Yeah, I know. Come on, Pony, let's head back to the dorms. We can watch more of that pirate anime or anything else you want," proposed Izuku, taking Pony's hand as he broke the hug. Ryako took note of Izuku's words. The evidence that he was bullied keeps accruing. "I should mention this to the others later, and I should bring Pony into the situation," thought Ryako. "Can we cuddle while we watch?" asked Pony, staring at Izuku with her big eyes. "Sure," responded Izuku, using the last of this burst of confidence to grab Ryako's free hand with his own. With a simple tug, the 3 teens walked hand in hand back to the dorms. However, upon returning to the dorms they found Hound Dog waiting for them. He needed to speak to Izuku in his office, so with a promise that he'd be back soon, Izuku followed his teacher into the main building. 30 UA main building, Hound Dog's office, 1:34 p.m. 30. Izuku sat across from Hound Dog, his body sinking into the overly plush chair. The pro hero offered Izuku some mints from a bowl on his desk, but Izuku politely declined. "What did you want to talk about, sensei?" asked Izuku, twiddling his fingers. Hound Dog pulled out a photo from one of his desk's drawers and pushed the photo forward for Izuku to see. The photo was one taken at a distance and clearly from someone trying to stay hidden. Izuku immediately recognized the villainess he encountered during the USJ attack. "Molt," spoke Izuku, the name slipping out. "Yes, some of your classmates were concerned that this villainess may have done something to you during the USJ attack. Do you want to talk about it?" asked Hound Dog with concern. "Well, why you see about that?" spoke Izuku, nervous and stuttering over his words. "Midoriya, I know she was after you. Can you tell me what for?" asked Hound Dog gently. Izuku was quiet for a full 5 minutes before he replied. She wanted to take me with her. I think she said something along the lines of I was her type. She felt me up all over, like everywhere," explained Izuku, his voice quiet and his eyes were firmly looking down at his own hands. "I see," replied Hound Dog, quietly wrote on a notepad. "How did that make you feel?" asked Hound Dog, looking at Izuku, whose eyes were still glued to his own hands. "If I'm being honest, I kind of liked the contact itself, and her age didn't bother me nearly as much as I think it should. What affected me most was the fact she was a villain. It made my skin crawl and made me feel a little dirty. If it was some else," spoke Izuku, blushing as the images of some of his female classmates, especially his new girlfriends replacing the villainesses, flashed through his mind. But his mind settled on the image of a certain rabbit heroine in the villainess's place. I wouldn't have really minded. At worst I'd be embarrassed or faint," spoke Izuku honestly. His face was a bright fire engine red. Any particular reason you think that's the case?" questioned Hound Dog, trying to keep the boy talking as he continued scribbling more on his notepad. Well, I never really had a lot of contact with girls aside from my mother. I wasn't really popular in school. I only recently held a girl's hand for the first time," admitted Izuku, his tone filled with shame and embarrassment. Sounds like he is touch-starved along with self-worth issues," thought Hound Dog, underlined several of the notes he had written, didn't want to press more to avoid the boy clamming up, so he would shift the topic slightly and circle back. "Alright, let's move on to the USJ event as a whole," spoke Hound Dog as he continued asking questions to the pro hero in training. Hound Dog wanted to give Izuku a full evaluation and see if he couldn't convince the boy to meet with him regularly. 30 Meanwhile, Setsuna's room, Class 1B dorms 30. Pony was confused why Yanagi brought her to Setsuna's dinosaur-covered room instead of preparing to hang out and cuddle with their boyfriend. Pony's confusion only grew when an equally confused Camy was already in the room along with Setsuna, who was missing an eye and an ear. "So, what's the sitch? Are we gonna have some girl talk? Are we ranking the boys?" "I'm game," asked Camy lightheartedly in an attempt to break the awkwardness. "We'll have to save the girl talk for another time," commented Setsuna as she started a video call. Kendo answered the call. "We wish to discuss a more serious matter," committed Yanagi as she took a seat on a Jurassic Park beanbag. "What is it?" asked Pony, taking a seat beside her fellow American. "It's about the class rabbit," commented Setsuna. It was a testament to Izuku's first impression that everyone immediately knew who Setsuna was referring to. "Let me take it from here, Setsuna," spoke Kendo. The redhead girl explained the situation between Izuku and Bakugo and presented what evidence they had. Camy and Pony were understandable anger. Yanagi, wanting to prevent a tangent, decided to speak. "It is clear that we are all in agreement that this situation must be resolved. Does anyone have a proposition on how we can proceed?" asked Yanagi, wanting the others' input. "I say we let his ma know, maybe she can get him to open up," proposed Pony, thinking that if they can get Izuku to talk about it, it will be easier to get his bully punished. "I don't know if that would work. Izuku seems real adamant on defending that asshole for some reason. He may clam up and deny everything," commented Setsuna, not wanting Izuku to work against them. "The teachers probs have more of an idea on what to do with this. They already seem to think that the bastard is sus AF, so I think we should drop them our info," commented Camy, thinking the teachers would know what to do. "If possible, I'd want to confront Bakugo and see if he'll spill the beans," proposed Kendo internally, just wanting a more direct approach to solving this issue. "Given how arrogant he is, I wouldn't be surprised if he brags about it. Might be smart to record him when we do it," added Setsuna, liking the idea. "I believe pursuing all these options is viable. However, I believe informing his mother should be a priority. I think she would react better if we deliver the news. Since she is aware we are close to Izuku, she can conclude even from our short meeting that we are Izuku's friends and therefore care about him," spoke Yanagi, giving her opinion on the matter. Pony was in full agreement with Yanagi, and after mulling it over, the others agreed as well. "Okay, so we'll tell her. But how do we do that? None of us have her number, right? Do we wait for Parents' Day?" questioned Setsuna. Ryuko already had an idea on how to resolve this issue. "I should have gotten Midoriya's number," thought Camy, lamenting the missed opportunity. I can acquire her number from Izuku. From there I'll get her address so we can speak with her in person, spoke Yanagi bluntly. How are you going to get him to give you her number? Spoke Kendo with curiosity in her tone. I simply plan to directly ask Izuku for her number under the pretext of wishing to speak with her about some of her recipes. From there, securing an invitation to her home should be as simple as asking for in-person instruction, spoke Yanagi, explaining her plan. That's really clever. Let us know when you have the number. But she may invite you after Parents' Day, so we might need to hold off before we tell the teachers, spoke Setsuna, knowing that Yanagi had some other motives. Alright, Ryaiko's gonna get Mamadoria's digits. So then who is going to talk to Short Fuse? Asked Camy, looking at the other girls. I'll talk to them. Setsuna, can you come too so you can record him? Spoke Kendo, looking at the dinosaur-loving girl. Sure, I got your back. Let's get the jackass to squeal, answered Setsuna with a smile that showed off her sharp teeth. After we have his ma and the teachers on board, we can talk to Izu together, spoke Pony, happy that a plan to help Izuku had been decided on. Agreed, so Yanagi will get the number. Set, and I will try confronting Bakugo after class tomorrow. Pony, Camy, can you two keep Izuku busy? I don't want him noticing what we're up to. We'll talk to the teachers after that, spoke Kendo, recapping the plan. No prob, we'll ask him to help us with some quirk training. He'll tots jump at that, commented Camy. We should talk to All Might first, he's Izu's favorite. If he helps, Izu might open up easier, added Pony, recalling the boys' collection of merchandise. Smart, his room's basically a shrine to heroes, especially All Might, commented Setsuna, agreeing with Pony. If all goes well, we may resolve this before the festival begins or after its completion, spoke Yanagi, her tone flat. Setsuna suddenly stood up in alarm, causing her classmates to look at her funny. Looks like we'll have to cut off the meeting here. The rabbit's at the front door, spoke Setsuna as she opened her bedroom window. We'll take more tomorrow. Bye, girls, spoke Kendo, ending the call. Setsuna's disembodied eye and ear floated in through the now open window. The body parts returned to their proper places on Setsuna's head as she closed the window once more. Camy, Pony, and Yanagi slipped out of Setsuna's room. Yanagi and Pony would beeline downstairs to go to greet Izuku. They immediately picked up on how emotionally drained he was. It was no mystery to them that it had to do with whatever he discussed with Hound Dog. So they proceeded to bring their boyfriend into his room, where they watched anime, cuddled, and did their best to cheer him up. The students of Class 1B all sat in their classroom discussing their short time off since the USJ attack. The teens discussed how their class was all over the media outlets. Some wondered who would conduct homeroom, with Vlad King most likely still recovering from his injuries. Others discussed more mundane topics, wishing to be distracted from the events a few days prior. Many of the students still had bandages, bruises, and other signs of the attack marking them. Some were quite blatant, like Ibara's hair now being only down to her ears instead of reaching her lower back, or Rin's black eye. Kendo had asked the religious girl what had happened. Ibara had explained that due to the damage she suffered in the fire zone of the USJ, she had to cut off most of her vine-like hair. It would regrow, but it would take plenty of sunlight and water. When the door to the classroom opened, the class went quiet. They were all expecting one of the other pro-hero teachers to step through. So when Vlad King walked in, the class understandably freaked out. Vlad-sensei, you're okay, spoke Tetsu without really thinking. I don't think you could call that okay, Tetsu, commented Kendo, bringing attention to how both of Vlad's arms were in casts and he was covered in bandages. Are you sure it's okay for you to be moving around, Vlad-sensei? Asked Izuku, concerned for his teacher. Sensei, I agree with Midoriya. Your injuries were quite severe. You should be resting. You and 13 Sensei have earned a break from standing against those agents of evil, added Ibara, connecting her hands as if she was preparing to pray for her teachers. Thank you all for your concern. However, thanks to Recovery Girl, I am well enough to walk around at least for a little while. But I only wanted to speak to you all quickly before handing you off to midnight. So listen up, spoke Vlad King, causing all present to go silent and give him their full attention. The blood hero scans the faces of his students. Some of the students glanced at the still open door, spotting the R-rated heroine. To start, I wanted to say you all handled the villain attack very well. You went above and beyond what is expected of you as students, and I am proud of all of you, started Vlad, pausing for a moment when he met Midoriya's eyes, before moving on. Midoriya understood the small gesture from his teacher. Pride, a rare emotion for Izuku, swelled in his chest at his teacher's praise. But you all have another fight coming, continued Vlad. The class went tense at his words, their minds running wild with what he could mean. The UA Sports Festival will be held soon. You will all be given a week to prepare and train. You will all be given access to the school's facilities as long as you inform a teacher. Midnight has volunteered to cover for me while I recover. Does anyone have any questions? Explained Vlad King. Midnight stepped into the room fully and stood beside her colleague. Several hands were raised all around the room. After Vlad called Kendo, hands were lowered. Is having the festival so soon a good idea? The villains just attacked. What if they try something during the festival? Asked Kendo, voicing the thoughts of many of her classmates. I share your concerns, but this festival is a very important event for you students, even more so than in the past. The principal also wants to use the festival as a sign of strength. Rescheduling it could embolden the villains. In regards to the event's security, all the security measures will be considerably increased in comparison to previous years. The vice principal has even personally called several heroes and convinced them to attend the event as security, spoke Midnight with a warm smile, doing her best to place his students' worries at ease. You left out how he convinced them, thought Vlad, guessing that embarrassing blackmail was used. With the last question answered, hands were again raised and Vlad once again selected a student to voice their questions. Why is the sports festival so important this year? Asked Pony, her confusion and curiosity clear in her tone. The sports festival is one of the most watched events in all of Japan. Pro heroes from all over Japan will be watching. It's a prime opportunity to get scouted into an agency as a psychic after you graduate. In addition, the faculty have decided that the first years will undergo hero internships, which are normally only for second years and above. You all will only have one chance a year, 3 chances in a lifetime. So make sure you give it your all, responded Vlad, explaining the importance of the event. Hell yeah, I'm going to give it my all, yelled Tetsu, standing up in his seat and pumping his fist toward the ceiling. Let us do our best to show our worthiness, my friends, bellowed Jiroda, maintaining his politeness despite his clear excitement. Yeah, let's show him what we're made of, yelled Juzo, fully displaying his excitement. Although I do not wish to fight my fellow students, I shall do my best in this trail to ensure I can grow strong enough to carry out the Lord's will, spoke Ibara, steeling her resolve for the festival. This has got me so hyped. How about you, Prez? Spoke Camy, looking at Izuku. The boy was currently muttering to himself and writing in a notebook at a fast pace. From what Camy could pick up, he was planning how he was going to train. All right, calm down. I understand your excitement, but you still have classes today and tomorrow, spoke Vlad, getting the class to calm down. The blood hero turned to Midnight. They're all yours. I'll try to pop in tomorrow to introduce myself to the parents, stated Vlad. I'll see you then. Be sure to rest well. Oh, and be sure to say hi to 13 for me, spoke Midnight quietly and with a teasing tone. The R-rated heroine knew that Vlad would be staying in the space heroine's apartment. I will, spoke Vlad. He was used to her antics and was able to keep his composure as he slipped out of the room. 12:30 a.m. lunch 30. After Midnight dismissed the class for lunch, the teens separated into their friend groups and started to head out to eat. Izuku, Jiroda, Tetsu, Ibara, Ryuko, Kendo, Setsuna, Pony, and Camy were all walking toward the cafeteria. They excitedly discussed the upcoming festival, some even proposing training together for the first few days. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a familiar booming voice. Young Midoriya is here, yelled All Might as he appeared around a corner wearing a black suit with a red tie. The number one sudden appearance spooked all but the resident horror buff Ryuko, who instead was picturing Izuku in a similar suit. She found the image extremely appealing and made a mental note for later. All Might, spoke Jiroda, surprised at All Might's sudden appearance. What are you doing here? Asked Izuku, confused at his mentor's appearance. Lunch. You want to eat with me? Asked All Might to hold his lunchbox out for the students to see. Izuku glanced at his friends, who simply smiled and gave him a nod. Sure, spoke Izuku, accepting All Might's offer. Then follow me, spoke All Might with a deep laugh as he moved down a side hall at a fast pace. Izuku gave his friends a quick goodbye and ran to catch up with his mentor. 40 in one of UAS many meeting rooms. 40. Izuku followed All Might into a small meeting room with couches and a table with food and tea laid out. The first thing Izuku noticed was several action figures of pro heroes were moving on the table, pouring tea and passing food to the other occupants. Izuku easily recognized Nezu and the vice principal sitting on one of the couches. But there was an extremely short, elderly man with heavy wrinkles and a scrawny build that the hero nerd could not identify, even with the elderly man wearing the white and yellow costume that marked him as a pro hero. Once the door closed, All Might reverted to his small might form. Come sit, young Midoriya. I'd like you to meet my mentor, Sorahiko Torino, also known as the pro hero Grand Torino, and you probably already know Toyman here, introduced All Might, gesturing to the heroes. It's nice to meet you both. Can I have your autograph? Asked Izuku politely as he pulled out a notebook and pen from somewhere. Andy chuckled and took the notebook and pen to give the boy his autograph. It is a joy to finally meet you in person. I have been anticipating playing a game with you for a while now, commented Andy with a smile as he passed the notebook and pen to Torino. Kids got better manners than you did at that age, spoke Torino, poking fun at his student as he quickly signed the notebook and returned it. Cough, young Midoriya. The main reason I brought you here is to talk about the sports festival, spoke All Might, coughing into a hanky to catch the blood he spit up. I'm currently down to 2.5 hours with one for all. Young Midoriya, to be frank, the time till I have to retire is shrinking steadily day by day and villains are starting to notice. That's why someone needs to step up and keep the peace. That's why I gave you my power, so you can succeed me. This sports festival, it's something the entire country, and, possibly the whole world will be watching very closely. I want you to think of this festival as your debut. You're the fledgling symbol of peace. You are the hope that the future will be bright even after I'm gone. Izuku Midoriya, I want you to introduce yourself to the world and proudly say I am here, spoke All Might, shifting to his muscle form for a moment, before coughing up blood and reverting to small might. I'll do it. I'll show everyone that there is hope for the future, promised Izuku with a fire in his eyes. I understand that this is a lot of weight to have placed on your shoulders. But remember, you are not alone in this task. That is why we are here to help prepare you for this burden. It is the duty of us as teachers, spoke Nezu, happily sipping some of his tea. Then let's get started. Show me your quirk, kid, ordered Gran Torino, standing on the couch. Izuku hesitated for a moment before he stood up, and with a bit of concentration, he activated full cowl. With the green lighting arcing over his body, Izuku jumped just high enough that his feet were level with the table. He stayed floating for less than a minute before he began to tilt to one side. Izuku deactivated the quirk before he ended up upside down. That's about as long as I have been able to float without losing my orientation, added Izuku as he turned full cowl off. Well, I must admit, when Toshi said you had the predecessor's quirk, I didn't completely believe him. But you do have Nana's quirk, and looks like you have Thunderbird's quirk too, spoke Gran Torino, genuinely in a bit of wonder. Who's Thunderbird? Asked Izuku, sitting back down, his curiosity moving to the forefront. Thunderbird was the hero name of Nana's mentor and holder of One for All before her. He could clad his entire body with lighting to fight and shoot blasts of lighting. He was wounded badly by a powerful villain and was forced into hiding to search for a successor as a result. He lived in a rural town under a fake ID going by Ben and worked as a teacher. That town is where he met Nana. He eventually succumbed to a quirk-related poison from a villain while Nana and I were second years in hero school, spoke Gran Torino, a somber look on his face. So that's why I generate lightning. I've been tapping into one of the predecessor's quirks from the start. I wonder what other quirks I will get. There are still at most 5 other quirks I could get, spoke Izuku. But before he could delve deep into thought, Gran Torino interrupted him. That reminds me, we should make a list of all the previous wielder's quirks for you, kid. Best to have some idea of what's coming, spoke Gran Torino, taking a bite out of some sweets. Thank you, sir, that would be helpful, spoke Izuku, as he jotted down some questions and threads he wanted to ask about One for All into one of his notebooks. You've got a decent grasp on One for All, kid, I'll give you that. But just cause you have some control doesn't mean you can relax. You still need to increase the amount of power you can use without backlash. But you also need to get a proper feel for how much power you need to take someone down. If you slip and use too much power, you could accidentally turn someone into red mist, spoke Gran Torino in a serious tone. The image of him punching the zero-pointed moved to the forefront of Izuku's mind. The thought of hitting a person without a durability quirk with that kind of power made Izuku pale slightly. Remember, Midoriya, even though heroes normally bring villains in alive, there are instances where heroes have no other option than to take out a villain permanently. It is not brought up often, but many heroes, most often combat heroes, end up having to take a villain's life to save innocent lives at some point in their careers. Bearing a few, most of the pro hero staff here have taken a villain's life. Even All Might has had to do it, spoke Andy from a place of experience. Like you and the radiation villain meltdown a few years ago. He was going to irradiate downtown, but, started Izuku, as he digested the words of the vice principal. I killed him using my quirk, preventing him from making the city uninhabitable and killing millions. This is a lesson normally not given till your second year, but this will be touched on before you students head out for your internships, informed Andy, before taking a sip of his tea. The pro hero felt bad as he could see the boy come to terms with this, often glossed over the fact of being a hero. The adults gave the boy some time to collect himself before All Might began speaking. You should eat, young Midoriya. You'll need your strength for the rescue training this afternoon. We can finish speaking after, but feel free to ask questions, spoke Alan as the skeletal man grabbed his bento box and chopstick and began to eat his tiny portion of specially made food. Yeah, you're right, I should eat. Thank you for the food, spoke Izuku, grabbing a plate of food and chopsticks offered by some of the animated toys. 30. Meanwhile, in the UA cafeteria, 30. Izuku's friends quickly stepped into the cafeteria and lined up after parting ways with their green-haired classmate. The teens happily chatted as the line slowly but steadily moved forward. I am quite curious what All Might wanted with Sir Midoriya, questioned Jiroda, not noticing a red and white-haired boy take interest in the conversion. Maybe he noticed Midoriya's manliness and wanted to talk. I mean, their quirks are kinda similar. Maybe All Might's taken him under his wing or something, spoke Tetsu. Kendo gave him "Are you serious?" type of look. Yeah, I don't see the similarities at all. I'll give you that they both are really strong when they use their quirks. But there are plenty of heroes that have super strength quirks, it's pretty common, spoke Kendo, making her hands grow and shrink for emphasis. I agree with Kendo. All Might's quirk has also never had backlash like Izuku's quirk, even when All Might was a student. Just look at the video of his first year sports festival. All Might has been opus since the start. Plus, I have never seen Alan generate and shoot lighting, added Setsuna. The eavesdropping boy from one frowned, his interest fading slightly from what he heard. If Izu's under anyone's wing, it's Tot's gotta be Principal Nezu. They hang like every other day. This is like the first time All Might has wanted to hang with Izu outside of class, commented Camy, bringing up a decent point. Midoriya is blessed with great power and a heroic heart. Much of the class has seen something within him. The principal has seen something in him. Perhaps All Might also has noticed that same something. I believe that Midoriya could one day rise to be a paragon of heroism, spoke Ibara, stating her thoughts on the class president. Sir Midoriya did also mention his quirk as a form of telekinesis, so it may also have a mental requirement or additional applications that he has not mentioned, spoke Jiroda, throwing his own 2 cents into the conversion. In addition, there is a high possibility that All Might simply wishes to discuss something in regards to his class rep duties or about the speech he is supposed to give for the upcoming festival, added Ryuko as the group neared the serving area. Guess you guys have a point. But still, I'm gonna ask Broderi after he comes back, spoke Tetsu, feeling like he was dogpiled a bit but had to admit his classmates made good points. Shoto Todoroki stopped listening and after the topic started to change. If the son of the number 2 hero recalled correctly, one of the annoying blondes from his class had mentioned a Midoriya placing first in the entrance exam. The half-cold half-hot user thought about the information he had just gained. Whether this Midoriya does have some connection to All Might or not, he is strong if the principal sees something in him. I will crush him with just my ice. I'll prove that I don't need to use his fire, thought Shoto, as he grabbed a bowl of cold soba and moved to sit by himself. 30 back with Izuku in the meeting. As you know, young Midoriya, you will have 9 days off of school until the festival starts. Gran Torino, Andy, and I will ensure this time is productive. We'll be training with you on campus every day from sunup to sundown. You'll get the day before the festival off to rest. But till then you'll be put through the ringer, so be prepared, explained All Might, handing the boy a training plan he had drafted up. Toshinori will focus on strength training to increase the percentage of 1 for all you can use safely. I will be helping you with Nana's quirk. I'll also try to help with Ben's quirk too, but I am not as familiar with his quirk as Nana's, stated Gran Torino with a smirk that promised pain in Izuku's future. And I will be helping you get a more accurate feel for your potential damage output. I'll provide you with plenty of foes of varying durability to practice on, spoke Andy as all the animated toys turned as one to look at Izuku. Thank you all. I'll do my best to meet your expectations, spoke Izuku, answer the implied challenge with a determined look. I'll be busy with some of the final preparations for the festival, so our regular game nights are postponed for the time being. I look forward to seeing your performance at the festival. I have the utmost confidence in you, comment Nezu happily. Principal Nezu, may I ask you for something? Questioned Izuku. Nezu paused mid-sip of his tea and looked at his student with curiosity in his black beady eyes. Of course, Midoriya, assisting my students is one of my greatest joys, spoke Nezu happily, anticipating Izuku's request. Can I please have the recordings from the entrance exam and battle trials for 1A and 1B students? Asked Izuku nervously as All Might went bug-eyed at the request. Nezu and Andy both blinked, quickly glanced at one another and then burst into laughter at the request. Their crazed laughter quickly unsettled All Might and Gran Torino. Forgive us, you are the first student to ever in the school's history to ask that. Vlad was correct for referring you to my brother, spoke Andy as he got control of himself first. Nezu gained control over his laughter quickly after that. Well, it would give you a bit of an advantage, but you were the only one to ever think about asking. So I'm thinking about giving the recordings. But since this hasn't happened before, I believe some compensation is needed, spoke Nezu as he pulled out his tablet from the table and placed a reminder for later. How about he has to give every member of the hero course a written out analysis about their quirks? The students will have the choice to accept or reject the analysis offer, proposed Andy. The vice principal knew that most of the students that did not know Midoriya would probably refuse outright, under the assumption that a student would not have any valuable insights about their quirks. An excellent idea. This would be a good test for the other students, to see which of them deny the offer out of pride or will be open to listening to an unassuming source and reap potential benefits. Midoriya, you'll have those recordings before the end of the day. Just make sure you have your analysis of your classmates ready by end of Friday, spoke Nezu, happy about his student's ability to surprise him. Sure, I already have notes on most of my class, so it shouldn't take me long to finish, spoke Izuku, excited at the idea of analyzing the quirks of the other hero students. Excellent, that is all we needed to talk with you about, young Midoriya. You may return to your classroom. You have rescue training this afternoon, spoke All Might, patting his successor on the back. Okay, I'll see you all later. Thank you, spoke Izuku, giving the adults a bow before he left the room. 30 a few minutes after Izuku leaves. 30. Kid seems like a good choice. Doesn't seem like he's chained down by his idolizing of you as much as I expected. But what I want to know is why he can use the predecessor's quirks, commented Gran Torino, looking at All Might. Recovery Girl already plans on running some tests after the festival. Hopefully, she finds something to possibly explain this, spoke All Might, wanting answers as to why One for All is acting in such a strange way. The sound of 2 alerts drew attention to Andy and Nezu. Nezu answered their questioning looks. It is the information on the analysis of the Nomu creature. It has been confirmed that the creature has multiple quick factors, and the quirk factors come from no less than 6 different individuals. The data bears an eerie similarity to what was found after analyzing some of All for One's associates years ago, spoke Nezu in a grim tone. So he is alive then? Questioned All Might, dreading the idea that he failed to slay his greatest foe during their last fight. It is a strong possibility, as we never obtained All for One's body after you caved in his skull. He could have had a combination of quirks that allowed him to survive. I believe that this League of Villains might be a catspot for someone else. If All for One is alive, he could easily be that someone else. It would be simple for him to support the League financially if remains of his old criminal empire still stand. His quirk also would make the creation of this Nomu more possible, spoke Nezu, giving his thoughts on the matter. If you're right, then Toshinori, you can't be burning what time you have left needlessly. An appearance here or there is inevitable. But you need to save your strength for a possible confrontation. Let the local pros handle the day-to-day things. Advised Gran Torino before grumbling about postponing his retirement again. If it's any consultation, I doubt he left the fight unscathed. If he was at full capacity, he'd have simply attacked you given your weakened state. Added Nezu, providing some good news. Toshinori, have you told the boy about All for One yet? Asked Gran Torino. All Might turned to his teacher. No, I didn't see much need, since I thought I ended that monster already. I'll have to tell him after class today, replied All Might, his mentor nodding in approval. It would be best to work under the assumption that All for One is alive, until we can confirm whether he is alive or not, added Gran Torino. I also have concerning news as well. I have been monitoring some of the students at Nezu's request. I have discovered something worrying. Someone has been gathering information on Izuku. His publicly available info was looked into shortly after the USJ incident. But days later, requests for access to his school, quirk, and medical records were also made. Request for his familial information has also been requested, spoke Andy, delivering the news with a deadly serious tone. Who? Asked All Might, his blue eyes narrowed as almost seemed to glow with power. Maybe they could follow this back to his nemesis and he could finish him off before he causes more trouble. The requests are all from a variety of sources. I have discreetly looked into it. I believe most are proxies. My guess is they are from the League of Villains. I took the liberty to inform Tsukachi of what I have found so far, answered Andy as a screen lowered from the ceiling and came to life as a picture of an elderly doctor with a large mustache and goggles. This is Dr. Tsubasa. He is the one to request access to Izuku's medical records. He also was Izuku's pediatrician for a time and was the one to declare him quirkless. But I found several suspicious events as I subtly looked into the doctor, spoke Nezu as he zoomed in on some of the information on screens. What kind of suspicious events? Asked Gran Torino, grabbing more sweets from the table. To start with, his grandson went missing with no trace a few years after he moved away from Musutafu. Not much on its own, but I also found out that several of his former patients have also gone missing over the years. All with no trace. This is a general list of the quirks they had. Most are useful, some not at first glance, but could be very powerful if combined with other quirks on the list. From what I have found, he moved his practice a few times. He is currently working at Jaku General Hospital, answered Nezu, using his tablet to highlight some of the information on the screen. This is certainly suspicious and it reeks of All for One. But it's difficult to prove that he's connected to the League of Villains, let alone All for One with what we have, stated Gran Torino. True, we will continue looking into this on our end, and Detective Tsukachi is also looking into this lead, commented Andy. All Might looked at the information and thought, given how young Midoriya thwarted the League's Nomu and their plans, it would make sense to look into him. Do you think that All for One knows young Midoriya is my successor? Asked All Might, concerned for Izuku and his mother's safety if his arch-nemesis was truly alive. Most likely not at the moment. But if he's the one using proxies to gather this intel, he'll likely deduce it once he sees Izuku in action during the festival. We must remember that he has a lot of experience with One for All. He has been fighting with its wielders since its creation. He'll recognize that power when he sees it, especially if he sees Midoriya using the past wielder's quirks, and we can't just try to hide the boy now, as that would draw more attention from All for One, informed Nezu, explaining their difficult situation. It is best to inform his mother about this and provide some protection for her. Even if Nezu is incorrect about All for One, it is only a matter of time before both of the Midoriyas become targets of the League of Villains at the very least, spoke Andy, speaking to Nezu. We can speak to her tomorrow. I'll ask her to stay behind after the other student and parents leave. As for protection, I do believe a secretary position will be opening up tomorrow, one with on-campus housing, spoke Nezu, talking toward his brother. Good idea. The upgrades to the security system and the countermeasures for the Namus are ahead of schedule and should be fully implemented by Sere, spoke Andy. The two brothers started to discuss back and forth, fleshing out plans of action as well as backup plans that All Might didn't try to understand or hear, as the symbol of peace quietly contemplated the situation. All Might knew he didn't have much time before he and Andy were to help the students with rescue training. I must ask for your opinions on something, spoke All Might, interrupting Nezu and Andy's scheming. The other three adults in the room turned their attention to him. It took a bit longer for Izuku to return to the classroom than he expected, because he had almost literally run into Bakugo. Izuku had out of necessity gotten decently good at reading the mood of his explosive tormentor, so Izuku could tell that the blonde was in an even worse mood than normal. Luckily for Izuku, the blonde wasn't facing him, allowing the green-haired hero in training to back away unnoticed. The run-in forced Izuku to double back and take an alternate route back to class. By the time he was entering, he only had a few minutes to spare. The rest of the class were all still relaxing as they waited for the bell to signal the end of lunch and the beginning of Hero 101. Hey, Broderiya, how was your lunch? What did All Might want you for? Asked Tetsu, curious. His mention of All Might got the attention of the rest of the class. It was good, Tetsu. All Might just wanted to talk with me about my speech for the festival, answered Izuku, using the explanation he had thought of on his way back. His words killed the interest of most of the class. "Oh, that makes sense. Looks like Inaga's guess form early was right," spoke Tetsu, taking a glance at Ryuko, who despite her neutral look, gave off a slightly smug feeling to the steel boy. The bell rings, ushering the students all to hurriedly take their seats as the door to the classroom slides open. Midnight struts into the classroom with her normal flair, hips swaying and her heels clicking against the floor. "All right, my youth-filled lovelies. Today we'll be doing rescue training to make up for the training session you lost due to the villain attack. We will be going to the USJ for this training. If anyone is not comfortable returning there just yet, please speak to me. Those that don't want to go to the USJ will be getting a head start on first aid training with Recovery Girl. The rest grab your costumes and meet up at the bus," began Midnight, her tone turning soft and full of understanding near. Izuku grabbed his suitcase and made his way to the locker room. The locker room itself was rather silent, allowing Izuku more time to think about all the things on his plate. The upcoming festival, his speech, the other quirks he had yet to unlock, the analysis of his classmates, plans to take his girlfriends out on dates, how to tell his mother he had girlfriends, possible modifications to his suit, and much more bounced through his mind as he put on his costume and made his way to where the bus was parked. While he was walking, Izuku noticed that the rows of busts depicting the alumni and former teachers of the school that once flanked either side of the path had all been replaced with full-body lifelike statues. Other statues of other noteworthy heroes from history and even myth had been popping up all over campus as well. Izuku quickly concluded that these were most likely part of the security updates to the school given the vice principal's quirk. Any would-be attacker would have to worry about any and every statue being a threat, or they would be swarmed by an army of them. Approaching the bus, he could see Midnight talking with several other teachers, which included All Might, Cementos, and Ectoplasm. The vice principal was also present, but he was standing a few feet away talking into his cell phone. Izuku was a little happy to see that every member of his class decided to return to the USJ. However, the bus ride itself was much quieter than the first time. All of the students were tense, even with all the extra teachers there. None of them spoke above a whisper. The teachers could all tell how the students were all on edge. Izuku sat in the back of the bus, Pony and Ryuko on either side of him. Ryuko used the same trick with her sleeve she had done before to hold his hand without anyone noticing. Ryuko's uncanny ability to calm Izuku's anxiety proved quite effective, and he appreciated the feeling of her soft hand intertwined with his own. In an effort to distract them and to extend himself, Izuku recalled a topic he needed to discuss with them. Ryuko, Pony, is it alright if I ask you something regarding our relationship?" asked Izuku in a whisper, worried that his request would upset his girlfriends. "Of course, Izu," whispered Pony in English, while Ryuko nodded. Izuku glanced around to make sure no one was listening in on them. "Would it be alright if we kept our dating a secret? Not that I am ashamed of you two or anything like that, it's just," whispered Izuku, worried his girlfriends would take offense to the request. But a squeeze from Ryuko's hand silenced him. "It is okay. I understand that you do not want others prying into your personnel life. I also wish to postpone the attention and inevitable queries our classmates would have at the learning of our affections. I do not mind waiting till we are more comfortable," spoke Ryuko, reassuring her boyfriend in a quiet voice. Izuku looked at Pony, who had a downright adorable pout on her face. "I wanted to be all lovey-dovey with you in public," spoke Pony quietly, arms crossed. "Is there anything I can do to get you to agree?" asked Izuku. Pony hummed in thought. "How about you take her to karaoke after class today? There's a small karaoke place I know. There are even some nice restaurants on the same street you can eat at. None of our classmates should be there," spoke Ryuko, proposing an idea. "That's a great idea. What do you think, Pony?" asked Izuku, more than happy with the proposed idea. "Just me and Izu getting to sing our hearts out, eating dinner, sharing dessert, and maybe getting to making out a little." Thought to Pony, the images of her and Izuku enjoying themselves flashing through her mind. Having been convinced herself of the idea, she only had one concern to voice. "I love the idea of one-on-one time with Izu. But what about you?" asked Pony, wanting the alone time. "But I didn't want to leave out Ryuko or be rude. I'm fine, you two have fun. I'll have my date after the festival," replied Ryuko, already knowing what she wanted to do with her boyfriend. "Okay, sounds good to me," whispered Pony with a smile. Her excitement and joy radiated off of her like sunlight. Ever since Setsuna had overheard the confession, she had been paying closer attention to the trio. She had seen them leave the dorms for what was clearly a date, and she started noticing how much closer they all seemed. Setsuna wasn't very surprised when during her observations she noticed Kanoko stealing glances at Izuku. Setsuna knew the mushroom-themed girl had been saved by Izuku several times at this point, so it made sense for her to develop a little crush on him. Setsuna wondered if she knew about Izuku's relationship. Setsuna's musing was broken when Izuku's head turned and their eyes met. She gave him a toothy grin, hoping he hadn't realized she was staring at him. Izuku sent her a smile that caused her cheeks to heat up. Setsuna breaks eye contact with the boy. "That smile is so unfair," thought Setsuna, hoping her blush wasn't noticeable. Not wanting to risk getting caught again, Setsuna pulled out and unlocked her phone to find something to distract her. However, the first thing that was displayed was a text message from her mother. "Remember honey, just follow my advice. I can't wait to meet him tomorrow. Good luck with classes today. Love you." Read Setsuna, recalling the advice she was given. First, you have to be 100% certain of your feelings before doing anything else. That's going to take some time to figure out, let alone decide if you like him enough to be willing to share. For now, just keep hanging out with him and getting to know him. I'll be all ears when you need me, thought Setsuna, remembering what her mother had said. Alright students, before we arrive I would like to explain the exercise. We'll be conducting a few different kinds of rescues today. The teachers and I will be showing you all how it's done, then you'll be broken into small groups and run through the rescue yourselves. Your classmates in ectoplasm will act as the victims for this lesson, spoke Andy, beginning to explain the lesson. We'll only be doing 3 zones today, starting with the ruin zone, then we'll get nice and sweaty in the fire zone, and then round out the exercise by getting wet in the flood zone. The size and composition of the rescue teams as well as the number of victims along with the severity of their injuries will all be randomized to a certain extent, but everyone will get to be both a victim and hero. Continued Midnight, slipping innuendos into her explanation as normal, causing her colleagues to sigh, some of the students to blush. When you enter a rescue situation in the field, you will need to adapt to a variety of factors, not just the hazard itself, but different types of victims need to be handled differently, as you may not be familiar with what other heroes will be at the scene, or you may not know how many victims to expect. Also, because we have multiple teachers, we'll be having multiple rescues happening at once, spoke All Might, finishing off the explanation with his fists on his hips as the bus slowed to a stop in front of their destination. 30 The USJ Ruins Zone 30. Izuku pulled out a blank notebook and a pencil and paid close attention as the teachers prepared to show proper rescue techniques in the ruin zone. The main hazard in the aftermath of a large battle or earthquake is the building stability. If you are not careful and vigilant, the building you are in could collapse around you, possibly burying you or victims alive, spoke Cementos as he pointed out certain signs to determine the stability of an area. The cement hero was in his element as he lectured the class while pointing out what signs indicated that an area was structurally compromised. He details proper methods to search buildings, how to handle victims, and how to navigate the injured through obstacles. After Cementos finished his lecture with some input from the other teachers, the students were broken up into groups and assigned buildings to clear. Izuku, Kendo, and Awase had been tasked with clearing an apartment complex that had 15 apartments per level. The building was moderately damaged, with one of the flights of stairs collapsed and parts of the walkways broken off. Cementos had helped the students chosen to play victims to select their hiding spots spread throughout the build and assign them each an injury to pretend to have. The 3 students had split up to search the ground floor after the exercise began. Izuku had already searched the build manager's office and 3 of the apartments. As he carefully moved to the next apartment to continue his search, he noted the front door on the floor seemingly blown off its hinges. He kept a close eye out for any sign that the area was unstable as he entered. The apartment was eerily similar to the one he grew up in. A layer of rubble led from the entrance hall deeper into the apartment, the source of which became clear upon him entering the living room. The ceiling had collapsed, creating a giant mess of furniture, drywall, insulation, concrete, and rebar. Izuku began to search the apartment properly, checking bedrooms, closets, bathrooms, anywhere a person could be. He also called out regularly, leaving pauses in between his calls so he could hear any replies. Like help, call out the muffled but familiar voice of Camy. Izuku moved back into the living room, worried he had missed his fawn-haired friend on his first pass of the room. I hear you. I'm a pro hero. Please keep calm and keep calling out, spoke Izuku, calling out to and trying to reassure the victim as the teachers instructed. I'm here, spoke Camy, continued to play her role. Despite her voice still being muffled, Izuku realized that it was coming from above. He carefully made his way to the top of the rubble mound directly under the hole to the apartment above. Guessing the edge would not be stable, Izuku activated full cowling at around 2% and jumped in place. He went just high enough to get a quick layout of the floor above. He increased the percentage of full cowl and jumped up into the apartment above, even calling on float for a quick moment to ensure a soft landing. He scanned his surroundings as he powered down full cowling, but Camy wasn't in sight at the moment. Save me, hero, called out Camy, but this time in a more playful tone. Izuku quickly moved to the source of her call, the kitchen. He found Camy on her stomach. She was pinned under some kind of weight that had the word refrigerator written on it, along with her being partly covered in some rubble. Do worry, miss, I am here, spoke Izuku in his best professional hero voice. He even subconsciously used his mentor's catchphrase. Camy let out a little giggle as she turned her head to him. Oh, thank heavens, please help me. I think my legs are busted, spoke Camy with a very convincing performance. No worries, I'll have you out of there into safety in a moment, replied Izuku, a small blush of embarrassment at the girl's playful giggle. Izuku moved towards the weight. Lifting the weight was easy for him. After all, he had successfully carried All Might on top of a refrigerator near the end of his 10 months cleaning the beach, and that had all been before he got his quirk. Camy knew Izuku was strong. She had seen firsthand what his quirk could do, so she knew lifting the stuff on top of her would be easy for Izuku with his quirk. However, she was surprised when Izuku casually lifted the weight over his head and moved it to the side without activating his quirk at all. He made even quicker work of the other debris covering her. He rolled her onto her back like she was made of brittle glass. I'm just going to check you over for more injuries real quick, spoke Izuku. Camy smiled happily, handing a cue card to the green-haired boy. The cue card read broken left shin, broken right ankle, bruising on arms, and a small cut to the right hand. Izuku crouched down carefully, slipping one arm under her knees and the other under her back, and with great ease, he lifted the young lady and held her in his arms. Don't worry, I got you, spoke Izuku with that heroic look of his, before he made his way out of the apartment. My hero, however, will I repay you, spoke Camy, dramatically throwing her arms around his neck, enjoying herself. Izuku jumped back down to the first-floor apartment, as the entrance to this apartment was inaccessible due to Rubble being extra careful about his landing. Why, you seem to be having fun with this, spoke Izuku, breaking character with a smile as they exited the apartment. Camy laughed. Hell yeah, fam, I used to be in a theater club in middle school. Plus some of my fav dramas have scenes like this, replied Camy, dropping her act, as Izuku moved to the designated drop-off location. All Might, who was overseeing his group, gave him a simple nod as he jotted stuff down on the clipboard in his hands. The other teachers were all paying attention to a different group, marking things down on clipboards or tablets. He arrived just as Pony finished dropping Manga off. She pouted slightly after seeing Izuku carrying Camy in his arms like a princess. Izuku placed Camy down on her legs, but before he could resume his search of the first floor, Midoriya, Oase, I'm going to need some help over here, called out Kendo from the balcony of the third floor. Did she clear her apartments on the first 2 floors already? Thought Izuku as he made his way toward Kendo's location. Izuku immediately spotted Kendo trying to lift one of the building's support pillars that had fallen over. It was currently blocking the entrance into an apartment. Izuku could hear the groaning of one of his male classmates coming from in the blocked-off apartment. The pillar bugged and lifted it a little, but she couldn't utilize the strength of her quirk unless she had enough room to enlarge her hands. Kendo, I'm here, how can I help? Spoke Izuku. Kendo stopped trying to lift the pillar. Oase arrived shortly after Izuku. Shishida is trapped in the apartment. This is the only way in without busting a wall down. Oase, if Izuku and I can lift this, can you weld it in a way it won't fall over? Spoke Kendo, taking the lead. Oase took a look at the rubble, even hopping over the pillar to look at the other side. Once he finished his evaluation, he spoke. So good news and bad news. Good news, I can weld it in such a way that it will be stable. Bad news, in order to do that you'll need to lift it above your head and hold it there for long enough for me to weld it properly, explained Oase. Kendo looked concerned. This could be risky, but so would knocking a wall down without knowing if it was load-bearing or not. The teachers wouldn't set this up if they weren't sure we could do it right, thought Kendo, wondering if they should ask Alamite. We can do it. Oase, be ready to weld, spoke Izuku, approaching the pillar. Kendo sent a look that asked if he was sure. He responded with a nod and a smile. Kendo decided it wouldn't hurt to at least attempt, but she planned to go straight to All Might if they failed. Izuku and Kendo both got into position on either side of the pillar. Izuku powered up, full cowling to the highest he could safely hold. Kendo gave a short countdown. 3.2. 1 lift, spoke Kendo. The 2 hero students grunted in effort as the pillar rose at their combined strength. It was lopsided toward Kendo, but Izuku adjusted to compensate once it was at knee height. Kendo enlarged her hands, making it much easier for her now. The pillar rose and rose until it was around eye level. It needs to be higher, spoke Oase, ready to start welding the moment. Kendo, I think we have to get under it, spoke Izuku. Are you sure? Asked Kendo, unsure. It sounded like a bad idea to her. Yes, if I don't have to move I can increase my output without backlash, replied Izuku, the arcs of green lighting dancing over his body. Kendo looked into his eyes for a few heartbeats. Okay, I trust you. Let's do it, responded Kendo. The girl adjusted her hold. She hissed as she took more weight as Izuku shifted himself under the pillar quickly. Izuku to a breath. Before focusing on the ball of power in his core, he upped the percentage of OFA. Full cowling 10%, thought Izuku as he took the pillar's weight from Kendo as she shifted under the pillar with him. They were face to face under their shared burden. Izuku lowered his percentage down, so he could safely move. Once again they lifted in unison, pushing the pillar higher and higher. Right there is perfect, hang tight, spoke Oase as he moved to begin welding. Izuku focused on his output while Kendo's eyes roamed around in case something gave way. She may have taken in the chiseled physique of her class rep through his skin-tight hero suit once or twice, but if asked she'd say that it was just due to coincidence. Eventually, their eyes met and the two stared into each other's eyes like deer caught in headlights. They stared at each other for what felt like an hour, neither one having the will to speak. Okay, that should do it, spoke Oase as he finished securing the pillar with his quirk. Both of his teammates didn't even notice that the weight of the pillar was no longer there. Izuku broke eye contact with a blush on his face. I still have to finish searching my area, spoke Izuku, added a quiet apology just loud enough for her to hear, before he left, practically running. Okay, I'll grab Shishida, spoke Kendo despite the fact Izuku was gone. Nice work, started Oase before he noticed his teammates had left. The young man shrugged before heading back down to the floor below to continue his search. XXX Fire Zone XX. Izuku was thankful for the gas mask on his costume as it gave him some protection against the smoke in the burning building he was in. The building was modeled after an office building, The heat, even with the resistance one for all granted him, he was still sweating heavily. He could hear Tetsu, Rin, and Jiro, his teammates for this rescue, calling out and searching for the victims. This rescue was on a timer unlike the last one, partly to keep the students from getting heatstroke and partly to simulate the time-sensitive nature of a building fire. One of the teachers was controlling the flames, simulating the fire spreading through the building, as well as monitoring the students through the fire-resistant cameras throughout the building. They were thankfully on the last floor of their search. With time running short, they had to search the last of the rooms and get out of the building. Izuku exited an empty meeting room back into the main hallway. The artificial fire surged in intensity. Izuku saw his teammates start coming down the hall, each with a victim either slung across their shoulders in a fireman's carry or with an arm over their shoulder helping the victims walk. "Is that everyone?" asked Izuku loud enough to be heard over the roaring fire. Kendo, who was playing the victim, who was currently over Tetsu's shoulders, was the one to answer. "I don't know if the boss got out of her office. Please, you have to save her," spoke Kendo. She had soot on her cheeks and dotting her costume. "There is only a single room we have yet to check." "That must be the room, Sir Midoriya," spoke Jiro, pointing one of his clawed digits to a large double door at the end of the hall. "I'll go check. You guys head down and out of the building. We're running low on time," spoke Izuku. Tetsu looked conflicted for just a moment. "All right, we'll head out. Don't take too long," spoke Tetsu, trusting in his friend as he began leading the rest of the team back toward the stairs. Izuku simply nodded before turning and running down the hall toward the unchecked door. Finding the door locked, the young man used a quirk-enhanced kick to bust the doors open. Izuku stepped in and immediately spotted Setsuna sitting down propped up against a fake desk, a wheelchair overturned, and close to a small fire nearby. "Finally, I'm turning into cooked seaweed over here," spoke Setsuna, not even trying to act the part of a victim. The lizard girl fanned herself with a hand to little effect. "Don't worry, ma'am, I'll get you out of here," spoke Izuku, trying to be professional as he moved toward her. Setsuna handed him her injury cue card, which read she was fine but she was a paraplegic. Izuku lifted her. The girl gave an over-exaggerated yelp of surprise. "Watch those hands, big guy," spoke Setsuna, her tone testing and her hands pressed against his chest. She laughed as Izuku's blush went cherry red as he readjusted his grip on her. He made his way to the door, worrying slightly that Setsuna might be overheating due to the redness of her face. But before he could even get close to the threshold, a wall of fire rose in the hallway beyond. A wave of heat slammed into the pair as a result. "I don't think that way is an option anymore. Got a plan B?" asked Setsuna, looking at Izuku. The boy frantically looked around until his eyes settled on the bay windows that looked out to the street behind the building. "Izuku, what are you thinking?" "Izuku?" questioned Setsuna. Izuku didn't reply as he walked up to the desk and with a mighty kick sent the desk careening through the windows. The rush of fresh air caused the flames to grow greatly as they devoured the fresh oxygen. Izuku didn't wait for the flames to rush into the room. He had jumped out of the window right after the desk. Setsuna never was scared of falling given her quirk. However, unexpectedly jumping out of the 5th floor of a building with a fireball behind you still got her to scream at first in terror then in excitement. "I just need to active float at the right time to land softly," thought Izuku as he tried to focus with Setsuna screaming in exhilaration. His timing was a little too late and he had to break his fall with a roll to avoid hurting himself or Setsuna. "Aha, well, you certainly know how to make a girl's heart beat fast, Mr. Hero," spoke Setsuna teasingly, getting up on her feet as the horn signals the end of the exercise sounded. She gave Izuku a hand to help him to his feet as the test build was no longer on fire. 30 Flood Zone 30. After a rehydrating and a short break, the class shifted to the Flood Zone. Vice Principal Andy had demonstrated the procedure for the rescue of a drowning person. Some of the students blushed when he demonstrated CPR to the class. Midnight had very eagerly volunteered to play the victim for the demonstration. Towels would be provided so they weren't soaking on the bus ride back. "I would not have minded if you had to practice the kiss of life on me, Izuku," whispered Ryuko. The thought of Izuku kissing Ryuko or any of his classmates in full view of everyone else caused Izuku to flush in embarrassment. Thankfully for Izuku's heart, they would not be required to actually perform CPR on their classmates. Apparently, that would be for another class, when they were getting properly certified later in the year. Izuku had been paired with Aibara, a lucky break for a 2-person team. The 4 victims assigned to them were spread out in the water. Kamakiri and Shihai were treading water, Kodai was wearing a life jacket and Ryuko was clinging to a boy. All of them were at different distances from the shore, with Ryuko being the farthest and Shinhai being the closest. Aibara and Izuku were on the starting line waiting for All Might to start the rescue. "I should be able to reach the 3 closest to the shore," stated Aibara as Izuku shed the unneeded weight and items for his hero suit. "Okay, then I focus on getting Ryuko. Sorry about giving you more work," spoke Izuku, knowing that if he had access to a higher percentage of OFA he'd be of more help. "Nonsense, we are heroes. Saving civilians is what's most important. The blessing given to me is simply of great use in this instance," spoke Aibara, her vine hair at the ready. "Right, let's do our best," spoke Izuku, removing his shoes, socks, and gloves. "May the Lord grant us the strength to succeed in this training," spoke Aibara, her hands clasped in prayer. Izuku could have sworn she was bathed in a column of light for a moment. Rescue start, bellowed out All Might as he started a stopwatch. Izuku immediately made a mad dash toward the water, diving in with a powerful leap. Ibara had stopped near the water's edge. Izuku noticed Ibara's vines shot past him and toward the other victims as he swam toward Ryuko. Even just 5% full cal allowed Izuku to swim at a speed that pre-quirk professionals would be impressed with. "Hello, Izuku," spoke Ryuko, her normal flat tone laced with affection. "Hi, Ryuko, let's get you back to shore," spoke Izuku as he went about rescuing her. As they neared the shore, he felt Ibara take hold of them with her vines and lift them out of the water and back to shore the rest of the way. "That's time. Well done. Next victims and rescuers get ready," spoke All Might, calling out the next rescuers. "That was quite enjoyable, perhaps going to a pool or beach, maybe a fun activity in the future," commented Ryuko. Izuku was about to reply when he noticed that due to the water the white kimono of her hero costume had become slightly see-through, showing off her black bra and her curves as the costume clung to her body. Izuku practically sprinted to get his girlfriend a towel to help cover her up. "Maybe I should add a cap or something to my costume," thought Izuku, considering addition just so he could cover someone up if the need arose. The class boarded the buses and began heading back to the main building. During the drive, the teachers all gave varying levels of criticism and praise on the students' performances. The class as a whole had made many mistakes, but the vice principal assured them that it was to be expected of their first time. The trip back to the main building was much more lively than the trip to the USJ. The tension from early in the day was completely gone. "Well done everyone, you did very well all things considered. Go hit the showers. Be sure to pick up your homework from the classroom and make sure to get some rest. You don't want to be tired tomorrow. I want to see your youthful spirit tomorrow," spoke Midnight, dismissing her students, who quickly shuffled off the buses into the locker rooms. 30 Class 1B classroom. 40. With everyone back in their school uniforms, Class 1B returned to their classroom. Everyone grabbed a copy of the homework left on the podium and gathered their belongings and backpacks. Izuku also found a flash drive on his desk that he was able to slip into his bag without much fuss or notice. But when Tetsu opened the classroom door to leave, the hall was packed with other UA students. "Ooh, what are you all doing crowding around our class?" questioned Tetsu, confused at the wall of students. "You have some sort of business with our class?" asked Kendo, having an idea as to why they were there. "Please allow us to pass. Many of us do not wish to miss the train," requested Ibara, not wanting to be late for helping her father prepare for the charity event he was planning. My, so this is the class that survived a villain attack. Where's the one who supposedly beat that All Might killer from the news?" asked a blonde-haired student who stepped to the front of the crowd with a smug look on his face which was screaming that he believed he was better than them. "That would be Midoriya," answered Kiwara, the boy looking like he just wanted to get this over and done with as he pointed a thumb at the class rep. The smug blonde and the rest of the crowd all looked at Izuku. Izuku shrunk in on himself slightly, especially as the crowd started to size him up and doubt him. "Honestly, you seem kind of pathetic. I doubt the thing was anywhere close to All Might's strength if you were able to beat it. If you are the best your class has to offer, then none of you are a threat to Class 1 and will show everyone that we're bet slap," spoke the smug blonde before he was knocked out by a long tongue from a girl who bore a striking resemblance to a frog. "Sorry about Monoma, he can be an ass sometimes, Ribbit," spoke the frog girl, bluntly bowing an apology before she began dragging the unconscious Monoma away. The crowd lets her through to avoid ending up on the business end of her tongue. "Out my way, extras, you two frog face, Copacap," yelled Bakugo, letting out little pops of his quirk as he intimidated the Gen Ed students out of his way until he was in the doorway. The blonde bomber glared at Class 1B, specifically at Izuku and his friends, that had gotten him into trouble. Izuku, noticing Bakugo's hateful glare directed at his friends and girlfriends, felt an emotion bubble within him. "Listen here, Deku. You and your shitty class aren't shit. I'll show all of you what a real pro hero is like. I'll crush all of you at the festival and remind you of your damn place," yelled Bakugo, a glare full of hate directed at Izuku. Izuku felt the emotion in his core grow larger as it rose to a boil. "Leave him alone, short fuse. You're just jealous since you'll never be a popular hero with your attitude. I pity whoever ends up with you," spoke Camy, defending Izuku. She wasn't the least bit intimidated by Bakugo as she stood beside Izuku. "Shut your mouth, dicklips, before I teach you and the other bitch extras a lesson by shoving my," started Bakugo, storming toward her. The emotion boiled over at his bully's words, and timid, kind Izuku felt anger and rage for the first time. "Katsuki," yelled Izuku, his voice unnerving and full of anger. Bakugo's retort died in his throat as he and everyone behind him took an involuntary step back. The message "don't you dare finish that sentence" was clear to everyone present. Izuku's eyes seemed to be glowing in their sockets and his body was clad in full cowling, the lighting dancing over his form. The air itself felt heavy, causing some to hold their breath. Altogether, the look he was sending caused everyone in front of him to freeze in place. Camy's hand on his shoulder was all it took. The oppressive feeling vanished as quickly as it came as Izuku powered down. "Did I just do that? I am so dead," thought Izuku, freaking out internally and certain Bakugo would attack him. So he was very surprised when that was not what the Bakugo did. "TCH, whatever, I don't want to deal with you anymore anyway," spoke Bakugo, shoving his hands in his pockets as he turned around and stomped his way toward the exit. Out of my way, you fucking extras, yelled out Bakugo, more agitated than when he arrived. Man, is everyone in the hero courses as arrogant as you? Spoke a purple-haired boy who looked in desperate need of a nap. The fuck you say? Yelled Bakugo, clenching his teeth as he got right in the guy's face. I just wanted to say that, like many of us here, we didn't make it into the hero course. But according to the teachers, if any of us do well enough in the festival, then we can be transferred into the hero course. Which means some of you may be transferred out to make room. Spoke the boy, still ignoring Bakugo, making the Pomeranian even angrier. His words, however, worried some of the members of Class 1B, scouting the competition. Maybe some of my peers are, but I'm here to let you know that if you don't do your very best, I will snatch your seat from under you. Consider this a declaration of war on the hero course. Spooked the purple-haired boy, not flinching at Bakugo's glare. You picking a fight with me? I begs. Fine, cause I don't mind one more extra to grind into the dirt. You better make it to the one-on-one matches so I can crush you. Now out of my way, spoke Bakugo, shoving his way through the crowd. Kendo and Setsuna both glanced at each other and left the room following the blonde. Several other Class 1B students also left, causing the crowd to start to leave as well. Izu, I don't ever think I've seen you get angry like that before, stated Pony, intrigued at seeing this new side of him. It's also hella sweet. You went all Thunder God cause he was threatening us, added Camy with a smile. I didn't like that he was threatening you guys. You are my friends, spoke Izuku shyly. OMG, it's such a trip when going from all manly to shy like a bunny, spoke Camy. Tetsu slapped his back. That was so manly, dude. Standing up for others, complimented Tetsu with manly tears in his eyes. Izuku got praise from several other classmates as they left. Izuku had left with his classmates but had taken a position at the back of the group, Pony by his side as the group made its way through the halls. Ryuko, who was in front of them, glanced back and gave Pony a nod. Pony grabbed hold of Izuku's hand and took a turn as the rest of the group kept moving forward. We'll wander a little to give our classmates time to leave, then we can go on our date, spoke Pony, trying to resist the urge to skip through the hall. 30 UA main entrance 30. Setsuna had already detached a hand with her phone as she and Kendo approached Bakugo. Hey, Bakugo, called out Kendo in a neutral tone. The blonde stopped and turned to look at them, other students walking past them. What do you want, man hands, split bitch, growled out Bakugo. Kendo did her best not to call out the insulting names and move the topic to what they wanted. We wanted to know what your deal with Midoriya is. You guys gotta have some history, right? Asked Kendo, attempting to appear neutral. That Deku has been pissing me off and looking down on me since we were 4. So I, angrily started Bakugo before catching himself before he went on a rant, remembering that these bitches were on Deku's side for some reason he couldn't understand. He also recalled the warning the teachers gave him and the earful his mother gave him after his actions in the cafeteria. I don't have to tell you two bicks anything, so why don't you two go fuck yourselves, or better yet, since you idiots seem to like Deku so much, you can go fuck him for all I care. Useless trash should stick together, spoke Bakugo, flipping them off and walking away. That arrogant prick, yelled Kendo, wanting nothing more than to beat the bully in front of her up. She was only held back by Setsuna. Hold on, Kendo, you gotta keep calm, spoke Setsuna, keeping the martial artist from turning the Bakugo into a pretzel. You're right. What do we do now? He's not going to spill the beans, at least not easily, spoke Kendo after she calmed down. Setsuna looked past her at the front gate and she broke out into a Cheshire cat-like smile. Simple, Kendo. If we can't get it out of him, we get it out of brown nosers that he hangs out with, replied Setsuna, pointing at a small group of students from a different school talking with Bakugo, before he yells at them and then all of them fall in step behind them. Kendo smiles and the two girls start to tail the group, waiting for their opportunity. 30 Dejarik Arcade and Karaoke 30. Kendo and Setsuna had been tailing the group for about an hour. They had been talking no stop and had stopped at a food stand. The girls watched as Bakugo and his group finally entered a building called Dejarik Arcade and Karaoke. The girls waited a moment before entering after them. The girls paused after seeing the group turn a corner. Setsuna peeked around the corner and saw the group split in two. Bakugo and 4 others moved upstairs to the arcade, and the one who seemed to know him the most entered one of the karaoke booths with a few others. Okay, Anger Issues is heading up to the arcade. The one with the long fingers and a few others are in the booth near the end of the hall, spoke Setsuna, informing Kendo. Okay, I'll follow Bakugo upstairs. I'll leave this group to you. If you see a chance to get what we need, take it. I'll send you a text if they start to head down, spoke Kendo, laying out the plan. You got it, good luck, spoke Setsuna, watching Kendo move toward the stairs that Bakugo went up. Setsuna waited around the corner waiting for the long finger guy or one of the others to exit. When the booth closest to her opened up, Setsuna almost jumped out of her skin. When Pony stepped out, Setsuna felt her heart fill with dread for a moment. Pony closed the door to the booth so Izuku didn't notice Setsuna. Set, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be with Kendo trying to get Bakugo to confess? Asked Pony, confused and slightly panicking as she tried to figure out a way to explain her and Izuku's presence without revealing she was on a date. We hit a snag, but we're working on it. Shouldn't you be distracting Izuku with Camy? Asked Setsuna, clearly suspicious. I asked Izuku to show me around the city, thinking it would keep us far away from you guys. We ended up here. I was just going to grab us some drinks, answered Pony, deciding not to mention that it was only her and Izuku. I was so excited about the date. I forgot Camy and I were supposed to keep Izuku away from Bakugo, thought Pony, freaking out internally as Setsuna's eyes narrowed. She's a terrible liar. She's definitely on a date with him right now. Is Ryuko in there too? Thought Setsuna, seeing right through Pony's attempt at deception. Just grab the drinks quickly and keep him in the booth. I'll text you when the Pomeranian leaves, spoke Setsuna. Pony nodded her head and moved down the hall toward the drink machines. As she glanced back around the corner, she smirked, seeing her target slip out of the booth, a pack of cigarettes in his hand. Setsuna made a slightly disgusted look. Great, he's a smoker. Let's just get ready to get him to spill, thought Setsuna, reminded of her middle school days. Setsuna removed her uniform blazer and tied it around her waist. She removed the tie and stuffed it in a pocket. She then unbuttoned a few of the topmost buttons of her dress shirt to show a little cleavage. She detached a hand and one of her eyes to record the information she needed. She covered the empty socket with her hair and stuffed the arm with the stump into her pocket. She then proceeded to accidentally bump into the dude as he turned the corner. Oops, sorry about that, spoke Setsuna. She saw the boy check her out, giving Setsuna the desire to shower after this was done. No problem, and Kuzco, spoke Kuzco, paying no attention to the horse girl slipping back into a booth. You can call me Toka. You seem a little familiar. Were you talking with Bakugo at the school gate? Asked Setsuna, acting like an airhead. Hook, thought Setsuna. Yes, that was me. Me and Bakugo go way back. We've known each other since we were like 4 years old, bragged Kuzco, not noticing Setsuna trying to not gag from his bad breath. That's so cool. Bakugo's in my class. Oh, maybe you can answer a question I've had. I'd be so grateful, spoke Setsuna, leaning forward, causing Kuzco to glance at her cleavage. Sure, I can tell you whatever you want, beautiful, answered Kuzco, attempting to be smooth. But he clearly had ulterior motives. Line, thought Setsuna. There's this kid from the other class that he has a major hate boner for, and I was wondering why. I think Bakugo calls him Deku or something, spoke Setsuna, tapping her chin with a finger. That useless Deku actually got into UA. No wonder Bakugo's been in a bad mood. That waste of space has been annoying Bakugo and the rest of us since our quirks came in, spoke Kuzco, as if he referring to something foul. Sinker, thought Setsuna, suppressing the desire to smile at how easy this was. Oh, tell me more, spoke Setsuna, batting her eyelashes at him. As the bully was thinking with his other head, started to speak about his history with Izuku. XXX. Meanwhile, in the booth nearby, 30. Thanks for getting the drinks, spoke Izuku as Pony placed his drink in front of him. No problem. Ready to sing, Izu, spoke Pony, taking a seat right next to him as she grabbed the microphones and song controller. I'm not so sure. I don't really sing, I'm probably bad at it, spoke Izuku, nervous as he never really sings anything outside of the shower. That's fine, Izu. It's karaoke. How good you are doesn't matter, as long as you have fun, spoke Pony, handing him one of the mics as she browsed the English song options. Besides, I want to sing a duet with you, added Pony, leaning her head on his shoulder and taking one of his hands in hers. Well, I guess there's no harm in trying since it's just us, spoke Izuku, unable to resist her cute affection. Yeah, whoever gets the lower score has to kiss the one with the higher score, spoke Pony with a playful giggle as she slid herself into his lap. But it's just us. We would end up kissing no matter ... Oh, thought Izuku, realizing his girlfriend's intentions, as a blush broke out on his face. 30 later, outside the booth. 30. During middle school, the teachers joined in or turned a blind eye. There were even rumors that messed with his and Izuku's grades. Haha, served the quirkless little shit right, spoke Kuzco with a laugh. Setsuna's patience was running very thin. She had to use all her self-discipline to not snap and cold-cock this asshole. When he went over how he helped torment one of the kindest people she knew for something he had no control over. Her phone vibrating as a text was received took her focus. Keeping her phone recording, she pulled up the text Kendo sent her. I think Bakugo spotted me. He's on his way down right now. Read the text. Setsuna quickly sent a text to Pony. Do not let Izuku out of the booth. Bakugo is coming, wrote Setsuna, sending the message. But before she could get Kuzco to keep talking, he wrapped his arm around her waist. It took everything for Setsuna to refrain from kneeing him in the balls. So do you know how that Deku got into UA in the first place? I thought for sure he'd fail and end up taking Bakugo's advice to take a swan dive off a ruse, started Kuzco, only for Bakugo to cut him off. Split, bitch. What the hell are you doing here? Digits, the hell was she talking to you about? Yelled Bakugo, stomping over. Setsuna used the opportunity to slip out of Kuzco's grip and back away a few steps. Your classmate here was just curious about our middle school days, replied Kuzco, clearly scared of Bakugo. Bakugo noticed Kendo stepping up behind Setsuna. She is not my classmate, you idiot. She's one of Deku's brain-dead friends. What did you tell her? Demanded Bakugo, angry. But before the terrified Kuzco could reply, Setsuna spoke up. Enough to know you're just a bully who tormented those you think are lesser just because you have a strong quirk. That's how villains act, not heroes, spoke Setsuna, glaring at the explosive boy, Kendo joining in as well. TCH, like I care if you know. It doesn't mean shit. You won't stop me from being a pro hero. I will be the strongest. I will be the richest. I will be more famous than All Might. I will be the #1 hero and I'll beat up anyone I damn well please like the villains they are. I'll show that Deku and the rest of you bitches that you are all fucking below me," yelled Bakugo, practically growling like a wild animal. Setsuna just narrowed her eyes at him before she just turned around and started walking away. "Come on, Kendo, we're done here," spoke Setsuna as she passed Kendo. Kendo was about to follow when she paused and turned to Bakugo. "Even if you become the #1, which I doubt you ever will, you will never amount to even half the hero Izuku is right now," stated Kendo with the conviction and certainty that what she was saying was 100% true. "You and those other delusion extras can side with shitty Deku. I'll take enjoyment when reality bitch slaps you," spoke Bakugo with a smug look. "We'll see who gets a reality check in the end," stated Kendo, more to herself than the angry blonde yelling about going home. She turned and went to catch up with Setsuna. "Please tell me you got all that," asked Kendo, hoping they got what they needed. "Oh, I got all that and more," replied Setsuna as her eye and hand reconnected to the rest of her. She broke out into a wide grin as she waved her phone back and forth. "But for now I gotta head back to the dorms and wash the sleazeball off me. I'll send you and the rest of the girls copies when I get back," joked Setsuna as she and Kendo went their separate ways. The lizard girl sent a text to Pony letting her know that it was safe to leave with Bakugo leaving. Pony, however, would not read the message till 30 minutes later as she was too busy teaching her boyfriend how to French kiss properly. 30 Parents' Days at UA Fried XXX. And Midoriya was a nervous person by nature, a trait she had unintentionally passed on to her son. So it wouldn't be a surprise to those who know her that she was currently standing outside of Class 1B trying to build up the nerve to enter. Even with her losing a little weight thanks to Mitsuki dragging her out of her now empty apartment to the gym, the green-haired mother was still lacking confidence. She was also extra nervous due to the principal's request to speak with her privately after Parents' Day was over. This would be so much easier if Mitsuki was here, thought Inko, fussing over her skirt and sweater. But she entered the room despite her nerves. All the desks had been moved and were stacked in the back of the room. The parents of all of her baby's classmates were getting acquainted with each other, but none of the children seemed to be present. A large silver-haired man in a hero costume with some bandages approached her. She recognized him from her son's description. "Hello, ma'am. I am the pro hero Vlad King, and I am Class 1B's homeroom," spoke Vlad, politely introducing himself. "It's nice to meet you. I am Inko Midoriya. Thank you very much for taking care of my little Izuku," replied Inko. She noticed how Vlad seemed to smile widely at the mention of her son. The mention of Izuku had caused several of the parents in the room to perk up. "Your boy is a very hardworking and driven young man. He has the makings of a great hero. There is no need to thank me. I'm proud to have him as my student," spoke Vlad genuinely. "Thanks. Speaking of, where are the children?" asked Inko. "They are currently changing into their hero costumes and will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, feel free to talk with the other parents," answered Vlad politely, before he walked back over to a man covered in blue fur who was wearing a suit and glasses. No sooner had Vlad left when a couple moved to greet here. The man had pale gray hair, a matching goatee, and was wearing a very nice suit. While the woman was tall and lanky with long straight black hair that covered one of her eyes, she was wearing a dress. "Hello, Ms. Midoriya, correct? I am Dr. Stephen Yanagi, and this is my wife, Dr. Emily Yanagi. It is nice to meet you," spoke Stephen, introducing himself and his wife. "Oh, you must be Ryaiko's parents. She was a joy to talk to when we met," spoke Inko, praising the silver-haired girl. "Thank you. We have put forth our utmost effort in instructing our daughter to value manners. I am quite curious about your son, as our daughter speaks quite highly of him," spoke Emily, a small smile on her lips. After she finished talking with the Yanagas, Inko took the initiative to greet another pair of parents. The man had broad shoulders and was wrapped in muscles. He had thick honey brown bread and wore a flannel shirt and jeans, and his thumbs were green. The woman at his side was much shorter than him. She had a mutant-type quirk that made her appear like a mushroom woman. She had a large red mushroom cap with white spots on her head. "Hello, I'm Inko Midoriya," spoke Inko. The two parents seemed to recognize her name. "Why, hello, I'm Hina Komori, and this big guy is my husband, Paul. Our daughter has told us a lot about your boy," introduced Hina with a smile. "Komori, as in Komori Greenhouse?" questioned Inko, recalling the place where Mitsuki always gets her flowers, fresh fruit, and tea leaves. "The very same. Feel free to drop by. You'll get the family and friend discount," spoke Hina, offering Inko a business card. Inko was about to refuse, or at least question why. "Please accept. It's the least we can do since your boy saved our little mushroom princesses from those villains," spoke Paul in a kind tone. "Oh, thank you. I will be sure to drop by. I have always wanted to try your specialty teas," spoke Inko, who didn't have the heart to politely refuse the offer. After leaving the Commerce, Inko had a wonderful conversion with Father Forville, the adopted father of Shiozaki, and Dr. Henry McCoy, Jirota's guardian. But when she finished speaking with the well-mannered men, she noticed an orange-haired woman and a seaweed green-haired lizard woman having a tense conversation. With the green-haired woman sporting an "I know something you don't" smile, Inko could have sworn she saw the images of a tiger and dragon appear behind the two women. Both of them suddenly turned to look at her, and Inko suddenly felt like a rabbit in the sights of two predators. They both tried approaching her at the same time, but the orange-haired one reaching her first. Thankfully for Inko, Hilda Kendo wasn't as intimidating as she first appeared, and Inko found herself enjoying the women's company. Her husband Isshin Kendo didn't seem like much of a talker though. "Inko, you and Izuku should come over for dinner," spoke Hilda with a smile. "That sounds lovely. When would be a good time for you?" questioned Inko, happy to accept the dinner offer. "How about the set after the festival?" proposed Hilda, sending a smirk to the green-haired lizard women on the other side of the room. "That works for me. I'll be sure to let Izuku know," spoke Inko with a kind smile. "I'll send the details through my daughter," spoke Hilda before she and her husband walked away. "Why did you invite them to dinner? You didn't offer it to any of the other parents?" questioned Isshin. "Simple. I'm getting to know our future in-law," replied Hilda in a deadpan tone. Before her husband could make a fuss, she gave him a peck on the cheek and spoke. "Oh, don't make that face. It ruins your handsome face. I was only teasing you a bit," spoke Hilda, cutting off her husband. "I just don't understand why you think Itsuka likes this boy," spoke Isshin with a sigh. "Just chalk it up to mother's intuition for now. Next time they're together, take the time to watch them interact and you'll see. Now, come on, we only have a few more people to meet," spoke Hilda, taking her husband's hand and leading to the next person. She could hear him mutter his dislike for small talk. Inko had a good discussion with Officer Tetsutsu about his job as a member of the Saitama SWAT team and his career as a beat cop before that, but halfway through the store about how he met his late wife. The door to the class opened and the students walked in. "Oh, Izuku, you look so cool in your costume. You too, Pony? And I love the cat theme, Camy," spoke Inko, gushing at how dashing her son was and complimenting both of the American girls' hero costumes looked. "Thanks, Mum," spoke Izuku, rubbing the back of his head. "Thank you," spoke Pony with a smile, happy Inko likes her costume. "Thanks, Ma'am Midoriya, good to know my look is lit," commented Camy, doing a quick cat pose. That was when Inko noticed the lizard woman from earlier approached her with Setsuna in her hero costume. The woman was dressed in a pantsuit with a hole in the back to accommodate her green lizard tail. "Hello, you must be Mrs. Midoriya. I'm Mako Takage. It's a pleasure to meet you. My daughter seems to be a big fan of your work," spoke Mako at a fast pace. "What?" spoke Inko and Izuku, confused as to what Mako meant. Pony and Camy also drawing blanks. Setsuna covered her face to hide her blush. "Setsuna has told great things about your boy. I was excited to meet him." But she failed to mention how cute he was in his costume, especially with those bunny ears, spoke Mako, before Inko could question her about what her earlier comment meant. "Why, thank you. But you should have seen him when he was little and wore his All Might onesie," spoke Inko, gushing with pride as she went for her phone. "Mom," spoke Izuku in embarrassment as his mother pulled out her phone to show the pictures. Several other parents gathered to see. Izuku's plea landed on deaf ears as Setsuna and a few of his other classmates giggled and chuckled at his expense. "Awa, that's adorable. Oh, here's Setsuna. When she was around that age, she was such a fan of Godzilla," replied Mako, pulling up a picture of Setsuna in a little onesie modeled after the kaiju hero as she stomped around a little city made of blocks. "Mom," called out Setsuna, no longer giggling as she was now embarrassed. "That's nothing. Look at my little princess. She said she wanted to find Mario," spoke Paul, showing the parents a photo of a little Kanoko in a Princess Peach outfit. "Dad," yelled Kanoko, trying to reach for the phone. But she was not tall enough to even get close. One by one, all of the present parents showed off pictures, and in Itsuka's case, a video from when they were little. Only Pony, Camy, Rin, Shihai, Kaibara, and Subiraba were spared embarrassment. None of their parents were present. "May I have your attention, please?" started Vlad, gaining the attention of the students and parents, which had the added benefit of stopping the parents from embarrassing their children further. "Thank you. I wanted to go over the itinerary for today. We will begin by demonstrating what your kids have learned about hero work so far. We'll start with the most important part of the job, rescuing people. We have a scenario already prepared. If any of you want to join in and play the civilian role, you're more than free to," informed Vlad. The parents all seemed excited at starting the day with the hero work portion of the school. "That sounds lovely. It reminds me of when Izuku would rescue me from the blanket villain when he was little," commented Inko, interpreting Vlad. "Mom," spoke Izuku, thoroughly embarrassed as he covered his face with his hands. "Chuckle after that. The students will do a combat demonstration against villain bots or will spar with each other. After that, the students will change out of their costumes, then we'll break for lunch. The principal will then give you a tour of the campus and answer any questions you may have. Then you're all free to go," finished Vlad. "I am here to help oversee the rescue and combat exercises," yelled All Might as he entered in his hero costume. His arrival excited the parents further. It was rare to get to meet the #1 hero in person. "It is a pleasure to meet the parents of my students. Please follow me to the training grounds," spoke All Might as he and Vlad started to lead the group to the prepared training grounds. Some of the parents stuck close to All Might, asking the symbol of peace questions about his career. Izuku, who was walking with his group of friends, noticed that Pony looked a little off. "Pony, are you okay? You seem a little down," asked Izuku. "It's not much. I'm just a little sad that my family wasn't able to make it. They should be here next week, and will stay till after the festival is over," explained Pony. "I'm sure they would have come earlier if they could, but they'll still get to cheer you on in person during the festival, and you can still show them around after the festival," spoke Izuku, trying to cheer her up. "We can even do rescue exercises for your folks if you want." Izuku and I can request the use of one of the training grounds, proposed Kendo, placing a hand on the horse girl's shoulder. I am willing to assist Lady Pony in this task, spoke Jirota, the first one to jump to help. I can assist as well, added Ibara, happy to help her friend. Same, it's manly to help your friends, added Tetsu. Tetsu raised one of his fists. Thanks, guys, spoke Pony, touched at her friend's actions. 30 locker rooms after the rescue and combat demonstrations. 30. Izuku was thankful the demonstrations were completed without issue. His mom only fainted once during the entire event, and luckily All Might was able to catch her before she hit the ground. Izuku was thankful she didn't faint again when she came to in his mentor's arms. I don't know about you guys, but I worked up an appetite, spoke Juzo as he stuffed his hero costume in his suitcase. I am also quite famished, commented Jirota, adjusting his tie. Izuku's stomach growled as he finished placing his shoes on. Yeah, I could definitely eat something right now, spoke Izuku, agreeing with the sentiment that was floating around the locker room. But when he and the other boys started to filter out of the locker room, Vlad was waiting for them in the hall, a pair of small robots holding folders on either side of him. Izuku had a good idea as to what this was about. The blood hero asked his students to wait a moment as they waited for the girls and any stragglers to exit. Only when the whole class had gathered did Vlad King speak. I'll make this quick. Midoriya was given an assignment by Nezu to analyze all the members of the first-year hero course. Each of you has a folder containing his analysis and advice about your quirks, fighting style, and possible support gear. This is completely optional and it is up to you whether to accept it or not. But you have to decide right now. Do not discuss with each other or attempt to convince your classmates. Simply grab the folder or leave and make your way to the cafe, explained Vlad, gesturing to the folders as he spoke. Seems the vice principal wanted to keep them influencing each other's decisions to a minimum. Thought Vlad he expected for his students to pause and consider the offer. But instead, Camy walked up and grabbed it without hesitation, with Pony, Yanagi, Kendo, and Komori right behind her. Tetsu, Ibara, and Tsubiraba each grabbed their own folders. After some thinking, Setsuna grabbed her folder and Bondo was quick to follow. Awase, Kaibara, Tagaru, Jirota, Juzo, Manga, Rin, Kodai, and Shihai all simply left for the cafeteria without the folders, their choice made. Some after much thought and others with a quick decision. Once Izuku's friends had made their choices, they left as a group to the cafeteria. Izuku was glad that some of his classmates took the folders. After he and Pony returned from their date, he had spent the remainder of his time going over the footage and putting in the hard work to thoroughly analyze all of his fellow students. As he and his friends made their way to the cafeteria, he watched as the students of class walked towards them as they made their way toward the locker rooms. After spending several hours analyzing them yesterday, Izuku had a pretty good grasp of their names and faces. The green-haired boy took note of which members of class had taken their folders. Ashido, the acid-wielding girl, had already opened her folder and seemed to be giving its contents once over with the set of floating clothes that marked Hagakura's presence, making comments as she read over her own analysis. Kirishima, who was beside them, also carried his folder in hand, but it was not opened. The rest of their group seemed to have chosen otherwise. Asui, Ida both carried a folder, and they scolded Monoma for being rude as he made comments at Class B as they passed. Denki was walking beside Gyro and Yaoyorozu, all of them with a folder in hand. Takoyami also carried a folder. His sentient quirk seemed to be bugging him to read it immediately. Izuku was happy that members of class accepted the folders. He had honestly expected them to all refuse, even if they only took them to be polite and didn't plan on actually reading the contents. He was still happy. Izuku was stunned when he spotted Bakugo also carrying a folder as he walked all alone. But the moment he spotted Izuku and his friends, the blonde gained a cruel smile and, in full view of Izuku and his friends, ripped the folder and its contents into pieces before dumping it in a nearby trash can. The explosive teen commented that it was where it belonged. Izuku was surprised that he didn't really care about his former friend's actions. The fact that Bakugo was alone while Izuku was surrounded by his friends, who were all currently glaring at the blonde, definitely had something to do with it. Remember what Hound Dog Sensei said. This isn't like Aldera. I'm not alone anymore, thought Izuku as he glanced at his girlfriends who had taken position beside him. Come on guys, let's go eat. I hope Luncrush made katsudon, spoke Izuku to his friends, ignoring Bakugo as he walked past his friends surrounding him, leaving a fuming Bakugo in their wake. 30 Nezu's office after class XX. Andy had suffered a lot when he was little more than a lab rat. He and his brother both had scars, both physical and psychological, from that time. Nezu was well known to the hero community as a bit of a sadist due to his love of messing with humans. Andy was often assumed to be the same due to his use of embarrassing blackmail. He didn't normally take joy in the misfortune of others. However, he couldn't deny that watching the wide-eyed #1 hero be dragged into the hands of an overprotective mother by his tie was quite amusing. All Might had brought the two members of the Midoriya family to Nezu's office after Parents' Day had finished. Initially, Andy thought she was the non-confrontational, quiet type, slow to anger if at all, with a dash of the same anxiety and shyness her son possessed. She had even squeaked in shock and fuss over him. when All Might had revealed his more skeletal form to her. After Izuku had calmed her down, she listened attentively to All Might as he explained one for all, his injury, his choosing of Midoriya as the successor of the Sacred Torch. And then he explained to both Midoriyas about All for One, the history he had with the symbol of peace and the previous wielders. When All Might had finished his explanation, both Midoriyas had taken a moment to process, then stood up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes as she lifted a hand and used her quirk, which led to the current events of All Might being shaken back and forth by a woman almost 60 centimeters shorter than him. Seems I forgot to account for the mother bear factor, thought Andy, taking a sip of tea and wisely staying out of the mother's way. Andy did notice a blush on All Might's face and made a mental note to tease him about it later. You offered him your quirk without mentioning that there's a villain from the dawn of quirks that has killed almost all the past wielders. Not to mention you not planning any time for him to practice with the quirk before the exam. What would you have done if he didn't get it? What if he blew off his arm because the only instructions you gave him was to clench his butt and yell? Yelled Inko as she continued to shake the symbol of peace as if it would shake. In my defense, I thought I killed All for One years ago, spoke All Might, not even trying to defend the other points she brought up. Mom, calm down, and please stop shaking All Might, spoke Izuku as he eventually got his mother to release All Might. Okay, I'm calm. Sorry, All Might, spoke Inko, bowing in apology. It is understandable. This is a stressful topic, replied All Might as he sat back down and fixed his tie. A topic we should get back to, commented Gran Torino. Right, we believe it is only a matter of time before AFO realizes Izuku is my successor. When he sees young Izuku use OFA during the festival, he'll recognize the quirk for what it is, spoke All Might, explaining the situation. Well, why don't you just pull him from the festival? I get it's important, but the main benefit is him getting an internship. But can't he just intern under one of the teachers or Gran Torino or even you, All Might? Spoke Inko, preferring her son be kept a secret from the ancient villain until All Might could finish the job or until he was strong enough to fight back properly. That could have been an option if we knew that Izuku was not on AFO's radar, or if we had known AFO was still out there beforehand. We could have committed to keeping Izuku hidden from the start. Sadly, if we pull him from the festival now, AFO will deduce something is amiss, which will only make him look into your son more earnestly. We have reason to believe that he may already be looking into young Izuku, due to requests for his personnel and medical records. I'm afraid attempting to hide your son now would only delay AFO discovering him at best, spoke Andy, wishing they could keep the boy hidden until he was ready. With that in mind, AFO will not hesitate to use you to get to Izuku. So we came up with some countermeasures, the first of which would be to place you under UAS protection, spoke Nezu, his beady all black eyes meeting her green ones. What do you need me to do? Asked Inko, more than willing to cooperate. Simple, a position for an administrative assistant will be opening up. Officially, Andy and I need an assistant to help with our plans on expanding the size of the hero course and increasing the intake of international students. In reality, it's an excuse to make you part of the staff, allowing you to live in the staff housing here on campus. Between the UA security system and the pro heroes that live in the same complex, you should be quite safe, spoke Nezu, explains the plan. I'll take the job, and I'll happily move into the staff housing immediately, spoke Inko, agreeing to the move without hesitation. Excellent. I'll arrange for a pro hero to watch over you until you are moved in, spoke Andy, already thinking of which pro he could trust with the job. No need to call in anyone. I'll do it. We can rearrange Izuku's training schedule, so I'm later in the day, spoke Gran Torino, volunteering for the task. Thank you, Mr. Torino. I appreciate it. But what about Izuku? Won't AFO come for him the moment he knows? Asked Inko. It would currently be very difficult for AFO to go after Izuku. Since he spends the majority of his time here on campus and stays in the dorms, he is under a decent amount of protection already. I plan to also move into the staff house to dissuade AFO. I also plan to introduce my small form as a teaching aid to allow me to conserve my time for when it is needed. Added All Might, put Inko and Izuku more at ease. All Might's time may be shortening, but he was still a force to be reckoned with. You'll have to be vigilant whenever you leave campus, no matter the reason. If you plan to go out, never do so alone. Go in a group if you can, or with a teacher. I know that this is restrictive, but it is for your safety, and once AFO is dealt with, we can relax them. Okay, spoke Andy, looking at Izuku. Yes sir, I understand. I can live with that, spoke Izuku, understanding the logic. Besides, I don't really have much reason to leave campus in the first place. And even then I wouldn't be alone. Though Izuku, he knew he'd only really leave campus for dates or to hang out with his classmates. As for internships and possible work study, you'll already be under the watch of a pro hero. We'll simply request that the hero comes to pick you up and return you to the school. If that is not possible, I or one of the other staff will drive you, informed All Might. And Ko was very happy to see that they had plans to keep her little Izuku safe. There is one more thing we plan to enact. If it goes well, then we'll make so AFO will have a significantly harder time targeting Izuku, but there are some drawbacks. All Might, since it is ultimately your idea, would you please explain? Spoke Nezu. The symbol of peace knew it was a setup. The principal knew that his idea would get a strong reaction out of the Midoriyas. Well, began All Might, prepared for what's next. 30. To be revealed in another chapter via flashback ladder. 40. Inko couldn't believe it. Initially, she wanted to argue and say it was a bad idea, that something else should be tried. But Izuku agreed to it and she knew that he wouldn't budge on it. All Might had made some decent points. She eventually accepted, after admitting to herself that in the end, it would happen no matter her feelings. All right, I agree, spoke Inko after she had been silent for almost 20 minutes. Thanks, Mom, spoke Izuku hugging his mom. You're welcome, sweetie, responded Inko squeezing her boy. With that decision made, I just wanted to bring up one more thing, spoke All Might, breaking up the small family's moment. Young Midoriya, I believe it would be best if you kept that relationship of yours a secret at least until AFO is defeated. You wouldn't want him discovering, spoke All Might before his pupil cut him off. What? How do you know about that? Asked Izuku in a panic, and a blush exploded onto his face. This conversion was a bit of a surprise to the other adults in the room. You let it slip when you called me for date advice the other day, informed All Might, leaving the teen cursing himself for the slip. Wait, my baby has a girlfriend. Why didn't you tell me? Is it one of the girls from your class, isn't it? Is it that nice kendo girl? Spoke Inko, practically interrogating her son. If Izuku wasn't embarrassed before, he certainly was now. What? No, started Izuku, but his mother in her excitement cut him off. Oh, then is it Pony? You two seem to be close. No, it's that nice Yanagi girl, isn't it? That would explain why she wanted me to teach her some of my recipes tomorrow. She must want to cook your favorites. My baby boy is growing up, yelled Inko. Tears of joy gathered in her eyes as she pulled him into a crushing hug. Izuku decided to just tell her. Mom, listen. Yes, I am dating Ryuko, but I'm also dating Pony. They're sharing me, spoke Izuku, breaking the hug, but grabbing his mother's shoulders so she would look at him. Inko's eyes widened at his words, and she did exactly what Izuku expected. Inko fainted, muttering something that sounded like grandbabies as her body went limp, held up by her son's arms. The kid has got some luck, doesn't he? Stated Andy, with a chuckle. From what I hear, you're one to talk, commented Gran Torino offhandedly, watching as All Might helped Izuku lay his mother down on the couch she was seated on. What? How did you? Nezu, started Andy, before turning to glare at his brother, who wasn't even trying to hide his amusement. Izuku, I will not tell you to shun romance, as that would be stupid given your hormones and the unhealthy consequences caused by a lack of affection. I do, however, believe we should talk about possible dangers and risks this might pose to all involved, spoke Nezu seriously, causing the blushing teen to gulp. 37 Midoriya apartment, midday. 30. Inko was happy as she prepared to teach one of her son's girlfriends her recipe. The single mother hummed happily as she moved about the kitchen. Gran Torino sat on the couch watching the news. A large stack of moving boxes sat in the corner. Inko planned to start packing the lighter objects after she was done with Yanagi. Then Gran would bring her to UA where she'd sleep, and then return tomorrow with the vice principal to get the heavy stuff. She knew that Izuku should be in the middle of his training right about now. Cut to Izuku fighting a small army of ballistic gel and crash test dummies covered in sweat and bits of ballistic gel along with fake blood. She hoped he was doing well. Ringed. Oh, that must be Yanagi. She's right on time, spoke Inko, glancing at a clock on the wall. Hold on a moment, spoke Gran Torino, causing Inko to pause. The veteran checked his phone, which connected to a small camera he'd placed above the door when they had arrived. It appears you have extra guests, more of Izuku's classmates. You can get the door. I have a feeling I ain't going to taste anything today, spoke Gran Torino, muttering out the last part. Inko opened the door to find Yanagi, Pony, Camy, Kendo, and Setsuna on her doorstep. Hello, we're sorry for intruding unannounced. Can we please come in? Asked Kendo, speaking on behalf of the group. That's quite all right, please come in, spoke Inko, stepping aside so the girls could enter. Is there a reason you all decided to join us? If it's to join in our cooking session, you should have told me so I could prepare more stuff, spoke Inko as the girls entered the conjoined kitchen living room. No, we wanted to, started Kendo, only to pause as she and the other girls noticed the old man standing in the living room dressed in a hero costume. Why, hello there. Who are you? Asked Gran Torino, leaning more heavily on his cane as he pretended to shake like a leaf. We are Izuku's classmates from UA, explained Kendo politely. Torino nodded along like he understood what they said. Who's Izuku? Asked Gran Torino, acting like he was genuinely confused. Man, I love this cynical old Yoda act. It's always funny, thought Gran Torino, keeping the charade going. He's a classmate. Your grandson, right? Spoke Setsuna, guessing that the old-timer was Izuku's grandpa. The old man had to stop himself from breaking character at that comment, so he ended up staring at them for a few moments before speaking again. Why, hello there. Who are you? Spoke Gran Torino, glad that Inko hadn't called him out. Fam, I think Grandpops isn't all there, commented Camy quietly, a little sad for the old time. But did Izuku ever mention living with his grandpa? Please don't mind him. So you were saying, spoke Inko, feeling that Torino has had enough fun. Yes, we wanted to talk to you about Izuku, spoke Kendo. Izuku, what about him? Asked Inko, not sure where this was going. We're positive he was bullied in middle school and even earlier than that, spoke Setsuna, dropping the news. I knew it, thought Inko. She always suspected there was something wrong. There were times when her baby came home walking funny or with his uniform torn or dirty. She remembered how first aid kits were missing bandages and supplies. She tried to talk to him, but he always explained it away as him getting hurt running around looking for hero fights. She had tried to get him to open up, but the more questions she asked, the more the less he talked. She had tried talking to the school directly, but they chalked it up to horseplay with friends. She knew better, but with no proof and his son not talking, the school dismissed her concerns. She had told her concerns to Mitsuki. Her oldest friends had promised to get her son to keep an eye on Izuku and watch over him. After that, some things seemed to stop. Yeah, and what's worse is Bakugo is in the hero course, commented Pony. Inko's train of thought derailed at that comment. Yeah, the angry Pomeranian is such a jerk, added Camy. What do you mean? Asked Inko in a serious tone, not wanting to believe it. Bakugo is the one who has been bullying Izuku for a long time, spoke Setsuna seriously. Here, I think you should watch this, spoke Kendo, passing her phone with the video already pulled up. That's one of the boys Bakugo and Izuku used to be friends with when they were younger, thought Inko, recognizing the boy. The girls waited while Inko watched the video. When she finished, a malevolent aura was wafting off the matriarch. The mother felt not just anger but betrayal that her godson was the source of her baby boy's torment. If you girls would excuse me for a moment, spoke Inko, her tone cold enough to freeze hell over as she made her way to the house phone. Mitsuki, we need to talk about your son. Please meet me at UA right now, spoke Inko into the phone, not even waiting for a reply as she hung up and dialed a different number. Principal Nezu, I am heading back to UA. May we have a meeting when I return? We need to speak about Bakugo. Once again, she didn't wait for a reply as she hung up and walked back over to the girls. We are sorry for ruining your day, spoke Pony. We couldn't just stand by without doing something, commented Kendo. We felt it necessary to inform you of the situation after we had obtained suitable evidence, added Yanagi. Inko shook her head. No, it's okay, I appreciate you girls telling me. Thank you so much for looking out for my son, spoke Inko sincerely. You're welcome, Midoriya. Izuku wouldn't hesitate to have our back. We gotta return the favor, spoke Camy, sincerity in her tone. I am sorry for arranging this under false pretenses, but I do wish to conduct this activity with you at a more opportune time. I shall also forward the record Setsuna was able to obtain, spoke Yanagi, feeling a bit bad for her deception. It's okay, Yanagi. We can find some time for it later. Right now I want to put this all away and head to UA, spoke Inko. We can help you put all this stuff away and go with you. We have to return to campus anyway, offered Setsuna, the other girl more than willing to help. No thank you. You girls can go ahead. I'd like some time to think, spoke Inko, turning down the girl's offer. Taking the hint, the girls started to excuse themselves as they moved to the entrance to grab their shoes and leave. Yanagi and Pony paused when they felt something pulling on their clothes. They turned around and Inko gave them the best smile she could muster at the moment before she pulled the girls into a brief hug. Thank you too for dating my little Izuku, stared Inko as she broke the hug. Her words caused Pony's and Yanaga's eyes to widen in surprise. Not how I wanted this to go, but we can talk some other time. You should catch up with your friends, spoke Inko. Both girls said farewell and moved to catch up with the other girls. Inko started putting away all the ingredients she had ready. Gran Torino had enough wisdom not to say anything. The old man simply turned the TV off and helped Inko put away her ingredients. After everything was set, the pair left for UA, not a word spoken between them.